This is a scenario I considered doing my own take on before, as I even had written a script for it before, but I never ended up recording it, and I was eventually recommended to do this scenario in a comment on a video of mine, so I decided to give it another shot. When I looked back at my earlier version of this script, I wasn't happy with it, so I decided to start from scratch. As some brief notes before getting into this scenario, there are two things I wanted to discuss for my version of this scenario. The first thing is that usually when I see this scenario done, it is done in a way to have Goku be evil. I even considered that to be the way he was evil in my original series about an evil Goku, but I changed that. Looking back on it now, I don't think Goku not hitting his head would make him evil. We have seen time and time again in Dragon Ball that it isn't your innate nature that determines the type of person you will be. The people you surrounded yourself with have just as much of an impact on you as your innate personality. Take Oolong, for example, as he was terrorizing Aru village and kidnapping girls until he came under the influence of Goku. Yamcha and Puar are another good example, as they were desert bandits before they began to interact with Goku. Tien and Shotsu are yet another example of this, as they were in a rival martial arts school that focused on violence before interacting with the heroes. Even the reincarnation of the Demon King Piccolo turned over a new leaf because of the heroes' influence. The ruthless Saiyan Prince eventually became one of the greatest heroes of Earth from spending time around good people. Lastly, the creature Majin Buu, who at one point only went around causing destruction, became an ally of the heroes. My point is that their innate nature doesn't always matter. Having the right company and guidance can set someone on the path of good. As for the second thing I wanted to discuss, it's about a potential retcon that might have happened even if it wasn't explicitly stated to have been retconned. Based on the information we were given in the original Dragon Ball series, it was said that Goku was sent to take over the Earth. However, based on the information given in the Dragon Ball Minus manga and the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, Goku being sent to take over the Earth seems to have been retconned. After all, nothing in those mention that he was sent to Earth to conquer it. He was just sent there because Bardock was suspicious about Frieza's plans after he called every Saiyan back to planet Vegeta. So this doesn't change anything about Goku's personality. He would still be aggressive because of his Saiyan nature making him inclined to fight. What does change, however, is the notion that he would have been evil regardless, since we now know that he wasn't sent over to the Earth to conquer it. Also, from what we do know about him, he didn't really have time to be raised in the Saiyan nature of combat and conquering planets. He was basically in an incubation pod until they took him out and sent him to Earth. So, his personality would still likely have been him being very aggressive and ill-tempered, since that's just his Saiyan nature, but he wouldn't be out to kill everyone on Earth. Regardless, when he lands on the planet, he is still found by Gohan. Based on Gohan's comments in Dragon Ball Minus, Goku tried to fight him when he saw him. He would still do that here, but Gohan would easily be able to prevail in this fight. After that, he takes him to his house and gives him some food. Gohan quickly notices Goku's lack of manners, as he stands on the table while eating, but he also notices how he is placated by food. So here is also where I'm going to make a slight change in this timeline, so that Goku doesn't hit his head later. During their earlier fight, I'm going to make it so that Gohan picked up on Goku's innate enjoyment of fighting. Since Goku is violent and reckless, this gives him the idea to start training the young boy earlier to try and help him calm down. After all, he thinks learning martial arts could be a good way for the boy to learn some self-restraint. While at first Goku still doesn't obey Gohan, his starting to train Goku earlier would have an effect on him earlier. He would be more disciplined than he usually is, so he doesn't fall into a ravine and hit his head. Normally this would also send Goku into a coma, but since that doesn't happen here, he has more time to train with Gohan. Something to mention as well is that Goku might remember his parents. Normally hitting his head caused him to forget these things until many years later during the Granola saga. I doubt he'd remember anything else, though, so his parents would be the only thing he remembers. This would mean he continues to be called Goku, so I don't think he would remember the name Kakarot. Even with him remembering his parents, Gohan likely still becomes the paternal figure to him. After all, he's the only person involved in raising him and has been the only person to actually raise him, since when he was on planet Vegeta, he was mostly in the incubation pod. So, over time, Goku would likely still start to call Gohan Grandpa. Anyway, in addition to him training Goku in martial arts, he would also begin to teach him some things. Since they live at a very remote place like Mount Palzu, he would teach Goku about things like the city and people, as they have no communications with other people. One night, Goku would end up looking at the full moon and turn into a great ape. However, since this is early on in his training and he isn't that strong yet, Grandpa Gohan would be able to handle him in this form. The next day, Grandpa Gohan would warn the young boy to never look at the full moon. Normally, Goku would eventually end up looking at the moon a second time, which when he turned into a great ape that time, he unknowingly killed Grandpa Gohan. I don't think that would happen this time, however, since Grandpa Gohan started training him earlier in this timeline. He would be more disciplined by the time he receives the warning about the great ape, so he would be more likely to heed his grandfather's warning and not look at the full moon. Thus, by extension, Grandpa Gohan isn't killed and gets to continue training his grandson. Of course, this would mean that by the time Dragon Ball usually begins, Goku would be stronger than usual, though there might be changes in the timeline before that as well. While Grandpa Gohan would be a good martial arts teacher, I don't see him teaching Goku everything he learned when he was in the turtle school school, such as the Kamehameha. He would mainly just teach Goku the basics of martial arts and some basic techniques, such as the rock, scissors, and paper technique. Throughout his time of training and living with Grandpa Gohan, his personality changes as well. Since he is under the influence of Grandpa Gohan for longer this time, he becomes well-mannered and develops a strong sense of morals. I would also see him becoming an honorable person, but he would still keep his Saiyan desire for fighting. While he is stronger than usual, I don't think it would develop into arrogance or cockiness like what happened with Vegeta. He is still weaker than his grandfather. The main change in his personality is that he isn't the innocent and happy-go-lucky child we normally know, though he still would have been raised to be kind and compassionate by Grandpa Gohan. He would also be respectful to others because of him being well-mannered, and by extension, I think he would also be more mature since he got to spend more time with someone like Grandpa Gohan. Regardless, once his basic training and studies with Grandpa Gohan is complete, it's hard to tell what he could do next. He still has a strong drive for fighting, which with Grandpa Gohan's guidance, he would have directed this drive for fighting towards his training. But since he learned almost everything that he could from Grandpa Gohan, he would get restless sitting at home. When Grandpa Gohan notices this, I think he would come up with an idea. He would get the idea to suggest to Goku for him to go out and train with someone else. Now, there are two options he would probably think of for Goku to train with, the Ox King or Master Roshi. While both are good options, I think he would suggest to go train with the Ox King. Of course, he would have noticed Goku isn't a typical child in terms of his abilities. However, he would likely think it would be good for Goku to get a little more experience and training under his belt before seeking out Master Roshi to train with him. So, I believe he would recommend Goku to go and see the Ox King to train with him first. Even though both Grandpa Gohan and the Ox King trained under Master Roshi, they both would have their own variations of the fighting style and could have their own things to teach Goku. Regardless, for him to go train with the Ox King, Grandpa Gohan would likely tell him the way there and draw him a map. After all, Goku doesn't have the flying Nimbus at this point, so he would have to walk there. By the time he arrives, he would see that the mountain is on fire, which comes as a shock to him. Since Grandpa Gohan lived in seclusion, it isn't likely that he would have known that Pleasant Mountain became Mount Frypan. When the Ox King finds Goku, he would still try to attack him for being an intruder. However, when he sees the power pole on Goku's back, he would ask him about it, since the last time he saw it, his master gave it to Gohan. Their interaction would go roughly the same at first, but Goku would eventually mention that he was there to train with him. However, the Ox King would likely say that this place is in no state to train at, since it is on fire, as he's probably noticed. So, as a condition to train with him, he would likely ask him to go find his old teacher Master Roshi since he would have the Bancho fan. As we saw in the original manga, however, the Ox King didn't know where Master Roshi currently is. He'd likely have to backtrack to Grandpa Gohan's house to find where Master Roshi lives. After explaining everything to him, Grandpa Gohan would tell him the way to Master Roshi's island. Since the way he is going likely wouldn't be the exact way he and Bulma went, he likely doesn't run into the turtle. Normally, to go with Goku, Master Roshi wanted him to get Bulma to show him her chest. Obviously, since Goku has not met Bulma yet, that couldn't happen. Roshi would likely just agree to help Goku with this as a favor to both the Ox King and to Grandpa Gohan. At the time, Roshi would still have believed he could use the flying Nimbus, so he tries calling for it. When he tries to use it, he falls straight through the cloud. While Roshi is trying to think about what to do now, Goku would try jumping onto the flying Nimbus out of curiosity. Roshi might decide to give the cloud to Goku since he can't ride it, so it'd just be useless for it to be sitting around. As for what Roshi will do, he calls for baby Gamera so that he can ride him to Mount Frypan. Also, Roshi would still try to find the Bancho fan, but since he couldn't find it, he came up with another plan to put out the flames. Things go generally the same after they arrive, with Master Roshi using the Kamehameha to extinguish the flames, though he also accidentally destroys the Ox King's castle as well. As usual, Goku ends up mimicking the Kamehameha, and even though it was nowhere near as good as Master Roshi's, this impresses the Turtle Hermit, so he offers for Goku to come train with him after he finishes training with the Ox King. With Goku's drive for training being even more prevalent in this timeline, there isn't any reason for him to turn down this offer, so he agrees. Now, after Roshi bids farewell to them and takes off on baby Gamera, this brings us to Goku's training with the Ox King. We personally have never seen the Ox King train anyone, but based on statements characters made in the series, we know that when Chi-Chi was a kid, he trained her in martial arts. Before getting into his training, as I mentioned Chi-Chi, their first meeting would roughly go the same. Even though he isn't a completely innocent and happy-go-lucky kid he usually was, he still doesn't really know what marriage is at this time. So, while he does promise to marry her as usual, he still has no idea what he is getting himself into. Since Goku will be staying with her and her father during his training, she likely interacts with him more, though, as a way to try and impress Goku, since he is even more focused on fighting in this timeline, she might ask her father to train her as well. He already taught her the basics, and he can't really bring himself to say no to his daughter, so he agrees to train her alongside Goku as well. Also, something I briefly want to talk about is how strong Goku and Chi-Chi would be power level wise at this point. There weren't many power level statements for characters at this point, but all we know for sure is that Goku had around the power level of 10 at the start of Dragon Ball. However, with him having had more time to train with Grandpa Gohan, I'll raise his power level to 15. As for Chi-Chi, based on power scaling I've seen for early Dragon Ball, some people estimate a Bulma to have about a 4 and Yamcha to have about a 9, so I put Chi-Chi at a power level of 6. So she was likely stronger than Bulma, and she was shown to be weaker than Yamcha. Anyway, getting on to the Ox King's training, we have never seen how he trains anyone. However, based on what we know about the Ox King as a character, there are some things we can infer about his training methods. Given his towering size and strength, this suggests that his training has a focus on rigorous physical training. This could include things like weightlifting, straight exercises, and endurance training to build raw power and resilience. Since he was a student of Master Roshi, he would also have a solid foundation in martial arts. So, he could teach basic combat techniques, defensive maneuvers, and how to use size and strength to one's advantage in battle. So that part about using size to his advantage might not really apply to Goku. Since he's a kid at this point, it's rare that he would outsize anyone. Since we have seen the Ox King use an axe, he might be able to teach Goku how to wield traditional weapons, enhancing his versatility in combat. Even if Goku doesn't choose to use weapons, he might be able to translate some of these skills into using the power pole more efficiently. Regardless of the Ox King's imposing appearance, he still is a gentle and thoughtful person to some extent. He could teach Goku how to use his strength wisely and strategically, as he would emphasize his strength isn't just pure power, but also the ability to think and act wisely in battle. Given how the Ox King is a father, he could also be able to teach Goku values like respect, responsibility, and the importance of protecting his loved ones and the innocent. This would basically build upon the values Grandpa Gohan tried teaching him, thus continuing to develop his character. As for how strong Goku and Chi-Chi could get from this training, it's hard to say. Goku's power level from training with Roshi went from 10 to 24, or to 26 after his tail was regrown, so it was a 2.4 times or 2.6 times boost. Krillin's boost was about 2.75 times, as his power level went from 8 to 22. However, the Ox King is far weaker than Master Roshi, so Goku and Chi-Chi's power levels wouldn't grow that much. I made Goku's power boost about half that, so Goku's power level goes from 15 to 20. I made Chi-Chi's boost more than that, though, so she could also be training harder to try and catch up to Goku to impress him. So, I made her power level about a 2.3 times boost, which brings it from 6 to 14. Regardless, now that their training is over, Goku would still have his mindset on training with Master Roshi. Before he leaves, the Ox King would suggest that he should go tell Grandpa Gohan what he is doing so he doesn't get worried about him. Chi-Chi would also insist on going with Goku to continue spending time with him and to meet his grandfather. The Ox King would allow her to go with him, so they would say their goodbyes. After Goku calls for the Flying Nimbus, they would both get on it and head towards Mount Paozu together. Goku and Chi-Chi would eventually arrive on Mount Paozu, and Goku would introduce her to Grandpa Gohan. She would likely be nervous, since this is the first time she met the family of the person she made promise to marry her. Regardless, after they told him that they planned to go train with Master Roshi, he would likely invite her to stay for dinner with them first. Once she agrees, he goes out to find something to make dinner for all of them. Then after they eat, Goku would gather anything he needs to bring to Master Roshi's with him. On a side note, before getting into their training with Roshi, I wanted to discuss when in the timeline this takes place. In the last part, I mentioned that this takes place earlier than when Goku would typically have trained with Roshi, but I didn't give an exact year. To make this story slightly more interesting, I'm going to say it takes place 5 years earlier, in age 744. As for how old this makes Goku and Chi-Chi, if you follow Goku's birth year that was given in the original manga and anime, Goku is 6 or 7, depending on the month he was born, and Chi-Chi is 2 months away from turning 7. If following Goku's birth year from the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie and the Dragon Ball Minus manga, Goku is 9 or 10, depending on the month he was born. From here on out, for simplicity's sake, I'll likely state his age based on what it was in the original manga. Anyway, once they ate and after Goku gathered his things, they got on the Flying Nimbus and went towards Master Roshi's. When they arrive at Kame's house, they find him in his lounge chair, likely reading a dirty magazine. So this is the first perverted thing we've seen him do, ironically enough, since without Bulma being present when Goku met him last time, none of the things he tried with her could have happened. Regardless, before Roshi agrees to train them, he asks them to bring him a hottie. Of course, Chi-Chi is heavily opposed to this idea, but they also don't have another choice if they want to train with him. The first couple of times they bring girls back to the island would still be failures in Roshi's eyes. Even though Goku isn't his typical innocent self like in the original, he still doesn't know what a hottie is, so that's why the girls he finds at first aren't what Roshi is looking for. Also, the hottie they find isn't Launch, since she is only 12 at this point, so she likely isn't robbing anything at this age. Even if she was, she'd be too young for Roshi's standards. I don't typically introduce original characters unless there isn't any other option, but I didn't see any other option. Though, unfortunately, I don't have art for this character, so this was a last minute decision. I originally wasn't even going to do a part like this one, but I decided to at the last minute. If I ever do get art of her, I'll post it in a community post for everyone to see. Anyway, I do have an idea for this character, though, so I'll likely describe her when they find her. So, with their search continuing, they eventually spot a nearby village, and Chi-Chi suggests that they search there. While wandering through the streets, Goku gets distracted by something that smells delicious. He runs off towards the smell, and Chi-Chi is forced to follow him, and this brings him to a bakery. The person working at the bakery is a girl that's in her early 20s. She has short brown hair and freckles. She has a soft, round face along with a warm, motherly appearance and a welcoming smile. Generally speaking, she usually always has a welcoming smile on her face. Personality-wise, she's optimistic and kind-hearted, but also very forgetful and clumsy at times. By observing her working, they notice that she's often mixing up orders, misplacing ingredients, or burning pastries by accident. Despite all that, her customers seem to love her since she's always eager to help, and she has a heart of gold. Outfit-wise, the major noticeable article of clothing would be the apron she has on and is constantly covered in flour. Regardless, Chi-Chi was suggested they try bringing her to meet Roshi, though it might be harder to convince her to come along than it was with Launch, since Launch needed help against the police, while she doesn't really need help against anything. Once they start talking to her, they would introduce themselves, and she would introduce herself as well. The name I came up with for her was Deza, which comes from the Japanese word for dessert. After Chi-Chi and Goku explain why they are there, she might agree to come along since she has a heart of gold and couldn't bring herself to turn down the two children. When they bring her back to Kame House and introduce her to Roshi, he would say that they passed and can train with him. Unlike Launch, when Roshi tries to offer her to train, she likely turns this down from the start. After all, she still works at the bakery, so she can't be there nearly as often since she has a job to do. When Deza is there, though, in a typical comedic fashion present in Dragon Ball, things would likely keep Roshi from doing anything perverted. Not only would Chi-Chi try to prevent this, but her clumsiness could get in the way. Given her clumsiness, she might accidentally cause the shelf of ingredients to fall on Roshi, thus preventing whatever perverted antic he was trying in that moment. Anyway, since she is off work, she sticks around at Kame House for that day before she has to go back to the town that they found her in. As a side note, something that briefly mentions that Krillin wouldn't show up to train, since this is 5 years earlier than when he normally arrives. Regardless, Roshi still packs up Kame House to a capsule and takes him to a larger island, since his island is too small for his training methods. Once there, Roshi's first test for them is to run 100 meters, so that they can time him. As usual, though, Goku ends up going twice, since he realized that his shoes were completely busted during his first run. So, after his second run, Goku ends up being the fastest, with Chi-Chi coming in second. Though when Roshi goes to run, he would still obviously be the fastest out of all of them. Their next test would be to find the stone that Roshi draws the turtle symbol on, with the loser not being able to eat dinner. Deza would be the one making dinner for them that night while they search for the stone. Things would mostly go the same, with Goku sniffing out the stone. Since Krillin isn't there to try tricking him, he likely isn't tricked into giving up the stone. So, he would be declared the winner once he returns to Roshi. With Deza being the one who cooked, it's not likely they would have gotten sick since she wouldn't have chosen to cook pufferfish like Launch did. However, they might be subjected to eating a burnt meal because of Deza's forgetfulness, so Chi-Chi might be the only one who wasn't subjected to that since she lost. The next day, they officially get to start their training, with Roshi telling them that the turtle school way is to train hard and enjoy life. Regardless, they start with some light jogging, and then go on to deliver milk around the island by foot. During this, he also tells them that in 8 months they might get to enter the World Martial Arts Tournament if they don't shirk on their training. Anyway, next step to their training is to plow a field with their bare hands. Next, they go into training their mind, but because of Chi-Chi putting her foot down, they wouldn't be reading dirty books like they did in the original. After lunch, they then take a nap, as Roshi tells them the Turtle Hermit way is to move well, study well, play well, eat well, and rest well. Next, they then had to do construction for their training, and once that is done, they must swim across the lake while avoiding the shark. They might still try asking him about just teaching them some moves already, but he says he won't do that until they can push a large boulder that he shows them. Finally, after swimming across the lake, the last part of their training is being tied to a tree and having to dodge angry bees. Though he does tell them that was just their warm-up, since for the next 8 months they have to wear 20-kilogram turtle shells throughout their training. About a month before the tournament is when they show Roshi that they finally managed to push the boulder. However, he then tells them that he has nothing more to teach them, as their training so far also incorporated the basics of his martial arts into it. He also advises them not to be seduced by the idea of winning the tournament, but instead use it as an opportunity to test their ability and focus their training. He then gives them 40-kilogram turtle shells to wear for the remaining month of their training. Before they finish their training, I want to discuss the group dynamics with Chi-Chi and Deza added into it, and Krillin absent from the group. When it comes to Goku and Chi-Chi, they likely grow closer during this and become better friends. It could even be the start of a childhood crush on Goku's side, since he would most likely be impressed by her strength. Also, with the absence of Krillin, they might develop that best friend style relationship and friendly rivalry Goku and Krillin had. As for Deza, the times that she is there, they wouldn't have to worry about her getting aggressive or anything like Launch did with turning into her blonde form. The thing they might have to worry about most is the meals she cooks if they do end up burnt. Chi-Chi might develop a closer relationship with her than the others, so she might ask her to teach her how to bake and cook. After all, she wants to be Goku's wife one day, so she wouldn't mind learning more about these things. Deza would likely happily accept this, so she couldn't bring herself to say no to Chi-Chi. In return, Chi-Chi might help her work on her forgetfulness so that she isn't as forgetful when it comes to making meals and desserts. Anyway, the last month of their training soon passes, and Roshi would have them take off their turtle shells. They would notice their bodies feel lighter, so he has them jump as high as they can before they leave. After they land, he still has them dress formally before they get on the plane, since he wants them to look respectable for this. Deza likely comes along with them as well, since they would have invited her to watch them fight. She likely would have secretly packed meals for them as well, so that she could give them to them as gifts after the tournament is over to celebrate their performance. Regardless, they all leave and catch their flight that will bring them to Papaya Island. Once Master Roshi, Deza, Goku, and Chi-Chi arrive on Papaya Island, they quickly make their way towards the tournament grounds. When they arrive, he signs Goku and Chi-Chi up to enter the tournament. Before the qualifying rounds begin, he gives each of them a martial arts uniform to fight in. As a brief side note, before getting into the tournament, I changed it slightly to make it a more interesting tournament. With some of my plans for later tournaments, the heroes might end up taking up half of the roster. So, I plan to extend those tournaments to have one more round and a total of 16 fighters. Just to match those later tournaments, I'm doing the same thing of expanding this tournament. Something to mention about the 20th World Martial Arts Tournament is that besides King Chappa, we don't know any of the fighters in it. With Goku, Chi-Chi, Jackie Chun, and King Chappa in it, that means there are 12 gaps for other fighters. Again, so this was a last minute change, and since the artist I work with is working on another commission of mine, I don't have art of them, but I did have an idea for them. When Toriyama was making the original Dragon Ball, he stated many of the things in it had a Chinese influence since his wife liked those kinds of things. To keep these characters in a way I think Toriyama would make them, I decided to base them on the Chinese zodiac signs, which could be fitting anyway, as many Earthlings we've seen in Dragon Ball were based on animals. I'll describe each one separately when I get to the fights that they're in, so they aren't as thought out as Deza was. Also, before getting into the tournament, I briefly wanted to discuss their power levels. Normally, Goku receives a 2.4 times boost from Roshi's training, so assuming that he still receives that boost, his power level goes from 20 to 48. As for Chi-Chi, it's a little harder to make an estimate of her power level. Normally, Krillin received a boost of 2.75 times. Since Chi-Chi is a regular human like him, he could receive a similar boost. However, since he was training harder in this timeline to try and impress Goku, I gave her a 3 times boost. So, Chi-Chi's power level would go from 14 to 42. Back with the preliminaries, Goku and Chi-Chi would fly through them, so they are stronger than most regular fighters. However, they would also notice King Chappa flying through these preliminaries without being touched. After all, from the statements we have about him, Yamcha mentioned that he won a World Martial Arts tournament without being touched. Anyway, when they passed through the preliminaries, they would run into the stands to meet up with Master Roshi. He congratulates them on winning, but when it gets close to the time to go and draw lots for the main tournament, Goku and Chi-Chi would hurry there. For some of the fights, I set them up on what I thought would fit thematically, but for most of them I used a random number generator. This is where I'll mention the names of the characters, which I use the Japanese words for the animals the zodiac signs are as their names. Match 1 is Jackie Chun vs Suzoku, who is based on the rat. Match 2 is Ondori vs Hebi, with Ondori being based on the rooster and Hebi being based on the snake. Match 3 is Usagi vs Chi-Chi, and Usagi is based on the rabbit. Match 4 is Inu vs Yushi, with Inu being based on the dog and Yushi being based on the ox. Match 5 is Buta vs Ryu, with Buta being based on the pig and Ryu being based on the dragon. Match 6 is Goku vs Saru, and Saru is based on the monkey. Match 7 is Yagi vs Tora, with Yagi being based on the goat and Tora being based on the tiger. Lastly, Match 8 is Uma vs King Chappa, with Uma being based on the horse. When it comes to the first match between Jackie Chun and Suzoku, it could be a tricky fight for Jackie Chun. Suzoku is a witty, clever, and resourceful fighter. He taunts his opponents and uses his intelligence to outthink them in combat. He also excels in speed and agility, so he uses quick strikes and evasive maneuvers to overwhelm opponents. While his intelligence normally would be able to outthink others, unbeknownst to him, he's going against Master Roshi, the martial arts master. Jackie Chun would test out his power at first, to see what he could do, but he would easily be able to outspeed Suzoku, thus knocking him out of the ring. For the second match between Ondori and Hebe, Ondori is always energetic, confident, and proud. He is cocky though, so he will strut around the arena as if he owns it. As for how he fights, it resembles the quick kicks and movements of a rooster, since it is sharp and precise. He focuses on spinning kicks, quick jabs, and aerial maneuvers to catch opponents off guard, so his strikes are rapid and unrelenting. As for Hebe, she is mysterious, cold, and calculating. She waits for the perfect moment to strike, and she will often unnerve opponents with her quiet confidence. For her fighting style, she is deceptive and slippery, and she focuses on constricting techniques, joint locks, and precise strikes at target pressure points. This is a tough fight for both of them, so it ends up dragging on for a while. Eddie would take advantage of the moments that Ondori gets cocky to get him locked in a joint lock. However, there would also be moments where Ondori uses his rapid and unrelenting strikes to weaken Hebe. With her being weakened like this, it makes it easier for Ondori to get out of her grip. So, he eventually managed to knock Hebe out of the ring since she was too weak to fight back. Next is the third match, which is between Usagi and Chi-Chi. Usagi is optimistic, playful, and quick-witted. She enjoys teasing her opponents, but beneath her cheerful demeanor is a strategic and cunning mind. She is also an acrobatic and graceful fighter that utilizes evasion and agility in their fighting style. She'll dodge attacks with fluid movements and use light but rapid strikes to wear down their opponents. She's also known for using a jump and kick style reminiscent of a leaping rabbit. In going against Chi-Chi, she might struggle against Usagi at first. Her light and rapid strikes would catch her off guard at first, since it makes her hard to catch. However, I think Chi-Chi would use more of her tactical skills that she learned from her father and Master Roshi. While using the defensive techniques she's learned, she would look for an opening in Usagi's defenses. Her opportunity comes when she uses her jumping kicks, if she leaves herself open. This allows Chi-Chi the chance to quickly strike before her kick lands, and before letting her recover, he follows up on this attack to knock Usagi out of the ring. The next match, which is the fourth match, is between Inu and Yushi. Inu is protective, loyal, straightforward, and tenacious. He fights with a sense of duty and is always willing to defend the weak. He never backs down from a challenge. His fighting style combines a ferocious offense and a guard dog-like defense. He's known for his aggression and his way to bounce back quickly after taking hits. As for Yushi, he is calm, stoic, and patient. He remains unfazed in battle and prefers to let his strength do the talking. For his fighting style, he is a powerhouse with incredible endurance and strength. He relies on his brute force and grappling techniques. He can take a lot of hits before going down, and his strikes are slow but devastating. In their fight, Inu overestimates his own ability to bounce back after taking hits, so he doesn't attempt to dodge Yushi's attack. This means when his devastating blow does land on Inu, it weakens him greatly. The more he is weakened, the easier it becomes for Ushi's slow attacks to hit him. So, even if Inu planned to try and dodge his next attacks instead of taking them head on, he might not be fast enough to do this anymore. This allows Yushi to eventually get the win by knocking out Inu. Next is match 5, which is between Buddha and Ryu. Buddha is friendly, easygoing, and surprisingly humble. He enjoys a good fight and doesn't take himself too seriously, so he can laugh off both victory and defeat. Much like Ushi's fighting style, Buddha's fighting style focuses on overwhelming power and resilience. However, despite his rotund appearance, and unlike Ushi, he's quite agile for his size, and his brute strength allows him to bulldoze through opponents. He has a direct fighting style that focuses on body slams and powerful charges. Then as for Ryu, he is noble, commanding, and proud. He carries himself with dignity and believes that strength comes from mastering both body and mind. He is a master of energy-based techniques, so he can channel his ki to unleash devastating blasts that resemble a dragon's breath. His martial arts are also highly disciplined and resemble the movements of a dragon. During their fight, it would be a close match, as Buddha's agility would catch Ryu off guard. The Ryu would be able to use his dragon's breath-like attack against Buddha during one of these charges, since it does leave himself open to these kinds of attacks. Because of Buddha's resilience, this would be a long and drawn out fight, with it going back and forth between them. Since Ryu is focused on mastering both his body and mind, however, I think he would be able to come out on top by wearing Buddha down and knocking him out of the ring. Then for the 6th match, which is between Goku and Saru, Saru is mischievous, cunning, and always smiling. He loves to keep his opponents guessing and he treats every fight as a game. For his fighting style, he is an unpredictable and playful fighter that uses acrobatics, feints, and trickery to confuse his opponents. He is quick on his feet and will use unorthodox techniques to gain the advantage, like flipping off walls or different items in the environment. As for their fight, it will likely be a very high energy fight, but Goku still is somewhat energetic. However, his attacks and movements are also slightly more restrained from being taught to be more responsible by Grandpa Gohan, the Ox King, and Master Roshi. At first, however, he might be caught off guard by Saru's wild fighting style, though an advantage Goku has is that he, too, can be unpredictable when it comes to fighting. Saru might be used to going against fighters with predictable moves, so having to go against his own tactics could catch him off guard as well. They would end up wearing each other down as the fight goes on, but Goku likely comes out on top since he would be a little more used to fighting people with unpredictable fighting styles. After all, he has fought against Grandpa Gohan, which Goku himself mentioned in the original manga that Grandpa Gohan would use the unpredictable drunken fist technique. After this is match 7, which is between Yagi and Tora. When it comes to Yagi's personality, she is patient, wise, and gentle. She relies on her serene mindset in battle and prefers to let her opponents wear themselves out. Her fighting style is soft and fluid. Instead of directly confronting them, she relies on redirecting the opponent's force. So, she excels in defensive techniques and often uses her opponent's momentum against them. As for Tora, he is proud, bold, and fearless. He also has a strong sense of honor, but he can be overconfident in his abilities as well. His fighting style is ferocious and aggressive, with it being based on tiger claws and fast, brutal strikes. His style is mostly based on offense, as he uses wide, powerful slashes and lunges to intimidate and overpower his opponents. So, in their fight, his fighting style can actually work to Yagi's advantage. Since he uses wide slashes and lunges, this leaves himself open to allow her to use his momentum against him. This would allow her to move out of the way of his attacks and hit him with a quick counterattack. The more this happens, the angrier he would get, and his overconfidence would start to show. He didn't think he would be losing to someone like her, which, by extension, the more overconfident he gets, the worse his performance in the fight becomes. He would eventually wear himself out against her destructive techniques, and she'd knock him out of the ring. For the 8th and final match of the first round, it is between Yuma and King Chappa. Yuma is free-spirited, independent, and determined. He's a lone wolf that refuses to be restrained or held back. He is always pushing forward. For her fighting style, it is fast-paced and focuses on powerful charges, along with her being a master of kicking techniques, as she can unleash a powerful flurry of kicks. Even with her speed, though, it might not work well against King Chappa. As mentioned earlier, King Chappa was mentioned to make it through this tournament without being touched by using the 8-arm fist technique. This allows him to move fast enough to block all of Uma's kicks, since she can't keep up with his speed. She would be knocked out of the ring before she fully understood what happened, but she didn't expect him to be that fast. This brings us to the second round of the tournament. The first match of this round, which is the 9th match overall, being Jackie Chun vs Andori. The 10th match is Chi-Chi vs Uchi, and the 11th match is Ryu vs Goku. As for the last fight of this round, the 12th match is between Yagi and King Chappa. Jackie Chun and Andori would then enter the ring, and the match began shortly afterwards. While Andori might be able to get some good hits in by using his aerial maneuvers, this showing off might be his downfall. Jackie Chun would eventually be able to notice openings in his attacks and use them to his advantage. In his typical style, though, he would use this as a way to teach Andori a lesson after he knocks him out of the ring. He would advise him not to show off, since he leaves himself open when he does. Then as for match 10, which is between Chi-Chi and Uchi, this would be a longer and closer match than the last one. However, Chi-Chi might have an advantage in this fight, since he trained with the Ox King. Like the Ox King, Uchi uses his size to his advantage, so he relies on brute force and grappling techniques. So, since Chi-Chi is used to going against fighters that use these techniques, she would already know how to counter them. Basically, this means that the fight is her dodging his attacks and slowly wearing him down with attacks of her own until she can knock him out of the ring. The 11th match is between Ryu and Goku, so this fight could be a little harder for Goku. With Ryu being a master of energy techniques, that could give him an advantage over the young boy, since at this point in the timeline he isn't a master in them by any means. But Goku would also have a better handling with the Kamehameha than usual since he is stronger than usual at this point. Also, with Goku knowing a bit more about strategy for fighting, since he got to train with Grandpa Gohan for longer and he got to train with the Ox King as well, he might know more ways to counter energy techniques. So, over time, with Goku continuously countering and dodging his energy attacks, Ryu would start to lose energy and become worn out. Their fight likely ends with a beam struggle between Goku's Kamehameha and a Dragon Breath-like attack of Ryu's, but the worn out Ryu would lose this struggle and be knocked out of the ring. This brings us to the 12th match, which is the final match of round 2, and it is between Yagi and King Chappa. Since Yagi likes letting her opponents wear themselves out and to use defensive techniques, she might hold out a little longer against King Chappa. However, he would still use his 8-arm fist technique, which would easily break through Yagi's defense. So, he is easily knocked out of the ring with her never landing a hit on King Chappa. This brings us to the third round of the tournament, with the first match of this round, and the 13th match overall, being between Jackie Chun and Chi-Chi. Then the 14th match, which is the final match of this round, is between Goku and King Chappa. For the 13th match between Jackie Chun and Chi-Chi, he would likely suppress himself to take on Chi-Chi. After all, she would want to test the student's power, even though she doesn't recognize him as Master Roshi. In their fight, she would give it her all, but she obviously couldn't overpower him. Like with his fight against Krillin in the original, he would likely dodge all of her attacks. Since she is young at this point, this would likely frustrate the young girl. The more frustrated she gets, the sloppier her fighting would become. Soon enough, he is swiftly knocked out of the ring by Jackie Chun. Once their fight is over, he would suggest to her to work on her temper and frustration, since it makes her fighting technique sloppy and predictable. Next is the 14th match, which is the final match of this round, and it is between Goku and King Chappa. Even with Goku being stronger in this timeline, his power wouldn't be anywhere near King Chappa's. So, even with him trying his best, he couldn't land a hit on him, especially when he uses his 8-arm fist technique. He would easily block any of Goku's attacks and overpower him with a flurry of blows from this technique, so he would swiftly knock Goku out of the ring. This brings us to the 4th and final round of the 20th World Martial Arts Tournament, which, the 15th and final match, is between Jackie Chun and King Chappa. Before getting into this fight, we briefly wanted to discuss what King Chappa's power level would be. We never get a specific statement for it, but I think I could make a pretty good estimate based on power scaling I've seen and based on statements from the series. Around the time of the 22nd World Martial Arts Tournament, Yamcha described him as godlike, and Roshi said that he would be a troublesome opponent for Goku. This was before he found out how strong Goku had gotten since he last seen him, though. The last time he seen Goku before that tournament was in the Fortune Teller Baba saga, after Goku finished his training with Korin. Based on power scaling I've seen, Goku's power level was estimated to be around 126 at that point. Roshi only mentioned that King Chappa could be a troublesome opponent for Goku, not himself. So, this likely puts King Chappa above Goku's power level of 126 and below Roshi's stated power level of 180. I chose to put King Chappa's power level during the 22nd World Martial Arts Tournament at 140, so he might be lower than that at the time of the 20th World Martial Arts Tournament. I'd estimate that his power level is about 120. Regardless, after they both entered the ring, Jackie Chun wouldn't suppress himself as King Chappa was stronger than anyone else in the tournament. This fight could be a shock to King Chappa, since he was used to not getting hit by his opponents. Roshi would easily be able to land a hit on him, even when he uses his 8-arm fist technique. Roles might be reversed here, so King Chappa might not be able to land a hit on Master Roshi, so he would basically be getting a taste of his own medicine in this fight as their fight goes on. King Chappa would start to get worn out from desperately trying to hit Jackie Chun while getting hit multiple times in return from the older fighter. At the end of their fight, though, Roshi would swiftly knock King Chappa out like he did to Krillin in the 21st World Martial Arts Tournament. After Jackie Chun is announced the winner of the tournament, he sneaks off to go and remove his disguise. He then goes and finds Goku and Chi-Chi to congratulate them on their performance in the tournament. Unbeknownst to them, Goku and Chi-Chi being beaten instills Roshi's final lesson that there will always be stronger people out there, that they shouldn't get a big head and think they are the best fighter around. After the tournament, Roshi might not have to buy them dinner, since Deza likely packed them meals. So, Roshi doesn't have to spend all of his reward money just to feed Goku. As they prepare to leave, Goku and Chi-Chi would mention something about going to train with Roshi again, but this is when he stops them. He would tell them that he has nothing further to teach them, and that they should go out into the world and discover things. He already thinks they are quite skilled, so this would allow them to discover how to become stronger on their own. So, Roshi tells them that he will meet them at the next tournament of 5 years, and that they should astound him with their strength. Goku and Chi-Chi then run off together to go and start whatever their next adventure may be. After they ran off, Deza would ask Roshi if he should have to do the same things he makes his students do so that they don't surpass him. With that said, Roshi reluctantly agrees and begins to run back towards Kame House, while Deza gets on the plane as was originally planned. While Goku and Chi-Chi are out exploring the world, in the woods near Mount Paozu, someone else is on an adventure of their own. There was a young girl making her way through the woods in her car, while also occasionally checking a radar she had for something. Her ride is pretty uneventful, but she eventually arrives at a quaint house. Once parking and exiting her car, she would soon be greeted by the occupant of this house, an old man. He was coming out to see who was there, as he wasn't expecting any company. Of course, we know this to be Grandpa Gohan, and once seeing the girl there, he would invite her in for some lunch. After all, he had just caught a giant fish not long before she arrived, and he couldn't eat it all on his own. She would take up his offer, since she realizes it has been a while since she ate, so she follows him inside. He would ask her what her name is, and she'd introduce herself as Bulma, and he'd tell her that his name is Gohan. Throughout their meal, they would mostly make small talk, but once they are done eating, he finally asks what brought her out this far. This is when she explains that she is searching for things called Dragon Balls, and shows him the 2 she collected so far, the 2-star ball and the 5-star ball. She would also explain that there are 7 of them, and when they are all gathered together, a dragon can be summoned to grant any wish. When he sees them, he would realize that he has seen something like that before, as he explains that he found one in the woods during one of his walks forever ago. He excuses himself for a moment to go find it, since it wouldn't be on the shrine in this timeline, so he has to dig it out. He eventually returns holding the 4-star ball, and she would ask if she could have it. He would ask what she wanted to wish for if she gets all 7, and she would say that she initially wanted to wish for a lifetime supply of strawberries, but now she is thinking of wishing for a boyfriend. With him seeing that she doesn't mean any harm and has an innocent wish in mind, he doesn't have a problem giving her the Dragon Ball, so he lets her take it. As she prepares to leave, though, he would stop her from taking off right away. He would ask her about what she plans to do if she did run into any trouble on her journey. As far as he can tell, she doesn't know how to defend herself. She didn't really have a plan for this, and once he hears that, he would offer to tag along. This is when he tells her that he is well versed in martial arts, so he could teach her a thing or two about protecting herself. Though, he also has his own reasons for coming along, as he would explain that after his grandson went on his own adventure, he has been bored at home alone. So, this adventure might do him some good, since it would get him out of the house, and it would also help her out in the process. Bulma might be reluctant about the whole learning to fight part at first, so she doesn't see it as the most interesting or ladylike thing. Regardless, once their journey begins, Bulma doesn't need to use a bike in this timeline since her car wasn't wrecked by Goku, so she and Gohan both ride in it. Eventually, as usual, Bulma would pull over to use the bathroom, and this is when she's grabbed by the pterodactyl. Though Gohan would have an easier time defeating it than Goku did, and she wouldn't have to rely on using a vehicle to jump into the sky like Goku did. Instead, he would easily be able to defeat it with his Kamehameha. After she is saved, he might use this as his chance to give her a lecture about why learning to protect yourself is important. He would also explain that martial arts shouldn't be used to look tough and show off, and they should be used for self-defense. She would relent and agree to train with him, but since it was getting late, she would use the capsule to set up a house for the night. Some of the usual gags with Bulma wouldn't happen, since Gohan was nowhere near as young and naive as Goku normally was. Instead, it would just be an uneventful sleep, and once they wake up in the morning, Gohan would get ready to start teaching her the basics of martial arts. He would train her in a similar way as how he trained Goku, but so that it doesn't take up most of their time since they are on a journey, he would only train her in their downtime in the morning and evenings. As for how strong she might get, it could be hard to say, but I'm going to try my best to make an estimate. From a power scaling video I watched, it estimated Bulma's power level to be around 4 at the beginning of Dragon Ball. Then as for how strong she could get, we have to look at how strong Goku got from training with Gohan. If we take the power level from the original Dragon Ball Z Broly movie as canon, Goku had a power level of 2 when he was sent to the Earth. Then we were also told that Goku's power level was 10 at the start of Dragon Ball, so there's a 5 times multiplier from when he arrived on the Earth. If Bulma got the same multiplier as Goku, it would bring her power level from 4 to 20 over the course of their adventure. Anyway, when they finally start to make their way towards the Dragon Ball, both of them would run into the turtle. It's highly possible that Gohan might recognize this turtle since he had trained with Roshi before and could have seen him at Kame House. So, this might be where Bulma learns about Master Roshi and that he is a legendary martial arts teacher, as Gohan would explain that Roshi is the one who taught him. The turtle would ask them to take him to the sea, and they would agree. Since they still have the car, Gohan wouldn't have to carry him, as they can just load the turtle in the trunk. Once they're on their way again, even with Turtle hidden, it's likely that the bear thief still stops them so he can steal from them. This might be the first time Bulma would get to practice her skills with martial arts that she learned from Gohan. I doubt her power level would be the full 20 I mentioned earlier yet, but she might be stronger than the bear thief already, so this would be the first realization she has that knowing martial arts can at least be helpful to her. I don't know if I'm going to make her a full-blown fighter in this timeline, but I'm leaning towards it. In the case where Goku isn't there to save her at every moment and his Grandpa Gohan there instead, I could see him starting to gently push her to training to protect herself. I also think this could be an interesting character arc for her, as it pushes her a bit out of her comfort zone. Also, while her heart may not completely lie with fighting at this time, it could be something she grows to like, especially if she experiences enough victories early on. That's not to say this route wouldn't have its challenges for her down the road, though. Regardless, after briefly celebrating her victory, they would continue on their way and would eventually reach the sea with the turtle. The turtle then asks him to wait there so he can bring them a reward. He'd still bring back Master Roshi, and he and Gohan would recognize each other right away, so they'd spend some time catching up. Bulma and Master Roshi would also introduce each other right away, but after that, Roshi would struggle coming up with a reward for them. After all, the immortal Phoenix is still dead and he already gave Goku the Flying Nimbus. Bulma would still spot the Dragon Ball that he was wearing as a necklace, and after explaining that they're collecting them, she would request that to be their reward. Roshi would settle for this, especially since he couldn't think of anything else, so Bulma never has to flash him her panties. Gohan and Roshi likely talk a bit more, and Roshi would fill him in on how Goku's training went and how he suggested for him and Chi-Chi to explore the world. They then say their goodbyes as they return to going on their journey. 3 days later, the two of them arrive at Aru Village, so that's where the Dragon Radar led them. As usual, they're attacked by Sherman Priest since he thought Gohan was Oolong coming to get Pokawatha. After they explain that Gohan isn't this Oolong person, they are told everything about Oolong. Also, Bulma still asks about the Dragon Balls, and after Grandma Palsy reveals that she has one, Bulma comes up with a plan to save the kidnapped girls in exchange for the Dragon Ball. The main difference here, however, is that since they don't have someone the size of a kid to disguise as Pokawatha, Bulma comes up with another idea. In the original series, we saw that Oolong was interested in Bulma at first, so she comes up with a plan to go with Oolong since she knows how to fight in this timeline. This way, he would lead her to the other girls, and then she'd defeat him, thus rescuing the girls in the process. So, once Oolong arrives, Bulma puts her plan into action and goes to confront him. Obviously, Bulma wouldn't do what Goku did of peeing out in the open and causing Oolong to get angry, so they get to follow through on their plan of Bulma following him to his lair. Once they arrive, Bulma would easily be able to beat up Oolong, especially when his time for being transformed runs out. He would likely be knocked out, and Bulma would lead the kidnapped girls back to Aru Village. In exchange for having rescued them, Grandma Palzu keeps her word and gives them the Dragon Ball. It's hard to say exactly what would happen with Oolong, but since he is knocked out, he likely doesn't go along with the heroes. After finding out that Oolong is weak and just a pig, the parents of the kidnapped girls likely restrain him until law enforcement can arrive to imprison him. So, Oolong would eventually be sent to prison for kidnapping those girls. Gohan and Bulma then set off towards the next Dragon Ball, which, it seems to be near Mount Fried Pan, but something to mention is that the name of the mountain might have changed. Since the fires were out and the Ox King started to rebuild his old kingdom, the mountain's name likely was changed back to Pleasant Mountain. This makes it easy for them, though, as Gohan would explain that he knows the Ox King, as they trained together under Master Roshi. Another thing to mention is that since they wouldn't have to chase the fleeing Oolong, Bulma likely doesn't lose her capsule case in the river, as her capsule case wasn't lost. When they reach Diablo Desert, they get to go through it by car. While their trip through the desert would be going faster, it's likely that Yamcha and Puar would still notice them, though when they approach the heroes and stop them, their interaction likely goes the same up until their fight. While Yamcha did hear about Gohan before, it's never stated that he knows what he looked like, so I'm going to assume that he didn't. This means he wouldn't recognize Gohan, but it wouldn't matter. Anyway, with how much training Bulma has gotten by now, I could see her being the one to try and take on Yamcha, too. But with his fear of girls, he would flee from her instead of fighting. So, with Bulma still having her vehicles, they're able to quickly make it out of the desert. This means that Yamcha wouldn't have the opportunity to track them down that night, which also means he never learns about the Dragon Balls. 3 days later, the heroes still arrive at Pleasant Mountain. As I mentioned earlier, the Ox King was still in the process of rebuilding his kingdom. When they meet up with him, he and Gohan will likely catch up for old time's sake. This also would be where Gohan passes on the information that Goku and Chi-Chi are out exploring the world like Roshi told them to. After they catch up with each other, they would explain why they're there, so he allows them to search for the Dragon Ball in the rubble of his old castle. Once they find it, the Ox King will likely let them rest there for the night. Regardless, after they leave, their journey still takes them through the Mushroom Forest. When they reach Fungus Town, as Bulma wouldn't have the bunny suit on, the townspeople wouldn't be suspicious of her. However, once they see the rabbit mob harassing people, and especially when they try to harass Bulma, she would take them on herself. They would still use their walkie-talkies to call Monster Carrot for help, and he still turns Bulma into a carrot. Normally it's Yamcha and Puar that get the carrot that is Bulma back for him while the mob was attacking Goku. This time, however, it'd be Gohan to get the carrot back while they're distracted. Monster Carrot is still forced to turn Bulma back to normal after he is defeated by Gohan. Once Bulma is returned to her usual self, Gohan couldn't take the rabbit mob to the moon and force them to make mochi like Goku did. Instead, they would likely be imprisoned by the town's police, and it'd also make sure that Monster Carrot was restrained in a way that he couldn't turn people into carrots. When they go back on their journey through the Mushroom Forest, they are still ambushed by Mai and Chu, and her car is destroyed. Though with Gohan being as strong as he is, he'd be able to stop them from stealing their Dragon Balls. When the unconscious Mai and Chu eventually wake up, they would slink back to Pilaf's castle, but they would be berated for their failure. Anyway, since Bulma still has her capsules, they wouldn't have to rely on Yamcha just happening to show up with a vehicle she can use. Instead, she'd likely use the bike we saw that Goku normally used to go after the pterodactyl, since both could fit on it. With Pilaf still having one Dragon Ball, they would follow the radar and eventually reach Emperor Pilaf's castle. They still follow the arrows on the floor, which causes them to get trapped inside of the castle. Since they have the other 6 Dragon Balls on them, Pilaf would still demand to get them, but they'd refuse to hand them over. As usual, Pilaf would use the mechanical arm to bring Bulma to him so that he could do something nasty. However, before he tried blowing a kiss to get the Dragon Balls, something different might happen this time. With Bulma reaching a power level of 20 by this point from her training with Gohan, she would be able to break out of the mechanical arm. Pilaf, Mai, and Chu wouldn't stand a chance against her, so all 3 would easily be defeated and knocked out. After she obtains the last Dragon Ball from them, she takes this opportunity to explore the castle and find the button to release Gohan from the trap. Once getting outside, she would summon Shenron to make her wish. That when she wishes for the perfect boyfriend, Shenron would tell her that this is beyond his power. As we have seen in the Frieza saga, when they tried to wish Goku back to Earth, it didn't work as Goku refused to come back. No matter who you think the wish would count as the perfect boyfriend for her at this time, I doubt they would have a reason to be randomly teleported to an unknown location, so they wouldn't agree to this request. While this would disappoint Bulma, she might at least take solace in the fact that the perfect man for her is out there somewhere, so she would settle on making her wish for a lifetime supply of strawberries. While the specifics of that wish aren't important, I could see it going in one of 2 ways. For the first option, it could be that she gets a giant strawberry that replenishes itself when a bite is taken out of it. For the second option, a giant pile of strawberries would appear above her and land on her in a type of gag moment, so that she doesn't have to carry around the mountain of strawberries, she could just store them all in the castle. While the first option is more interesting in my opinion, I think the second option is more accurate, since I think Dragon Ball would include a gag moment like that. Now that their journey is over, Gohan and Bulma would discuss what they are going to do next. Besides going back home to West City, Bulma wouldn't really have any plans. Gohan could try to suggest for her to train with Roshi, and she might take up that offer. Sure, she initially only agreed to learn martial arts to protect herself, but with her having defeated the Bear Thief and Emperor Pilaf, she might have found some enjoyment in helping the world and others in those ways. After all, she has been shown to have a tendency to want to help others, even if she can be selfish at times. We have also seen her want to seek out adventure and excitement, so this might be the way that she gets to continue doing that. After all, she would have heard Gohan's conversation with Roshi earlier about how his grandson is out training and going on adventures around the world. If that doesn't appeal to her more adventurous side, I don't know what does. So, that appealed to her adventurous side, and that appealed to her side that wants to help protect people could lead to her taking him up on this offer. Though she would say that she has to go back to West City first to let her parents know what she was doing. Before she leaves, she would thank Gohan for everything he has done for her and would ask what he plans to do, which he would say he is likely just going to go back to his house as well. As this adventure has fulfilled his desire to get out of the house for a while, he does suggest her to come by and visit sometime so that she can meet his grandson whenever he comes back home. So, they then say their goodbyes. She makes her way towards West City and Gohan makes his way towards Mount Paozu. After Bulma made it back to her home in Capsule Corporation, she would quickly fill her family in on how her journey went, though it also wouldn't take long for her to ask about going to train with Master Roshi. I don't see Bulma's parents really being one to tell her no on anything, but there would likely be one sticking point with her doing this. Bulma was set to go back to school a couple of weeks after the time Goku normally started training with Roshi, so she'd have to figure out how to do her schoolwork while also training with Master Roshi. This probably wouldn't be too hard for them to pull off, especially with her family being influential. She should easily be able to set up virtual meetings with all of her teachers, or if push comes to shove, she would just have to collect all of her work ahead of time and do it while training with Roshi. Regardless, after she gets all of that sorted out, she'd make her way towards Kame House. She'd make her way there through the use of a plane from one of her capsules. Once she arrives, she'd find Roshi watching the exercise video just to see the girls. Since he seemed to be distracted and didn't notice her arrival, she'd have to do something to get his attention. Goku normally screamed in his ear, but since she has hit him on the head before, I could see her hitting him upside the head again for doing something perverted like that. After recovering, he would ask what she was doing there, as he wasn't expecting visitors. She would explain that Gohan suggested for her to come and train with him. She would also fill him in on the journey she had with Gohan and how she started learning the basics of martial arts from him. Also, since it's Bulma there, he wouldn't send her to get a hottie like he did with Goku. After all, Bulma is someone he considered to be a hottie. Roshi also doesn't really have a reason for someone else to be around like Launch was, as Deza still visits him often. So, Launch is likely never found by the heroes in this timeline, unless Goku and Chi-Chi somehow ran into her while running around the world, but that's unlikely. Anyway, without Bulma having to go on this search, Roshi goes to pack Kame House into a capsule earlier than usual. Right as he was packing it up, they were interrupted by a kid on a rowboat coming towards the island. As usual, this kid fails his landing onto the island, but after being helped up, he explains why he's there. He would introduce himself as Krillin and explain that he came there to be trained with Master Roshi. Also, as usual, he still gives Master Roshi the dirty magazines. As mentioned earlier, since Roshi already has someone like Deza who helps out around Kame House, he'd likely accept the magazines as payment for his training instead of sending Krillin to find the hottie. Which, after Roshi accepts Krillin as his disciple as well, Bulma laments the fact that she's stuck with two pervs. As for Krillin, he'd likely be shocked to see a girl training under Roshi, so he might be cocky about her not being able to last. Regardless, after Roshi finishes packing up Kame House, they use the boat of Roshi's to make their way towards a bigger island to train on. Since Deza isn't at Kame House all the time, Roshi likely would have called her to inform her of their new location before he left. Once they arrive, Roshi starts with testing their speed by having them run 100 meters. Krillin at this time had a power level of around 8, but as for Bulma, she has a power level of around 20 after her training with Gohan, so between the two of them, she would likely get a way faster time in her run. This would put Krillin in his place after his earlier statement about her not being able to last. Roshi would then do the run himself, demonstrating how fast he can go. After that, he would give them their next test, as he then writes on a rock. Once he shows them the rock, he then throws it and told them to go find it. Roshi would tell them that whoever finds the rock gets dinner, while the loser has to go without it for the night. Since Deza isn't there, he then makes his way to go make dinner. Thankfully for him, it'll likely take Bulma and Krillin longer to find the rock than what it took Goku and Krillin, so they couldn't just sniff it out like Goku did. So, this gives Master Roshi enough time to make dinner for them, while Krillin would try to make a fake rock as usual, which still fails. Bulma would begin searching for the actual rock. Roshi himself mentioned that this test required a lot of mental power and concentration, which is right up Bulma's alley. With her superior intelligence and memory, it wouldn't take long for her to calculate roughly where the rock should have landed. Once she finds it, she also wouldn't fall for Krillin's trick of handing him the rock like Goku did, so she's way too smart to fall for a simple trick like that. Krillin would try his best to catch up with her to steal the rock, but with a large gap in power and speed between them, he probably couldn't do so. Bulma would be the first one to get back to Kame House, and after she gives him the rock, he congratulates her for finding the correct rock. Since it was Roshi that made dinner this time, he and Bulma wouldn't get sick, as he wouldn't have cooked pufferfish like Launch did. The next morning, they all get up at 4:30 AM to start their training, as he starts them off with some light jogging. After they get to their destination, Roshi explains to them that they're going to be delivering milk by foot. They both grab a crate of milk to carry, and Roshi has them start by skipping for the 2 kilometers it takes to get to the first house. For the next kilometer, which is a tree-lined path, he has them zigzag down the entire path. From there, he then has them climb up the stairs to continue their milk deliveries. Roshi ends up talking with the person at the top of the mountain, and this is when he first mentions that in 8 months, if they keep obediently training, they should be able to enter the 21st World Martial Arts Tournament. Regardless, for the rest of their milk deliveries, they have to do things like walk on a log to cross a chasm, go through the desert, go through the river, and run from a dinosaur. Once their milk deliveries are finally finished, that marks the end of their early morning training, so he had to move on to their morning training. Their morning training consists of plowing fields, and he told them that the longer they take to do it, the longer their breakfast is delayed. They started to plow the fields with hoes, but Roshi quickly stopped them, as he then told the two that they had to use their bare hands. There might be some complaints from Bulma, since she would care about things like her appearance and her nails, but she would be made to do it barehanded regardless of her complaints. After that, they had breakfast, and once they finished eating, Roshi told them they were going to study from now until lunch. Since Bulma is still in school, this would be the perfect time to do her schoolwork and to do virtual meetings with her teachers. As for Krillin, he would just go through Roshi's education lessons as per usual. Then after lunch, They take a nap from about 12:30 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. as Roshi told them that the Turtle Hermit way is to move well, study well, play well, eat well, and rest well. After they nap, they then move on to doing construction work, which they also get to make a little money on the side while they do this. Normally after this is when Goku would ask him about showing them some moves, but without him being there, that never happens. So, Roshi never has to point out the boulder to them for them to push. Regardless, their next part of their training was to swim in the lakeshore and back for 10 laps, while also being chased by a shark. Once they finished swimming, their next exercise was to test their reflexes, as they were then tied to a tree and made to dodge angry bees. That was the last of their training for one day, so after that, they'd be able to have dinner and sleep. The Roshi also told them that this was just a warm-up, as for the next month, they'll do the same exercises while wearing 20-kilogram turtle shells. Throughout these 8 months, Bulma and Krillin would finally meet Deza at times as well. On these visits of hers, I could see Bulma getting close to her, simply because she'd be the only one that isn't perverted and because she's the only other girl there. Depending on how close they could get, I think Bulma might also end up learning how to cook from her. These little cooking lessons would probably happen after their training for the day and before dinner, so that she could help with cooking dinner. Bulma might also grow closer with Krillin throughout their training as time goes on. Even though she thought he was a perv at first, she might not be as judgmental as she was when they first met. With Bulma being stronger than what Goku was, I could see Krillin pushing himself even harder to try and catch up to Bulma in power. Also, there is something I briefly want to mention about the last part, as in it I was purposely vague when Bulma made her wish for a perfect boyfriend to Shenron. Even though that wish didn't work, I made sure not to mention anyone like Yamcha or Vegeta by name on purpose. One of the changes in this timeline could be that by her training alongside Krillin under Master Roshi, along with the lack of her being with Yamcha, could eventually lead to some kind of spark forming between her and Krillin. I'm not sure yet if that's the route I'm going to go, but that's why I didn't mention anyone by name in the last part. In this timeline, with the changes to her character, the perfect boyfriend for her could be Krillin or someone else instead of Vegeta. So, some kind of romantic interest might start to spark between them at the end of their training, though, at the very least, they would become friends by the time their training ends. Speaking about their training, Master Roshi sees how hard they are working eventually, and he notices how well they adapted to the 20-kilogram turtle shells. So, he gives them 40-kilogram turtle shells to wear for the remainder of their training. On the day their training ends, Roshi would have them take off the turtle shells. Afterwards, he then has them try jumping to see how high they can jump, and once they try it, they both go high into the air. Before leaving, Roshi gives them clothes so that they are dressed formally for when they arrive. They then leave Kame House, with Deza staying behind to watch over the place while they're gone. Roshi, Bulma, and Krillin catch a plane to get to Papaya Island, and once they arrive, they take a taxi to the World Martial Arts Tournament arena. Now that they reach the arena, Roshi signs both Bulma and Krillin up for the tournament, so after they are out of earshot, he also secretly signs himself up for the tournament as well. Once they are all signed in, Master Roshi would look around to see if Goku or Chi-Chi have arrived yet, though Bulma and Krillin would question who he's looking for, since neither of them had met Goku or Chi-Chi yet. So, he would explain how he was looking for his 2 previous students, and that they participated in the last World Martial Arts Tournament. While waiting for them to arrive, he would give Turtle School uniforms to both Krillin and Bulma. Soon enough, Goku and Chi-Chi would arrive at the tournament grounds. As they swam to Papaya Island before running to the tournament arena, they would spot Master Roshi, so they then run over to him and catch up with them. Roshi would introduce them to his current students, Krillin and Bulma, and they would start to talk with each other. We could also see Grandpa Gohan and the Ox King being here, so they would both have family and past students of theirs participating in the tournament. Like how Master Roshi disguised himself for the previous tournament to test his students, and since all 4 of his students are in this tournament, I think he would have had an idea for an extra test. He would have asked his previous students, the Ox King and Gohan, to disguise themselves and join the tournament as well. After all, Gohan had trained Goku and Bulma, while the Ox King had trained Goku and Chi-Chi, so it gives them both the chance to test their powers. It also allows Roshi, Gohan, and the Ox King to have a sort of mini reunion after all these years, and it allows Gohan and the Ox King to continue to fight, as them training students recently probably sparked that interest again. Anyway, since Master Roshi's disguise name is just 1 letter off of Jackie Chan's name, I did a similar thing with Gohan and the Ox King's disguise names. Since the Ox King looks like Chuck Norris with the beard and everything, and since Chuck Norris is a martial artist, I made his disguise name Chick Norris. Then as for Gohan, I wanted to base his disguise name off of Bruce Lee, so I just had to make his disguise name Bruce Me. Regardless, as of right now, Gohan and the Ox King will just join in on the conversation with everyone else. Goku likely talks with Gohan while Chi-Chi talks with the Ox King, since it's been a while since they've seen each other. But Gohan will also talk with Bulma, and the Ox King will also talk with Goku to see how they were doing after training under them. While they were talking, Master Roshi snuck off to go and change into his Jackie Chun disguise. They weren't able to talk for long, however, as it was announced that the preliminaries were about to begin. So, they all made their way towards the area where the preliminaries were being held. After everyone else left, this is when Gohan and the Ox King would go to disguise themselves before making their way towards the same area as everyone else. As a brief side note, before getting to the preliminaries, I changed the main tournament slightly to make it a more interesting tournament, just like I did in the last tournament video. Since Master Roshi had 4 students in this timeline, they and Roshi would take up half of the tournament roster. To make it more interesting, I expanded the tournament by 1 round just like I did in the last video. This way, there are 16 finalists, and it keeps more of the fighters we've seen in the original tournament present in this timeline. Also, before getting into the tournament, I briefly wanted to discuss their power levels. Normally, from running around the world between the 21st and 22nd World Martial Arts tournaments, Goku's power receives about a 1.42 times boost. So that was with him running around the world for 3 years, so that means his power received about a 1.14 times boost per year. Since there were 5 years between the 20th and 21st World Martial Arts tournament, he'd receive about a 1.7 times boost instead. This raises his power level from 48 up to 82. As for Chi-Chi, assuming she gets the same power boost as Goku, her power level goes from 42 to 71. Now, as for Bulma, I based her power boost off of what Krillin normally received from training with Roshi, since he is also a human. Krillin normally received a boost of 2.75 times, so if giving that same power boost to Bulma, her power level goes from 20 to 55. Lastly, as for Krillin, this power level before training with Roshi was estimated to be around 8 in this timeline, since he had a stronger training partner from the start, and because he was training harder in this timeline to both try and impress Bulma and to catch up with her, I made his power boost much higher. I don't see him surpassing Bulma right away, so I gave him a 6 times boost to his power, as this brings his power level up to 48. Back with the tournament, the rules for it stay the same. Nothing major really changes about the preliminaries. This time, there are just 4 new fighters added into the bracket: Chi-Chi, Bulma, Bruce Me, and Chick Norris. Also, since Yamcha never got into a fight with the heroes, I don't think he'd show up at this tournament, so any of the scenes or fights that usually involved him obviously wouldn't happen in this timeline. This means that there is a total of 140 fighters in the preliminaries of the tournament this time around. Regardless, Goku, Chi-Chi, Krillin, and Bulma would make it through the preliminaries with relative ease. Before they go to draw lots, they would go to talk with Roshi, Gohan, and the Ox King, as they would have to keep up the act of being spectators. After talking with them for a bit, they then go to draw lots. But the way I set up the bracket, the octo-final round was as follows. Match 1 is Babaski / Fighter 69 versus Chick Norris. Match 2 is Chi-Chi versus Lang Lang Roshi / Fighter 83. Match 3 is Krillin versus Bacterian. Match 4 is Jackie Chun versus Fighter 97 / Yawara Bear. Match 5 is Fighter 40 versus Bruce Me. Match 6 is Great Lee versus Bulma. Match 7 is Nam versus Ranfan. And Match 8 is Goku versus Garon. With the lots drawn, Fighter 69 / Babaski and Chick Norris would enter the ring. While both of these fighters are big in size, Chick Norris would have a huge power advantage over a normal fighter like Babaski, so even though they do get caught up in a grapple struggle at first, Chick Norris is easily able to lift up Babaski and throw him out of the ring. Once Babaski is declared to be eliminated, Chick Norris exits the ring. This brings us to the second fight, which is between Chi-Chi and Fighter 83 / Lang Lang Roshi. All that's known about her opponent is that he uses a fighting style called Lion Style Kempo. Unlike what he did with Goku, he might not think her stance as poor defensively as Goku's was. After all, she was also trained by the Ox King in this timeline, so she likely learned how to have a better defensive stance from him. Regardless, she would easily win this fight against her opponent, but she'd be able to dodge all of his hits before knocking him out of the ring. Then for the third fight of the first round, it's between Krillin and Bacterian. Even with Krillin being stronger than usual, this fight would go roughly the same at first. After all, the stench of Bacterian would seemingly still be getting to him. When he was eventually down on the ground and being stomped on by Bacterian, even though he doesn't know him well in this timeline, Goku would still likely tell him it's all in his head, as he doesn't have a nose. Once Krillin realizes that he's right, he then easily defeats Bacterian. Instead of passing gas in his face like he normally did, he'd likely just knock him out of the ring, but Krillin would be trying to avoid doing gross or embarrassing things in front of Bulma. Between this fight and the next, Krillin would go and thank Goku for his help. And between all of the fights, I see Goku and Chi-Chi talking with Krillin and Bulma, thus getting to know them better in the process. So, they likely would all be friends by the end of the tournament, though since it hasn't been that long yet, Goku and Krillin will not have their best friend relationship yet. Regardless, the fourth match of the tournament is between Jackie Chun and Fighter 97 / Yawara Bear. However, this fight would be easily won by Jackie Chun, as in the manga, Krillin easily defeated Fighter 97, so Jackie Chun would have an even easier time with knocking him out of the ring. Also, something to briefly mention is that without Yamcha there, he wouldn't be pestering Jackie Chun throughout the tournament by insisting that he's Master Roshi. The fifth match would be a fast fight just like the last one, as it is between Fighter 40 and Bruce Lee. Fighter 40 was the fighter in the anime who was an anthropomorphic blue wolf. Regardless, he wouldn't stand a chance against Bruce Lee, so he's easily kicked out of the ring. Then as for the sixth match, it includes another Bruce Lee impersonator, as it is between Great Lee and Bulma. Great Lee likely lands some hits at first, but just like when he fought Krillin, these attacks will not hurt her with how strong she is in this timeline. So after she gets up and goes to fight back, he gets frightened and forfeits. The seventh match is between Nam and Ranfan, which it would go the same as it usually did. Before their fight begins, Roshi would still learn that Nam was there to get water for his village. Regardless, once the fight does begin, Ranfan would still try fake crying and using her charms against them. Then once they no longer work, she still resorts to stripping down to her underwear. However, in order to defeat her, Nam still closes her eyes and knocks her out in one hit. This brings us to the eighth and final match of this round, which is between Goku and Goran. Goku being more responsible in this timeline, he wouldn't fall asleep before the fight, so they don't have to find him and drag him to the fight like Krillin normally did. Also, with Goku being far stronger than he normally was this time, Goran wouldn't be landing any hits on him. Since he is much stronger and has his tail from the beginning, he's easily able to break out of Goran's merry-go-round gum right after he uses it, even though Goran can fly. With Goku's superior speed and strength in this timeline, he'd be able to kick Goran out of the ring and onto the ground before he can fly back into the ring. So, this brings us to the second round of the tournament, which is the quarterfinals. The matches for the quarterfinals are as follows. The first match is Chuck Norris vs Chi-Chi, the second match is Krillin vs Jackie Chun, the third match is Bruce Lee vs Bulma, and match 4 is Nam vs Goku, and match 4 is Nam vs Goku. Before these matches begin, like the announcer did in the manga, he'd call for the students of the Turtle School to come up onto the stage. In this timeline, there'd obviously be 4 of them, since it includes Chi-Chi and Bulma this time. Regardless, he'd still ask them things like their age and about their training with Master Roshi. Though, since it is time for the next round, everyone besides Chi-Chi clears the stage after Chuck Norris gets onto the stage. Unbeknownst to Chi-Chi, this is a match against her father, so he'd be using this fight as a way to test her power. Thankfully for her, she'd at least be able to use some of the techniques her father taught her for defending herself and for fighting larger opponents like this. But he would be suppressing his power in order to have a good fight with her, so that's also partially why she's able to land good hits on him. Unlike the last tournament, where she gave into her frustration, she took Jackie Chun's advice and worked on that over the years she was traveling the world. So, her fighting style would be a bit more skilled than it was during the final tournament. Even with that going to her advantage, when Chuck Norris decides to stop holding back, he would easily toss her out of the ring. He might give her some advice on any mistakes he noticed her make during the fight, or he might also give her advice on how to escape grabs like the one he used to eliminate her with. For the next match of this round is between Krillin and Jackie Chun, which, this fight likely wouldn't go much different than it normally did in the manga. About the only major difference is that since Krillin is stronger in this timeline, Jackie Chun would have to use more of his power. The only minor difference is that he might not throw out a pair of panties as a distraction like he normally did, especially if he's still trying to look good in front of Bulma. Regardless, their match still ends with Krillin getting reckless and attacking desperately, so this makes it so that he easily plays into Jackie Chun's hand, thus causing himself to get knocked out. The next match in this round is between Bruce Lee and Bulma, so they both enter the ring. Despite her intelligence, even Bulma didn't seem to see through Jackie Chun's disguise in the manga, so I doubt she'll notice that Bruce Lee is actually Gohan in disguise. Just like with Chuck Norris suppressing himself against Chi-Chi, Bruce Lee would suppress himself against Bulma. This would allow her to get some hits on him. Since she's still generally new to fighting in comparison to Roshi's other students, she wouldn't have nearly the same level of strategic knowledge for fights yet. But since they're all children, even his other students aren't masters of that yet, Regardless, it would be a good fight. She would have improved a lot since the days where she traveled around the world with Gohan, so he would still be impressed by her newfound skills in fighting. He does still knock her out of the ring, as he even gives her advice on continuing to develop her knowledge of fighting strategically. After they exit the ring, this brings us to the last match of this round. This match is between Nam and Goku, and while their fight might start off similarly, that wouldn't last for long. In the original series, I've seen it estimated that Nam had a power level of around 25, while Goku had a power level of around 26. So, they were around evenly matched at this time. In this timeline, though, Goku would be far above Nam in power, so it's way more of a one-sided fight. Assuming Goku still tries to use his tornado-like technique, since he would be spinning way too fast for Nam to hit him, it still drives him to the edge. With him being stronger and faster in this timeline, though, he manages to knock Nam out of the ring before he collapses from being dizzy. Once Goku recovers from being dizzy, he stands up and exits the ring. Before the next round begins, Jackie Chun would still go to talk to Nam. As per usual, he gives an empty capsule to use for water, but he still has to stop Nam from blurting out that he's Master Roshi. Nam still tried to give the capsule back, since he couldn't afford water, so Roshi's shown him to the nearby well since water is free there. Also, since Yamcha isn't there to pester him, he never has to have Nam disguise himself as Roshi. So, when Jackie Chun is announced to come to the ring for his next fight, he says goodbye to Nam. Speaking of the next round, there are only 2 fights in it, with the first being between Chick Norris and Jackie Chun, while the second is between Bruce Lee and Goku. For the fight between Chick Norris and Jackie Chun, it would be the first time they have sparred with each other in a while. The last time the Ox King fought Master Roshi like it would have been when he was his student and probably had to go through a similar trial like Goku, Chi-Chi, Krillin, and Bulma did by participating in this tournament, but they would make sure to talk in a way that doesn't reveal their true identities to any of them. As for how the Ox King fights, in the Dragon Ball Adventure Special Guidebook, Toriyama said that he relies more on power than techniques. He also mentions how he wasn't quite good enough to master the Kamehameha. So, in this fight, you'd likely see him trying to use his immense strength to his advantage. However, since Roshi is skilled in many different techniques, he'd likely be able to dodge most if not all of the Ox King's attacks. The few hits he lands would be good hits, but the Turtle Hermit would recover from them. He'd likely resort to using his Kamehameha to knock the Ox King out of the ring. Like he probably did all those years ago, he would give advice to the Ox King that he shouldn't only rely on his brute strength to win him fights. It could be useful for him to train his intelligence and try to learn techniques besides ones that are just about strength. Then as for the next match, it's between Bruce Lee and Goku, so they enter the ring. This fight would likely be similar to when Grandpa Gohan and Goku fought in the Fortune Teller Baba Saga, but with 2 major differences. First, Goku is weaker than he was at that time, while Grandpa Gohan is likely the same strength he was at that time, so it's a tougher fight for Goku from the start. Second, though, is that Goku's tail wouldn't be a weakness Grandpa Gohan could exploit like he did in that fight. Since he was trained by Gohan for longer in this timeline, he likely helped Goku get over that weakness far before he sent him off to train with the Ox King and Master Roshi. After all, it was Gohan who gave him the advice to train that weakness. Regardless, like Gohan did in their fight during the Fortune Teller Baba Saga, he would suppress himself to have a better fight with him. As Gohan relies on using techniques more than the Ox King, this would likely be a fight where it comes down to who has the better techniques. Which, with how much experience Gohan has in comparison to Goku, that would obviously be him. This match likely ends with them having a beam struggle, as they both can use the Kamehameha. Though with Gohan being stronger than Goku and with him having had more time to master the Kamehameha, this will knock Goku out of the ring. Unlike their fight in the Fortune Teller Baba Saga, Gohan wouldn't have a reason to reveal his identity here, since he's still alive. Regardless, he would give any advice he had to Goku on his fighting, which in this case, it would likely be something along the lines of continuing to practice using his Kamehameha so that he can master it. This brings us to the final round of the tournament, which the final match is between Jackie Chun and Bruce Lee. Since Gohan relies on techniques more than the Ox King, this is likely a closer fight for Roshi than that one was. We don't exactly have a power level for Grandpa Gohan, but I can probably make a rough estimate for it. Roshi was stated to have a power level of 139 when suppressing himself, but it was 180 when he was at his full power. In the Fortune Teller Baba Saga, I've seen it estimated that suppressed Grandpa Gohan had a power level of around 130. So if he gains the same amount of strength as Roshi does when using his full power, he'd have a power level of around 168. This would mean that it would be an extremely close fight between the two of them. The old master and student duo would basically be going blow for blow with each other. Goku was far weaker than Roshi was, but still came down to whoever could stand up and declare themselves the winner first would be made the winner of the tournament. It's likely that this fight comes down to a similar ending, with either of them having to stand up first to say that they won. Since Roshi has a slight edge in terms of power, I think he would still be the one that wins this tournament. After the tournament is over, over, Roshi would still take off his disguise in secret and meet up with the others afterwards. By this time, Gohan and the Ox King have discarded their disguises as well. Regardless, Roshi would still talk to all of his students and tell them that there will always be someone better than them out there. He also tells them that their true training is now only just beginning. They still have dinner to celebrate after, with a lot of Roshi's prize money still being used to feed Goku. It's not as big of a deal to him this time, since he got to keep the prize money from the last tournament. Normally, after they had dinner, Goku would go to search for the 4-star Dragon Ball. In this timeline, he doesn't have that connection to it since Gohan is still alive. So, when Roshi asks what he plans to do, he might decide to go and run around the world again. However, Roshi might have a suggestion for him before he goes to do that. Since Goku has already done the training of running around the world before, I could see Roshi suggesting him to seek out Master Korin. After all, that might be the logical next step for him, since that's what Roshi himself did when he was younger. Goku would thank Roshi for this advice, and that's what he decides to do, though he does still plan to run around the world after he finishes training with Korin. As for Chi-Chi, I likely see her choosing to go with Goku on his next adventure. And as for Bulma, this is where some people might disagree with me. Even though she learned how to fight in this timeline, I don't think she would purposely continue to seek out fights and joining tournaments like the others would. However, since she still has her adventurous side, and did express an interest in continuing to go on adventures in the original series during the Red Ribbon Army saga, I could see her deciding to run around the world as well just so she could explore the world. Lastly, as for Krillin, he normally chose to stay at Kame House for the time being, but with him trying to impress Bulma in this timeline, when he hears that she is going to go on this adventure around the world, he'd decide to go with her, too. Anyway, after Goku says his goodbyes to Master Roshi, Grandpa Gohan, and the Ox King, he would prepare to leave with the others. While Goku could use his flying Nimbus, he'd probably choose not to, so he'd run alongside the others. Also, Roshi might temporarily confiscate Bulma's capsules until the next tournament, so that she can't rely on them and has to run around the world like the others. Even if she doesn't plan to participate in that tournament, she'd likely show up as a spectator, so that's when Roshi would plan to give her capsules back to her. So, Goku, Chi-Chi, Krillin, and Bulma then leave as they start their journey around the world, though they likely split into groups of two, as Goku would be going to look for Korin, and Chi-Chi would be following him. Since Bulma doesn't completely have that same desire to keep training and getting stronger, she would just be going out for the sake of going on an adventure. This means that she wouldn't be going to train with Korin, and Krillin would likely choose to tag along with her instead. They say their goodbyes to each other, though, as they then go their separate ways. Since Goku and Chi-Chi are following Roshi's directions to head towards Korin's tower right away, this has some major impacts on the Red Ribbon Army saga. With Goku not running around the world, many of his early interactions with the Red Ribbon Army wouldn't happen right away. After all, he isn't searching for the Dragon Balls, so he wouldn't cross paths with people like Colonel Silver, General White, or General Blue. The odds are that Bulma and Krillin wouldn't run into him either. Even though they are running around the world, it's theoretically possible that they could have stumbled across the Red Ribbon Army, but that's highly unlikely. Without Goku's interference, it's likely that Colonel Silver's men find the Dragon Ball on the day Goku normally fought them. After all, they were already in the area and near the rocks that it was between. While we never see this scene in the manga, Commander Red told Colonel Silver he was sentenced to death for being beaten by a young boy. In this timeline, he wouldn't meet that fate. However, he would successfully deliver the Dragon Ball to Commander Red. As for General White, he would still be at a standstill in the search for the Dragon Ball. Unbeknownst to him, Android 8 had managed to find it while walking around one day. He decided to hide it since he overheard General White saying that he would have his men kill the villagers once it was found. But as for General Blue, without Goku going towards that area with the Dragon Balls, they are never ordered to scout the area for an enemy camp. This also means that Master Roshi is never dragged into the conflict, so he doesn't get in a fight with Captain Dark. Also, without Goku there to follow, it might take General Blue longer to find the Dragon Ball as well. So, just like General White was at a standstill, General Blue is as well. Now, we can get back to what Goku and Chi-Chi are doing. Normally when Goku arrived at the sacred land of Korin, it was being attacked by Captain Yellow. However, he wouldn't be there yet, as Goku and Chi-Chi would arrive a couple of days early. When they get closer to the tower, they would be confronted by Bora. After all, Bora's tribe are the guardians of the sacred land of Korin and his tower. Regardless, Bora would ask them why they are there, and they would quickly explain themselves. Bora himself isn't old enough to have met Master Roshi when he climbed the Korin tower, but he might have heard about Roshi from his ancestors. When they mentioned that Master Roshi suggested that they should climb Korin tower, I think Bora would let them, especially since they don't have any sinister motives. There wouldn't be any reason that he wouldn't allow them to. As for their climb, they are already stronger than what Goku was when he first climbed the tower, it would go much faster for them. It took Goku a full day to climb the tower the first time and 3 hours the second time, so I'd estimate it takes them sometime around 16 hours or so. Once they got inside of the tower, they assumed that the pots of water is the sacred water they were told about, that they were soon called to the top by Korin. When they tried to introduce themselves, he would have them be quiet since he could read their minds. Since he would learn that Master Roshi sent them there, he obviously wouldn't have to tell them that Roshi climbed the tower once before like he told Goku in the manga. Anyway, when they asked Korin about the sacred water and tried to grab it, they would soon realize it isn't just as simple as drinking the sacred water. It would take them having to take the bottle from Korin, and while they probably could work together to get it, I think Korin might have them try to get it one at a time. This way, both of them get the full benefit of training with him, instead of it being easier by the two working together. At some point in their training, Korin would likely throw something of theirs off the tower so that they are made to climb it again. In the original, he only did this to Goku to show him his progress, and just like he did in the manga, both Goku and Chi-Chi would climb it way faster the second time. Overall, it normally took Goku 3 days to get the water from Korin and drink it. This time, with both of them being far stronger than usual, I'll say it takes him about 2 days to get it. Though, after they drink the water and comment on feeling nothing, Korin would tell them both that it's just regular water. Before continuing on with the story, I want to briefly discuss how strong they get from training with Korin. From estimates I've seen, Goku's power level went from 26 to 126 after climbing Korin's tower and from training with him. So, that boost roughly made him 4.85 times stronger than he was before training with Korin. In this timeline, if I kept Goku's power boost that high, it would bring him to a power level of 398. For context, that would make his power level higher than what it was when he fought Piccolo Jr., but slightly less than when he fought Raditz. I was torn on making Goku's power level anywhere near that high in this timeline, since that would put him far above Korin's power level, as Korin was stated to have a power level of 190, so Goku getting that much stronger wouldn't make sense, as if he was that much stronger, he would have been able to get the jar of water from Korin far before he got that strong. Instead, I gave him about half of that boost, which would be a 2.43 times boost, so it brings Goku's power level up to 199. As for Chi-Chi, assuming she gets the same boost as Goku, it brings her power level up to 172. For context, that still makes Goku stronger than what he was in the 22nd World Martial Arts Tournament, which is roughly 3 years after the Red Ribbon Army saga. Anyway, as they finish their training and start to descend the tower, they would come across some commotion at the base of the tower, as they were only on the tower for 2 days. By the time they get down off of the tower, this would line up with when Captain Yellow was attacking the Sacred Land of Korin. Chronologically speaking, Captain Yellow was beaten easily by Goku in the manga even before he climbed Korin's tower, so he definitely wouldn't stand a chance against both Goku and Chi-Chi. As per usual, they would rescue Upa from Captain Yellow and then defeat him. Once he is defeated, they would talk to Bora and Upa about why they were attacking them. Bora would explain that it was over the Dragon Ball, and since he didn't know what they are for, Goku would fill them in on what they are. While they wouldn't know exactly what Captain Yellow or the Red Ribbon Army wanted the Dragon Balls for, they'd probably realize it wasn't for noble purposes. After all, they were trying to kill Bora and they tried to kidnap Upa when that didn't work. Also, even though Goku doesn't have a reason to make a wish on the Dragon Balls, he might begin searching for them just to stop the Red Ribbon Army. In this timeline, he has a strong sense of morals and has a strong desire to protect the innocent, so he would want to take down the Red Ribbon Army. The first thing he and Chi-Chi would have to do to hunt them down would be to get the Dragon Radar. Since Bulma is out running around the world, and since she doesn't have it, they would have to go get it from her parents instead. Assuming they remember her mentioning that she's from West City and that her family owns Capsule Corporation, they make their way towards West City. When they arrive at Capsule Corporation, they would knock on the door and try to explain to her parents who they are and why they are there. After explaining who they are, her parents would likely let them borrow the Dragon Radar as long as they return it afterwards. They then thank them and leave as they begin their journey for the Dragon Balls. This likely ends up in them going on a hunt for the Dragon Balls in essentially the opposite order in comparison to how Goku normally found them in the Red Ribbon Army saga. This means that they would end up getting into a confrontation with General Blue and his forces first. While I could go into detail about these interactions, there isn't much of a reason to. They would go by pretty fast. with Goku and Chi-Chi having already trained with Korin. The other members of the Red Ribbon Army would pale in comparison to them in terms of power, so General Blue wouldn't stand a chance, and they would easily get the Dragon Ball. This earlier defeat of General Blue also means that they never have to go to the Penguin Village to chase him down, so they never meet Arale. The next person they get into conflict with would be General White at the Muscle Tower, but they would still fly through this tower, as none of the fighters in it would be able to defeat them. I still see them befriending Android 8 before eventually going on to defeat General White. Eventually, Android 8 would reveal that he had the Dragon Ball and had hidden it, so he gives it to them. After that, since Colonel Silver successfully retrieved the Dragon Ball in this timeline, Goku and Chi-Chi don't have to fight him yet. Instead, they would make their way towards the Red Ribbon Army headquarters. Around this time is when Commander Red would hire a mercenary Tao to take out Goku and Chi-Chi, so he would go to confront them while they were on their way towards the headquarters. This fight wouldn't go in his favor at all, though, as even when fighting alone, both Goku and Chi-Chi are stronger than him. As they would be fighting together, they would easily defeat the mercenary and knock him out. Now that they took care of that brief distraction, they then make their way towards the Red Ribbon Army headquarters once more. Even their raid there would be easier than usual, since at their current level of strength, fighting the Red Ribbon Army would be a breeze for them. Also, they might end up fighting Colonel Silver and Captain Dark at the Red Ribbon Army's headquarters since they weren't defeated earlier. Then after they are defeated, they would go to confront Commander Red. Though after finding out Commander Red's wish, Staff Officer Black would still be the one to kill him. He is still defeated easily, however, as he doesn't stand a chance against a combined Kamehameha from Goku and Chi-Chi. Once the Red Ribbon Army was defeated, this still leads them to the dilemma of not being able to find the last Dragon Ball. It wasn't showing up on the Dragon radar, which was confusing to them. Speaking about the Dragon Balls, even though Boro survived in this timeline, Goku might still want to use them so that he could wish back any good people that the Red Ribbon Army killed. I highly doubt that they didn't use force or kill anyone in their journey for the Dragon Balls. Also, I only worded it as any good people they killed would be revived so that people like General Blue wouldn't be brought back, as he was executed by the Red Ribbon Army. Bulma was still running around the world at this time, so they wouldn't be able to find her to ask about the last Dragon Ball. The only other person they could think to go to for advice would be Master Roshi, so they know where he is. Both of them then get onto the Flying Nimbus and make their way towards Kame House. Once Goku and Chi-Chi arrive at Kame House, they would quickly go and fill Master Roshi in on their predicament. They would tell him how they couldn't find the last Dragon Ball, and they didn't have an immediate way to find Bulma without scouring the world for her. They would eventually suggest for them to go see fortune teller Baba because she can use her divination to help find lost items. When they get there, they still have to get into line, and as usual, the group that was in front of them still comes out beaten up. Regardless, once they are brought in to meet fortune teller Baba, they explain why they are there to see her. She would say she can find this item for them for 10 million zeni, but they obviously can't afford that much, so she would explain to them the alternative option, which is to fight 5 of her champions. In the original, fortune teller Baba was willing to let just 3 people take on her 5 fighters. If Chi-Chi and Goku were really confident enough to take on 5 fighters by themselves, Baba would let the 2 of them do so. Before I get into the fights, I really want to mention that these fights would be a breeze for them. From the estimated power levels I've seen for Fangs, See-Through, Bandages, and Spike, all of them are weaker than what Chi-Chi and Goku are at this time. Anyway, out of the 2 of them, Chi-Chi would likely be the one to fight first, which, her first fight would be against Fangs the Vampire. Krillin normally lost this fight against him because of him being fast enough to catch Krillin and suck his blood. Since he is fighting Chi-Chi this time, he wouldn't be able to dodge her attacks, even if he transformed into a bat, so it wouldn't take long for her to knock him into the lake. For the next fight, which is against See-Through the Invisible Man, that might be the only one out of the first 4 fights that is difficult for them. Him being invisible is still a big advantage for them. The scene in his fight against Yamcha was stronger than him, but he just couldn't see him to hit him. Bulma also isn't there in this timeline, and neither is Roshi, so the scene of him being covered in blood from Roshi wouldn't happen, though I think this fight could be a good opportunity to show off her improved control over her emotions. This was something Roshi suggested for her to get a handle on since she got frustrated in their first fight back in the 20th World Martial Arts Tournament. Something like getting beaten up by an invisible fighter would be highly frustrating, but she would have enough emotional control by this point to not get overwhelmed by these feelings. Regardless, like how Yamcha managed to hit him from hearing him move, Chi-Chi would likely be able to do the same thing. Fortune teller Baba likely wouldn't get the chance to sing to hide the sound of his movements, though. Chi-Chi's hit would likely be strong enough and fast enough to knock See-Through into the lake, and she is way stronger than what Yamcha was at this time, without Roshi being there. When they move inside for the next match, he can't give them the warning he usually did about the Devil's Toilet Arena. Baba would still tell them about the pool of acid at the bottom and show them what happens if they fall in by tossing a piece of meat into it. Regardless, Chi-Chi's fight against Bandages the Mummy would essentially go like how Goku's fight against him went. She is stronger than Goku normally was at this point, and he defeated Bandages in one hit, so she would easily be able to do the same thing. Chi-Chi's next fight would be against Spike the Devil Man, and she'd have an easy time here as well. Just like how Goku was dodging his attacks and easily hitting him, Chi-Chi would be able to do that too. Even the Devilmite Beam wouldn't work against her, either. We know she is pure of heart after all, so she was able to ride the Flying Nimbus, so his attack would do nothing to her. Then when he still tries to use his pitchfork as a last resort, she easily dodges these attacks and kicks him into the wall. Now, this would normally have brought her into a fight against Grandpa Gohan, as he was Fortune Teller Baba's last fighter in our timeline. He is still alive in this timeline, however, so I highly doubt he is here this time. While Baba didn't know that Goku is Gohan's grandson, he did say that he asked her to let him know if a boy with a tail ever came by, as Baba can see the future to some extent. She likely knew when Goku was going to show up there, and that's when she would have recruited Gohan. Since he is alive in this timeline, he obviously can't do that, so this left me with 4 options for her last fighter. First option was that it would be no one, and Spike the Devil Man would be her last fighter. While I could have seen this happening, it seemed like the least interesting option to go with, so I decided against it. The next option I could think of was for her to bring back Master Mutaito, and she likely knew about him because of her brother being his former student. This option seemed interesting to me, but I decided against it for 2 reasons. Usually when I saw power scaling about Master Mutaito, it put him as being weaker than what Master Roshi was at the start of Dragon Ball. The estimates for his power also had him at being weaker than what Chi-Chi and Goku currently are, so I decided against using him. As for the other reason I decided against using him, I made this choice because I don't think Master Mutaito would have as strong of an emotional impact on Goku as it being Grandpa Gohan did. Sure, it could be cool to see Goku face off against his master's old master, but he wouldn't even know who he was without being told who he is by himself or Fortune Teller Baba. So, since I wanted someone that would have an emotional impact on Goku, this brought me to the last 2 options that I could think of. These last 2 options I could think of were either Guinea or Bardock, since Goku remembers them in this timeline. It was hard for me to decide between these 2 on which should fight Goku. The main issue with choosing these 2 is that they would far surpass Goku in power, even with Guinea not being a fighter. He's likely still strong, as she used to be part of Bardock's squad. I do think I have an idea on how to limit their power, but I'll get into that shortly. The main thing that helped me make the choice between the 2 of them is what we learned about Bardock in the Granola Saga. When Minato asked him about a wish he would want, he mentioned that he would like to see his sons thrive. What better way for that wish to be at least partially granted than by getting to see his youngest son again, one last time. So, I decided for Baba's final fighter to be Bardock, but this brings up the question of how she would have found him or knew about him. Like I mentioned earlier, she likely knew Goku was coming there ahead of time since she has some knowledge of the future. Assuming she looked into his past and learned about how strong of a fighter he is and that he is an alien, that might have given her some ideas. With her not having a 5th fighter, she could have decided to use someone from Goku's past, at least on the day he is set to show up. Then when she goes to Otherworld and talks to King Yemma, he would likely be reluctant to at first, but I'm going to say that he only agrees because she'd remind him of a favor that he owes her. If he wanted to be something silly, since Dragon Ball uses gag moments often, he could owe her a favor just for her having brought him a food or something he liked from the earth. Regardless, that part doesn't matter. The main point is that she would get to go to hell and look for Bardock. He'd likely be skeptical during this meeting, but at the mention of getting to see one of his sons again, I think he'd agree. Now, to address his power level, since assuming he still has a power level of 10,000 like he was said to have in the original Dragon Ball Z special, he would far outclass anyone on Earth. For the sake of this fight, I think Baba would use her magic to limit his power to about 1/40th of his full power. This would give him a power level of around 250, but he could choose to suppress himself if he wanted to. Back to the present, though, Bardock would get into the ring to take on Chi-Chi. While he doesn't seem like the type to purposely hide his identity like Grandpa Gohan was, I think it would be used as a joke moment to see someone as stern as him wearing the same type of mask as what Grandpa Gohan had on. Even after seeing her effortlessly take out the other fighters, powers. He's likely still dismissive that an Earthling can match his power. He's right to some extent, though, as even at his restricted power level, he is stronger than her. The gap isn't too wide that she can't land any hits on him, though. So, when she does manage to land some good hits on this unknown fighter, he would be forced to take her seriously. There would likely be some mocking in the fight coming from Bardock, but with her temper under control in this timeline, it doesn't get to her. So after he decides to get serious, he might give her a brief compliment by saying something about her having a fighting spirit. Regardless, the fight still wouldn't go in her favor even if she does land good hits on him. The suppressed Bardock is still stronger than her, so he would knock her into the lake. Once she got out of the lake, he'd still stand proud, as she'd just swear to get even stronger. After all, she wasn't going to just let herself get tossed around like a weakling. She would continue to better herself going forward, just like Master Roshi taught her. Goku would enter the ring next, as he then prepares to fight this masked fighter. With Goku not yet knowing this is his father in disguise, he would be taking this fight seriously. Finding out where the last Dragon Ball is depends on him being able to win this fight. To make this a better fight, Bardock would likely have to press himself even more to be closer to Goku's power level, but he still has the slight advantage. Throughout their fight, he likely calls Goku Kakarot, but Goku wouldn't know what he's talking about since he doesn't remember his birth name. Bardock would likely taunt him as well, mentioning things about how he wouldn't be strong enough to survive off of this planet. Things like this would just fire Goku up more to prove his strength, so he'd resort to trying techniques like the Kamehameha. He likely even uses his power pole during their fighting at times, thus demonstrating his skills with them. In between mocking him, while Bardock wouldn't be saying these things out loud, he would notice things from Gine and Goku. Could even be something simple as his kind-looking eyes or his smile, but he'd quickly shake these thoughts away so that he could focus on the fight. He powers himself up to his full power, albeit restricted, as he then charges at Goku again. The young boy might get some hits in, but the fight wouldn't go in his favor at this point. Bardock would be going all out to test his power and to try and toughen him up in the Saiyan way, so he wouldn't hold back. By the end of their fight, Goku might be bloodied, but he still wouldn't give up. Seeing his determination to keep fighting even when he is outmatched would remind Bardock of himself, just like Grandpa Gohan did in the original manga. Bardock calls Uncle, thus forfeiting the match. This would confuse Goku, and when he asks the masked fighter why he did this, he takes off his mask. Goku would be shocked to say the least, as he remembers what his dad looks like in this timeline. Like he did in the actual timeline with Grandpa Gohan, he'd hug Bardock while crying. After all, even if he's a strong fighter, he's still just a kid. Bardock likely wouldn't be used to seeing other Saiyans being this soft, but it'd remind him even more of Gine, so he'd let Goku cry it out. Once Goku finishes crying, he and Bardock would likely talk for a bit. While they were talking, Chi-Chi would be confused about this being Goku's dad, since she thought his parents were dead. Fortune teller Baba would tell her that his parents are dead, as she points out the halo above Bardock's head. Back with Bardock and Goku, I could easily see their talk taking a serious turn. Bardock might tell Goku the truth about what happened with Planet Vegeta, since he saw Frieza destroy it firsthand, like how Grandpa Gohan gave him the advice to train his tail to get rid of his weakness and get stronger. Bardock might suggest for him to train and get stronger as well. His suggestion could include things like learning how to control the Great Ape form. We don't know if Bardock had control over this form, but assuming that the statement about him knowing how to make an artificial moon is true, I think he would have control over this form. In my opinion, I think most Saiyans would have had control over this form as they got older and more experienced. After all, a rampaging Great Ape, or even groups of them, would likely be more of a hindrance in the long run. Regardless, Bardock would also tell Goku that his birth name was Kakarot. Now, does that mean that Goku is going to start going by that name? Well, no, probably not, since he was still raised with the name Goku and that's what everyone knows him as. He would just now know his real name. That won't be a surprise to him later in the timeline. It's possible if Bardock tells him about his brother as well, and assuming he learned from Baba what Raditz is doing, he would tell Goku about how he serves Frieza now. Before Bardock goes to leave, he would tell Goku to make them proud and to remember what Frieza did to his race. Also, before he leaves, since Chi-Chi learned that he's Goku's father, he might run up to him. She would have wanted to talk to him secretly since she still has plans to marry Goku in this timeline, since he made that promise to her. Mainly, she'd probably be trying to indirectly ask Bardock if he's okay with her marrying him and if she'd have his blessing to do so. This might catch Bardock off guard, but since she impressed him during their fight, He'd likely have no problem with this. He might mention about how he noticed that she is strong-willed, and how that will be useful for keeping a Saiyan like his son in line. He then go to Baba and get the restriction on his power level released by her, with a silent nod as a goodbye to his son and Chi-Chi. Bardock is then transported back to Hell. Goku would likely try to ask Chi-Chi what she was talking to his dad about. They'd be interrupted by an impatient Baba, as she was preparing to show them where the last Dragon Ball is with her crystal ball. Much to Chi-Chi's relief, this would make Goku forget about his question, as he then has Baba show them where it is. They then use the Flying Nimbus to head there and get it, and when they see the Pilaf gang inside of the car, they wouldn't recognize them at first. After all, they never fought them in this timeline. They likely heard about them from Bulma. Based on Bulma's description of them, they'd eventually recognize them. The Pilaf gang would be easily defeated by the two of them, but they likely don't even get to try and flee in their robot suits like they normally did. When they both use a Kamehameha against their robot suits, it would likely damage the suits enough so that they couldn't run. After forcing Emperor Pilaf to hand over the last Dragon Ball, they returned to Fortune Teller Baba's palace. They then summoned Shenron and wished for everyone good who was killed by the Red Ribbon Army to be revived. Once that wish is made, they then turn their attention towards their next journey, whatever that may be. They still have 3 years until the next World Martial Arts Tournament, after all. Before getting into the main saga of this part, I briefly want to talk about Goku and Chi-Chi's training over the last 3 years. I was torn on whether they should train with Fortune Teller Baba and, by extension, warriors from Otherworld, or they should run around the world again. So I asked people in my Discord server about it and got the opinion of someone in the comments on the last video. Most of them said to go with the option of them training with Fortune Teller Baba. That's what I'm going to do. Originally, I was going to make this part all about her training and save the Tien Shinhan saga for the next part, but I changed my mind. I mainly did this because there isn't a lot I can go into detail with about Fortune Teller Baba's training with how I planned for her to train them. For her training, while she might teach them the basics of magic, I don't see Goku and Chi-Chi focusing on that too much. They'd likely be more invested in the martial arts part of things in this timeline, so their major training under her would involve her bringing various fighters back from Otherworld for them to train with, which, this is the main reason I decided not to make this a full part, since we don't know many fighters in Otherworld that they could train with. Anyway, the main fighter I had in mind for them to train with was Master Mutaito. Training with him can also overlap with Baba's magic training, as on the Dragon Ball Wiki. It lists the evil containment wave as a magic technique. I never really thought about that, but it makes sense that it uses magic. After all, it has to use the seal to work, and it was able to seal away someone like Zamasu, who typically could use the Kai Kai to teleport anywhere. I don't think a basic key technique would have been able to do that, so it makes sense to me that the evil containment wave is a magic technique instead. In the original series, it took Tien a day to learn this technique. While Goku and Chi-Chi are weaker than him as of right now, they have 3 years to practice it until the next World Martial Arts Tournament, so by the time of that tournament, they likely would have it mastered. Also, even with training with Baba, I don't think they'd stay with her for the entire 3 years. There likely wouldn't be enough worthwhile fighters to bring back from Otherworld for them to train with, since Baba can only bring each person back for a day. Basically, once they finished training with all the people she brought back from Otherworld, they'd probably go on to running around the world. Anyway, it's hard to guess how long they would be training under Fortune Teller Baba for, but I'd estimate about 6 months. This way, they can just learn the basics of magic and learn techniques from fighters from Otherworld. For the other 2.5 years, they would be running around the world to train, just like they did once before. So, their training kind of ends up being a combination of the two options that I was torn between earlier. As a side note, Goku might also work on trying to control the Great Ape form like Bardock suggested him to. They would probably make sure to do this somewhere deserted and when Chi-Chi isn't in the immediate vicinity so that she isn't put into danger. Like how Yajirobe cut off Vegeta's tail even though he was far stronger than Yajirobe, he could plan to have Chi-Chi nearby as a backup plan to cut off his tail. This way, she could stop him if he went on a rampage that would harm the planet or anything like that. If he would have complete control over his Great Ape form by the end of their training is hard to say, but he at least has a better handle on it by the time of the next tournament. 3 years after the last tournament have now passed, so it's time for the 22nd World Martial Arts Tournament. With Krillin and Bulma having been running around the world for the past 3 years, they wouldn't arrive at the tournament grounds by plane like Roshi did. Roshi is likely the first one to arrive in this timeline, since he was the only one to take the plane. After entering himself in the tournament under the name Jackie Chun, he goes on to wait for the others to arrive. Though when Master Shen confronts him, along with Tien Shinhan and Shatsu, none of his students are there to get immediately involved in their rivalry. Mercenary Tao was also likely there alongside Shen, as he wasn't seemingly killed in this timeline. Krillin and Bulma would likely be the first ones to arrive, as they probably would have left earlier so they didn't risk being late like Goku almost was. As usual, Goku and Chi-Chi would arrive at the tournament grounds with about a minute to spare. All of them would go to sign up for the tournament, minus Bulma. Like I mentioned in previous parts, even though Bulma has trained in this timeline, she is more interested in going on adventures than she is in fighting. She only participated in the 21st World Martial Arts Tournament since it was part of Roshi's training. Once they are all signed up, they would spend the time before the preliminaries catching up with each other. Like I hinted at before, Krillin and Bulma might have actually gotten into a romantic relationship together by this time. After all, Krillin and Bulma would both be in their late teens at this point. Being essentially alone together for the last 3 years also would have given time for something like that to form in between them. I also don't see Krillin not shooting his shot when he had the chance, and Bulma still had the interest in finding the perfect boyfriend. Perhaps she just thinks the perfect guy for her in this timeline is Krillin. Their relationship wouldn't have the same issues that hers with Yamcha eventually did, after all, as I don't see Krillin cheating on her. Now, as for Goku and Chi-Chi, I could see them being in a similar boat in this timeline when it comes to relationships, especially after getting Bardock's blessing to pursue a relationship with his son. I think that would have just motivated her even more. Even Goku might develop an interest in her on his own, since he has been spending a lot of time with her over the last 6 years. By the time of this tournament, it's likely that they would have started dating as well. Anyway, back to talking about the tournament, since the preliminaries would be about to begin. Normally when I've been doing these tournaments, I've been expanding the tournament by one round to have 16 fighters. There's no need for me to do that in this tournament, though. With the moon not having been destroyed by Jackie Chun in this timeline, since Goku didn't turn into a Great Ape in the last tournament, Man-Wolf wouldn't be a participant in this tournament. He said that he only participated in this tournament to get revenge on Jackie Chun. Also, with the heroes having never interacted with Yamcha, he also wouldn't be here in this tournament. So, there are 2 empty slots in the tournament that could be filled by Chi-Chi and other fighters from their preliminaries. I'd probably make King Chappa the other fighter that goes on to the final tournament, since he was the only fighter who normally didn't make it through these preliminaries that we know anything about. Once the preliminaries finally begin, there'd still be a lot of talk when Jackie Chun enters the ring. Since he was the winner of the last 2 tournaments in this timeline, the preliminaries basically go the same way they always do, minus Goku fighting King Chappa in the preliminaries, so I have him going on to the main tournament in this timeline. Normally, in the manga, Tien got into a small dispute with Yamcha, but that obviously wouldn't happen in this timeline. This little dispute might happen with Chi-Chi in this timeline instead, as even though she has her emotions under control, she can still be a bit feisty. As usual, Tien still has Shotsu rig the drawing of the lots for their placement in the tournament bracket, without Man-Wolf being there. King Chappa is put against Jackie Chun instead, and without Tien having a dispute with Yamcha, he has Shotsu put it so that his match is against Chi-Chi. This means that the matches of the quarterfinals are as follows. Match 1 is Chi-Chi vs Tien, Match 2 is King Chappa vs Jackie Chun, Match 3 is Krillin vs Shotsu, and Match 4 is Goku vs Palmput. Before getting into the matches of the tournament, I briefly want to discuss how strong the heroes would be at this point. For Goku and Chi-Chi, when Goku ran around the world in our timeline, his power level went from 126 to 180. That's about a 1.42 times boost, but I rounded it up to a 1.5 times boost since they also trained with Baba and fighters from other worlds in this timeline. So, his power level would go from 199 to 299. As for Chi-Chi, if she got that same boost, her power level would go from 172 to 258. Then as for Krillin and Bulma, normally Krillin's power level went from 22 to 113 between the 21st and 22nd World Martial Arts Tournament, which is about a 5.13 times boost. If he got that same boost in this timeline, his power level goes from 48 to 247. With Bulma, I gave her half of that boost. She would be more focused on exploring the world instead of training like Krillin is. So, her power level would go from 55 to 141. Something to briefly mention is that Tien and Shotsu would likely be slightly stronger in this timeline as well. I mentioned in the last part that Goku and Chi-Chi only knocked out Mercenary Tao. Since he wasn't seemingly killed, he got to train Tien and Shotsu for longer. This likely wouldn't make them extremely stronger, but it would have a slight effect on their power level. Normally during this saga, Tien had a power level of 180 and Shotsu's power level was 60. I made Tien's power in this timeline 200 and I made Shotsu's 67. with Tao known to be alive by them in this timeline. This also makes the fights during this tournament more about the rivalry between the Turtle School and the Crane School instead of it being about revenge. Now, we can finally get into the matches, with the first match being between Chi-Chi and Tien. With the power levels I mentioned earlier, this would put Chi-Chi far above Tien. Instead of this being a fight where she isn't doing much to him like Yamcha was, it would be reversed. Tien would still get hits on her, but they wouldn't really be doing anything to her. Even if he tries to use some of the techniques Mercenary Tao got to teach him in this timeline, she would be able to block or dodge them from having seen those techniques before. Like he did in the fight against Goku. He might try using things like the Four Witches technique, but it'd be to no avail. Normally, Ken would have shots to secretly intervene in the fight when Tien seemed to be losing. Depending on what magic they've learned from Fortune Teller Baba, they might have learned things that can help resist against magic being used on them, such as shots as telekinesis. So even that might not work to try and give Tien the edge. This essentially means that their fight would soon end with him being effortlessly knocked out of the ring. Even with Chi-Chi having that feisty side, as a child, she was still shown to be sweet and kind, but she goes to congratulate him for the good fight and talk to him after the match. He treats him with kindness instead of being arrogant or mocking. This would catch Tien off guard, since he was used to how Tao and Shen seemed to believe that the weak deserved to be scorned. Instead of it being Roshi the first plant the seeds of doubt into his mind, it would be Chi-Chi in this timeline. It doesn't mean that he wouldn't have a similar talk with Roshi as he normally does, as I could see Roshi going to approach him after the fight as well. Roshi would probably notice the doubt that started to form in his mind after his fight with Chi-Chi. After all, not only was the Turtle School not completely like he was taught, but they were actually kind to him. So, Roshi might still have a talk with him where he mentions that Tien just isn't cut out to be evil. Before Tien could press him more, Jackie Chun would be called to the ring, so Roshi would give an excuse like having to go to the bathroom and hurry off. The next match is between King Chappa and Jackie Chun, so once Roshi finally got into disguise and arrived at the ring, this fight would begin. It would be like a rematch of the 20th World Martial Arts Tournament, as they fought in the championship match back then. Even with the estimated power level of 140 that I came up with for King Chappa, he wouldn't stand a chance against Jackie Chun in his full power, so that match would go exactly the same as back then. He wouldn't be able to land a hit on Jackie Chun, and he would be easily knocked out of the ring. There isn't too much of a reason to go into detail in the third match between Krillin and Shotsu. The main difference is that it would be a far easier fight for Krillin, since he is far stronger than normal in this timeline, while Shotsu is only slightly stronger than normal. Ken might try to command Tien to secretly intervene in their fight like he did with Shotsu, but with the seeds of doubt already planted in his mind, he might refuse. And Shen and Tao try to threaten to kill him for his disobedience like he did with Shotsu, Roshi would still intervene by using a Kamehameha to send them both flying. Regardless, the fight between Krillin and Shotsu still ends with him distracting Shotsu with math problems. This way, he's still too distracted to use his telekinesis and is knocked out of the ring. There isn't any reason to go into a lot of detail about the fourth match between Goku and Pomput either, as Goku would still defeat him in one hit. Once that fight is over, this brings us to the semi-final round, with the first match of it being Chi-Chi versus Jackie Chun, and the second match of it is the same as it was in the manga, which was Krillin versus Goku. When Chi-Chi and Jackie Chun enter the ring, she might comment on how she has been waiting for the chance to face him again since she lost to him 2 tournaments ago, but she also would be respectful about it, as she would likely mention how she took his advice about getting her temper under control into consideration. When he tells her to show him how far she's come, the fight starts off with them going blow for blow at first. He might hold his own through technique and strategy at first, but Chi-Chi far outclasses his power level of 180 at this point, so most of his techniques and attacks would be resisted or countered by her. He'd likely acknowledge to himself that he can't win this fight, as he's been surpassed in strength. Instead of dragging out this fight, he'd test her with one last technique, the Kamehameha shot at his full power. Even then, he'd be able to overpower it with her own. After this, like he did with Tien, he would jump out of the ring. He isn't forfeiting because he's tired, though. He forfeited because he realized the next generation is turning out fine, and that his students won't just become slackers by winning this tournament like he feared they would in previous tournaments. He'd likely tell her something about being proud of her, and to go show the world what kind of warrior she has become. Him forfeiting would confuse her at first, but she'd likely realize it was a gesture of respect, so she'd likely bow deeply and thank him, though him forfeiting wouldn't just be a shock to her, but to the tournament announcer and the crowd as well, since he was the 2-time reigning champion at this point. Anyway, this brings us to the next match between Krillin and Goku, With them both being massively stronger in this timeline, their fight likely goes the same that it normally did, since the gap in strength between them is about the same. About the only difference is that Krillin wouldn't try to exploit his tail as a weakness, since by the time Krillin met him, that weakness was already overcome. Regardless, their fight still ends with Goku going fast enough to seemingly vanish, as he then knocks Krillin out of the ring. Now that that fight is over, it brings us to the final match, which is between Chi-Chi and Goku. Once they enter the ring, she might briefly tease him not to go easy on her just because they're dating, though he would say something along the lines of that he wouldn't dream of it, since he wants to see how strong she is now. He'd start this match off strong, possibly catching him off guard with her speed or precision, though she has also been training alongside him for years to this point, so she'd likely be able to better predict his moves than any other previous opponent. However, he'd likely be able to predict her moves like that as well. In terms of raw power, he has the edge, but she could hold her own at first by using her finesse to counter some of his moves, potentially with a few well-placed ki blasts. After this, they finally decide to go all out. She briefly catches him in a tight spot with a flurry of rapid strikes. He narrowly escapes this barrage of attacks, but he isn't unscathed from it. Just like how Roshi used a Kamehameha at the end of his fight against Chi-Chi, Goku might try the same thing. With them being close in power, this would be a nail-biter, as they get into a beam struggle. Though, with him having the slight advantage in power, she is eventually knocked just out of the ring. Once he is declared the winner, he would offer her a hand to help her up, as he also congratulates her on the good fight. While they stand hand in hand in the ring, the crowd erupts in cheers. Regardless, now that the tournament is over, they would all plan to go out to dinner to celebrate after Roshi suggested it. He would also invite Tien and Shotsu to come along, and they'd likely agree to it since the seeds of doubt had started to be placed into their minds. Without Goku having forgotten anything behind, as he doesn't carry the 4-star Dragon Ball in this timeline, no one has to go and retrieve it for him, so they would all go to dinner together without anything interrupting them, at least for now. While the heroes were out at the restaurant eating, back at the tournament grounds, something would be happening there. A mysterious creature would have attacked, but instead of Krillin dying like he normally did, that wouldn't happen here. After all, he is back at the restaurant with the rest of the heroes. Instead, it's likely someone else that was in the tournament that is killed first, such as Palm Put. Regardless, the restaurant the heroes are at seemed to be nearby the tournament grounds, since in the manga, the way it looked to me, anyway, the restaurant was right beside the entrance to the tournament grounds. The point is that they'd probably hear the commotion, so they would rush over there to see what is happening. After finding Palm Put dead, they would be told by the tournament announcer that a monster attacked them and took the tournament roster. Goku wouldn't be emotional about this like he was about Krillin's death, so he doesn't rush off like he normally did. Bulma still finds the symbol the monster left behind, and after Roshi looks at it, he still realizes it as the seal of Demon King Piccolo. He then explained to them the story of King Piccolo and how his master, Mutaito, sealed him away. Though this is when Roshi might be surprised, as Goku and Chi-Chi would then reveal that they had trained with Mutaito. They would explain that fortune teller Baba brought him back for a day, so they got to train with him, and he had shown them the evil containment wave. Since he only had a day to train them, they wouldn't have mastered it in that one day. But they did have the last couple of years to keep practicing it. This means that they should be able to use it against him with no problem. Something else to mention is that the heroes wouldn't know that King Piccolo was collecting the Dragon Balls, so there wasn't one with him at the tournament grounds to be stolen. Speaking of the Dragon Balls, on King Piccolo's ship, he would be talking with the Pilaf gang about how he planned to wish for eternal youth. King Piccolo would also mention that he planned to show all martial artists what real power is. Back with Roshi, he'd likely realize that they plan to use the tournament roster to hunt down everyone on it. Since they are all on that list, it would only be a matter of time before they show up to kill them. For now, they'd return to Kame House so that they could devise a plan for what they'll do. Back with King Piccolo once more, the unknown monster from earlier would arrive. This would turn out to be Tambourine, and after giving King Piccolo the tournament roster, he is ordered to kill everyone on that list. The Pilaf gang would recognize the pictures of people like Bulma and Goku, so they would mention that they are the strongest people they've ever faced. King Piccolo also creates another demon to focus on collecting the Dragon Balls, which ends up being Symbol. Tambourine normally chose Nam to be his first target, but he might choose Goku or Bulma in this timeline. Of course, Bulma's listed address would be Castle Corporation and Goku's would be Mount Paozu. Assuming he goes to Castle Corporation first, he obviously wouldn't find Bulma, but he'd likely end up killing her parents. Back at Kame House, they'd likely see a news broadcast about Castle Corporation being attacked and about what happened to Bulma's parents. This would obviously upset her, so Krillin would try to comfort her while they devise a plan. Roshi would still point out that they can't get a copy of the tournament roster since it was private, so so they wouldn't know where any of the other martial artists live. Tien would also point out that they can't have the media broadcast a warning or the world would panic. Normally Roshi asked Bulma to make a new Dragon Radar, but that wouldn't happen here since they don't know King Piccolo is gathering the Dragon Balls yet. Meanwhile, Symbol would still find Yajirobe and attack him for his Dragon Ball. As usual, though, he's still sliced in half by a sword and then eaten. Normally when King Piccolo sensed Symbol's death, he sent Tambourine to go find him. However, Tambourine would tell him that he'd head there soon, as he'd just arrived at Mount Paozu for his next target. Tambourine also wouldn't be able to find Goku, since he isn't there, though he would run into Gohan. From the power level estimates I've seen, Tambourine had a power level of around 160. As for Gohan, as I mentioned in the previous part, I estimated his power level to be around 168. This would be a close fight for him, but he'd likely manage to finish off Tambourine with a Kamehameha. Gohan would likely decide to go and find the heroes, as he would have found the tournament roster with them in it on Tambourine's body. So, at Kame House, their meeting is likely eventually interrupted by Gohan, as he would arrive to explain that he was attacked by a weird monster. He would also say that he managed to kill it, but just barely. They'd likely be able to piece together that this monster was the one going around killing martial artists, as Gohan would have found the tournament roster on his body. With them now having that, they would be able to find the other martial artists on the list. Back with King Piccolo, he just sensed Tambourine's death right after it happened. Normally after two of his children died is when King Piccolo decided to fight the heroes himself. It's been shown that King Piccolo was able to sense power levels, and since the heroes don't have Dragon Balls to see on the radar in this timeline, he'll likely search for the highest power level he can find. When he arrives at Kame House, the heroes would step out to confront him. It's likely they'd get into a group fight with him, especially considering Bulma would be rightfully angry with him for her parents being killed. Goku, Chi-Chi, and Krillin all have higher power levels than what King Piccolo does, so he wouldn't stand a chance against all of the heroes working together. Of course, Goku would be beating him in a fight, especially when fighting alongside Chi-Chi and the others. While they could kill him, I think they would try sealing him away after he is weakened enough. Since Goku, Chi-Chi, and Roshi all know the evil containment wave in this timeline, they'd work together on using it to seal him away. He'd likely be sealed in a rice cooker yet again, as they would have grabbed one from Kame House. After he is sealed away, Roshi wouldn't have died in this timeline, since he also had the help of the others to use the evil containment wave, so all the strain of the technique wasn't on him alone. Since King Piccolo's airship would still be above Kame House, they'd likely raid it as well and take out the remaining inhabitants, which would be Piano and the Pilaf gang. Piano is likely killed by them. I don't think they'd end up killing the Pilaf gang. Anyway, Roshi would still be the one to hide the rice cooker again, though he'd likely try to hide it even better than he did the first time. Now that the fight with King Piccolo is already over, they likely set out on recovering the Dragon Balls, so that they could wish back anyone King Piccolo and his henchmen killed, with all of them working together. It wouldn't take them long to do this. Also, this is when they would meet Yajirobe for the first time, since he normally had a Dragon Ball during this saga. Anyway, Shenron is soon summoned and their wishes granted. Once that wish is completed, and they are all celebrating the defeat of King Piccolo, I could see Korin summoning Goku and Chi-Chi back to his tower. In the manga, he mentioned that those he deems worthy to meet the Guardian of Earth can do so, and he'd likely consider these two to be worthy of that, and give a quick goodbye to everyone else as they then made their way to Korin's tower by using the Flying Nimbus. After they finally arrive, Korin would have them head to the roof of his tower. Once there, as Goku uses Power Pole to connect his tower to the sanctuary above. As usual, when they arrive up there, they have to present the bell Korin gave them to Mr. Popo. He then introduces himself and lets them know that to meet Kami, they'll have to pass the test of fighting him. Even with them being stronger than him, this fight would be hard for them. He'd point out that even though they are strong, they don't use their strength well. Even when they had the idea to try and train on the lookout to beat him, he would point out that they aren't used to the thin air up there and that they make wasted movements. He would also say that they need to be as quiet as the sky and strike as quick as lightning. Even after being told this training could take years, they still decide to do it, though from inside the sanctuary, they hear Kami's voice saying he likes them. Kami would reveal himself, and even though they mistake him for King Piccolo, they'd let him explain instead of attacking right away, since they are more level-headed in this timeline. They eventually set out to training under Kami together, with them being made to start with training their spirit. This training might be tough for them, but they'd stick it out together, even if it does take years to train with them. 3 years soon pass once more, thus bringing us to the time of the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament. Master Roshi is still the first one to arrive, but he soon notices that everyone else is late. Bulma and Krillin arrive next. As they briefly catch up with Roshi, Goku and Chi-Chi are the next ones to arrive, and everyone is shocked about how much Goku has grown, minus Chi-Chi, of course. While they are catching up, this is when Tien and Shotsu would arrive. Even though they didn't find out Roshi's identity as Jackie Chun in this timeline, he still chooses not to enter the tournament, since he knows he doesn't stand a chance against them anymore. Something to briefly mention is that Kami normally took off Goku's tail during the last 3 years, but since Goku has better self-control and knows not to look at the full moon in this timeline, Kami wouldn't have had to do that. Another thing to mention is that since Piccolo Jr. wasn't born in this timeline, there isn't a real major threat in this tournament. The biggest challenge might be Mercenary Tao, but he would be even weaker since he had no reason to be turned into a cyborg in this timeline. Regardless, when they go to draw lots for the preliminaries, Tien still has Shotsu manipulated so that none of them are in the same block. I'm also going to briefly talk about how strong the heroes would be at this point. Assuming Krillin, Tien, and Shotsu got the same boost in power they normally did from training with Korin, Krillin's power level would go up to 316, Tien's to 256, and Shotsu's to 86. As for Goku and Chi-Chi, I gave them a slightly higher boost than Goku normally got from training with Kami, as they'd also be training together during this time. With this boost, Goku's power level would be 374 and Chi-Chi's would be 323. When wearing weighted clothing, Goku's would be 296 and Chi-Chi's would be 255. Now as for the preliminaries, they roughly go the same as usual. The only major difference in them is that Yamcha isn't present and that the disguised Kami isn't present. Since Piccolo Jr. doesn't exist in this timeline, Kami had no reason to disguise himself and enter the tournament. Since King Chappa is the only other fighter we knew in these preliminaries, I made it so that he made it to the final tournament once more. The other matches generally go the same as they usually did. Shotsu would make it through the preliminaries this time, since he can fill the gap left by Yamcha's absence. Also, without the disguised Kami being in the tournament, this means that Yajirobe would pass through the preliminaries this time as well. When the lots are drawn for the main tournament, it ends up with the fights being as follows. Match 1 is Mercenary Tao vs Tien, Match 2 is Goku vs Chi-Chi, Match 3 is Yajirobe vs Krillin, and Match 4 is King Chappa vs Shotsu. For the first fight, when Tao and Tien both enter the ring, the fight would start the same as usual, though Tien would be even stronger in comparison to Tao this time, both because Tao wasn't strengthened and because Tien is stronger in this timeline. This also means that Tien's chest isn't slashed and scarred, since Tao obviously couldn't have a hidden weapon in his arm. Tien would still easily take his Super Dodan Ray head on and then effortlessly knock out Tao with one hit. For the next fight, which is between Goku and Chi-Chi, it would kind of be like a rematch of the last tournament's finals. It would likely start off in a similar way, though they'd also both be utilizing the fighting style Kami had taught them. Chi-Chi would likely tell him not to expect the fight to be the same as it was last time, but he'd only grin, as he was looking forward to their fight. Regardless, at first, they'd be perfectly blocking each other's attacks, no matter what they are. After all, they've been training together for many years at this point, so they know each other well. Though this back and forth fight of predicting each other's moves wouldn't give anyone the upper hand at first. Eventually, however, Chi-Chi catches him off guard by using a key technique she developed in secret when they were training under Kami. I imagine this technique to be something like the Maiden's Blast technique we've seen Videl and Pan use in Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2. Of course, this catches Goku by surprise, so he is hit by the brunt of the blast. She follows up on this by pushing him towards the edge of the ring with a barrage of attacks. Since he is close to being eliminated, he'd start to focus more and take the fight more seriously. This causes the tide of the fight to turn, as Goku begins pushing her back, thus giving himself some breathing room. He doesn't let up, though, and when they eventually clash mid-air again, he uses all of his power to knock her out of the ring. Like last time, he goes and helps her up, as they hold hands in the ring once more. Goku then does something that catches her, and everyone else off guard. He proposes to her. He didn't need to be reminded of his promise this time, as he remembered it, and they've been dating for years now. So, he'd ask her if she wanted to get married after this tournament, and she'd say yes, of course. The crowd likely erupts in cheers, both because of the good fight and the romantic ending. The next fight is the third match, which is between Krillin and Yajirobe. From the few times we've seen Yajirobe fight, when he couldn't use his sword, to me it looked like he relied on brute force. So, when faced up against the vast array of skills and techniques known by Krillin, he wouldn't stand a chance. He is also far overpowered here, so he would be knocked out of the ring quickly. This then brings us to the fourth and final match of the first round, which is between King Chappa and Shotsu. While King Chappa is physically stronger than Shotsu, I still think he would lose this match. As far as we know, he doesn't have any ability that would be able to counter Shotsu's telekinesis, so after holding him in place with his telekinesis, he would easily be able to knock him out of the ring. Now that their fight is over, this makes the matches in the semifinal round as follows. The first fight is Tien vs Goku, and the second fight is Krillin vs Shotsu, when Tien and Goku enter the ring. This would be the first time they fought in this timeline. Even then, their fight would go roughly the same as it did in the manga. Tien would still be getting some good hits on Goku until he finally removes his weighted clothing. He still resorts to trying his multi-form technique, but Goku still noticed the weaknesses in his technique. Goku would point out that he relies on his eyesight too much and that his power was split into force when using this technique. But regardless, Goku easily knocks him out of the ring. Then as for Krillin's fight against Shotsu, it would likely have some similarities to his fight with him in the last tournament. We don't know if Shotsu ever tried learning math to get over that weakness that Krillin exploited. If he didn't, it's likely he is defeated in the same way as he was in that tournament. Even if he did learn math to get over that weakness, it's likely that Krillin would still win. I think he would have used something like the afterimage technique, and once Shotsu fell for it by trying to use his telekinesis on the afterimage, Krillin would kick him from behind and knock him out of the ring. This makes the final match of the tournament between Goku and Krillin, where they would both enter the ring. Especially with Goku's weighted clothing off, this means Krillin is far outpowered, but he would still give it his best shot. So, when they start fighting, he would try everything he could think of. After images, feints, ki blasts, and maybe even using acrobatics tactically, just to extend the fight and test his power. Goku would be holding back somewhat. When he starts to get serious, he is easily able to dodge and counter Krillin's attacks. Since Krillin is cornered, he might try showing off a new technique, which I think could be something like a scatter Kamehameha. Goku's able to dodge most of it, but he likely takes some hits that tear his gi. Once the dust settles, Goku then uses his full power, and with a fast combo of hits, he easily knocks Krillin out of the ring. It still helped Krillin up after the fight and thank him for the good fight. After Goku is crowned the winner, they likely go out to dinner to celebrate as per usual. Not only would it be celebrating his victory, it would also be a celebration of Goku and Chi-Chi getting engaged as well. Once they finish eating, I think Kami might contact Goku and Chi-Chi telepathically. He would have a proposal for them, so he'd want them to come up to the lookout. After saying their goodbyes to the others, they would head towards the lookout. Once they arrive, I think Kami would try to offer Goku the position of the Guardian of Earth. Normally, Goku didn't accept, but in this timeline, I think he might do so. He's much more responsible and well-mannered in this timeline, but he also still has a strong desire for fighting. So, I think training to become the Guardian of Earth would appeal to him. He'd probably discuss it with Chi-Chi first, though, since he would respect her opinion on it as well. Her only condition would be that she gets to be there with him as well, and Kami wouldn't have an issue with that. After all, in the manga, he mentioned that Goku and Chi-Chi would be like the god and goddess of Earth if he took him up on this offer. Once everything is discussed about it, Goku would officially agree, so he and Chi-Chi would stay up on the lookout with Kami. This is going to be a short part about the time gap that takes place between the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament and the Reddit saga. I wanted to talk about what the heroes were doing in this time of peace, but this time of peace was longer in this timeline. There wasn't a major threat at the last tournament. Something to briefly mention about the World Martial Arts Tournament is that since the ring wasn't destroyed like it normally was after Goku fighting Piccolo Jr., they wouldn't have to take a long break between tournaments to rebuild the arena. So, instead of the next tournament happening shortly before the Cell Games like it normally did, they would continue to happen every 3 years. Regardless, starting with Goku and Chi-Chi, I'm not going to go too much into detail about Goku's training with Kami since I wanted to keep this part short. We also don't know a lot about how Kami planned to train him to be the Guardian, so it would be making up a lot of things. Generally speaking, this training would be teaching him the duties of being Guardian, along with some skills like the Kai Kai. Chi-Chi likely still trains with Goku when he has time, but I doubt she would be getting trained in the same things Goku was. As far as we know, there can only be one Guardian at a time. I personally interpreted Kami's quote about Goku and Chi-Chi being the god and goddess more of a title thing, kind of like how Queen is sometimes a title given to the wife of a king. So, with Goku being busy with training for becoming the next Guardian, Chi-Chi would likely have a lot of free time, though I still think she and Goku would have had Gohan around the same time, so there is a brief point where Chi-Chi would have to take some time off from fighting to recover. I could see her still participating in the World Martial Arts Tournament, though I don't know if Goku would. Most of the Earthlings seemingly don't know about the Guardian, so so Kami might have him start practicing staying out of the public eye sooner rather than later. There might need to be someone to provide for her family as well, so that they could afford things like food for up on the lookout and whatever else. We know Kami didn't need to do this, but he also only needed to drink water because of him being in the Namekian. Chi-Chi finding something to provide for her family would also help with her boredom caused by not being able to train with Goku as much as she used to. Since she enjoys fighting in this timeline, I could see her continuing to fight in the World Martial Arts tournaments. With Goku not being there, she would be the strongest of the fighters there, so she would win them with relative ease. Even though they probably wouldn't need to, Chi-Chi would likely get bored and want to find some way to provide for her family while also passing the time. This could be through the World Martial Arts tournaments and things related to fighting in general. With her having been the finalist in previous tournaments, and with the help of Bulma and Capsule Corporation, it wouldn't be hard for her to promote martial arts classes for other women as well. So, she'd likely start teaching other women self-defense when she has free time from raising Gohan. I don't see her starting her own dojo or anything. These are likely just short-term workshops she teaches. Thankfully, with Mr. Popo and Kami also on the lookout, she would have enough time to do those things. Then when the 24th World Martial Arts Tournament comes around at age 759, she would be the winner of it. While I don't see her getting anywhere near the absurd levels of fame like Hercule did, since he only reached those levels of fame after claiming to save the world from Cell, I could see her becoming somewhat of a minor celebrity. Though I don't see her becoming a household name like Hercule was, she'd likely just be more popular among martial artists. After winning the tournament, I could see her setting up things like appearances at public exhibitions, schools, dojo openings, or even televised specials about martial arts. These are likely set up with the help of Capsule Corporation, so Bulma and her might grow closer as friends, but she might also become a sort of manager for Chi-Chi. Eventually, she could also be featured in things like local magazines or features about women's sports, and even martial arts publications. She might even make an appearance at some televised interviews or some small talk shows. Since she's working alongside Capsule Corporation, she could appear in some local ads for Capsule Corporation or things like fitness gear ads. Speaking about Capsule Corporation, since Bulma was more involved in fighting and adventures in this timeline, they might also begin developing tech related to things like that, so they could start making technology related to expeditions and exploration. Also, since she still enjoys going on adventures at this point, she might lead some of these expeditions herself. As for the fighting side, she likely still trains with Krillin and the others every now and again, but it wouldn't be anything too major. Though through Capsule Corporation, they might start selling things related to fighting as well, like their own brand of sportswear. This could overlap with Chi-Chi's minor celebrity, as she could pick up an endorsement from Capsule Corporation and their sportswear. I think Chi-Chi could also get other minor endorsements as well, such as things like cookware, to relate to her previous goal of wanting to be a housewife. Speaking about the housewife part, when it comes to raising Gohan, his upbringing would likely be a lot different in this timeline. He'd likely still develop his desire to be a scholar. Considering that he would be mostly raised on the lookout, he would likely have access to sources of knowledge from all over the world. Both Kami and Mr. Popo could help teach him as well and provide more hands-on lessons by transporting him to places around the world. Because of being raised around Kami and Mr. Popo, it's likely that he's more disciplined and calmer than usual. Unlike Chi-Chi not wanting him to fight in the actual timeline, since she is still a fighter herself, she would let Gohan train. So, instead of balancing studying and fighting being an issue for him like it was in our timeline, he would learn how to balance them from the start. Before continuing to talk about Gohan, I briefly want to talk about Krillin and Bulma. With them also having been together for years by this point, I think they would have gotten married and had a child of their own around the time Goku and Chi-Chi had Gohan. I flipped the coin to decide the gender of their child, and it chose that they'd have a daughter. For their name, since Krillin and 18's daughter Marin's name were based on chestnuts, and since Bulma's family members' names were based on undergarments, I tried to think of a name that could fit us both. The name I came up with is Sarai, as it works as a combination of the Sarai Asilama chestnut and the Japanese undergarment Shirashi. Personality-wise, I'd imagine her to be curious and inquisitive like Bulma, bold and fearless like both of her parents can be, and loyal and playful like Krillin. I also think she'd have a mischievous side, though she's still good-hearted, so she'd mostly play harmless pranks on others. Though I think she'd be emotionally intelligent as well and could pick up on the mood of others pretty fast. The only reason I briefly wanted to talk about her is because I think she and Gohan would likely become close childhood friends. Especially with Bulma being a sort of manager to Chi-Chi, he'd likely be at Capsule Corporation a lot. With Sarai being mischievous, it wouldn't surprise me if there were times she snuck up to the lookout to see him. They would eventually develop a dynamic sort of like a young adventuring duo. Her chaotic energy and creativity would contrast with his calm and studious nature. Gohan would be the one that keeps them grounded, while Sarai would be the one devising the plans or even tinkering and making some gadgets for their plans when she is old enough to do so. Regardless, there's likely times her entire family would go to visit Gohan and his family up at the lookout, so their families would get a lot closer with each other over the years. Now that 5 years have passed since Goku left to train to become the next Guardian, it is now age 761. With Goku having a brief break from his training, the heroes all decided to meet up at Kame House for old times' sake. Krillin, Bulma, and Sarai are the first ones to arrive, as Bulma then gives Master Roshi tea cakes as per usual. Goku, Chi-Chi, and Gohan all arrive together next, as they use the Flying Nimbus to get there together. This time, no one would be surprised about Goku having Gohan with him, since they had all met him by this point. Unbeknownst to the heroes, out near Spinach Waste, a mysterious pod lands on the Earth. A nearby farmer goes to check it out, but after the alien inside the pod exits it, he tries to shoot this mysterious invader, though his bullet was easily caught and flicked back towards the farmer, killing him instead. Of course, we know this alien to be Raditz, and after the farmer was killed, we checked his scouter. Without Piccolo Jr. having existed in this timeline, the highest power levels he sees on it would be Goku's. So, he takes off flying towards their location right away. I briefly want to talk about how strong they all are by now. Since Goku was training with Kami and Chi-Chi was training others, alongside training with Goku when she could, I gave them both a slightly higher power boost than Goku normally got after this time skip. This brings Goku up to a power level of 524 and Chi-Chi up to a power level of 452. When wearing weighted clothing, Goku's power level is 421 and Chi-Chi's is 363. As for Krillin, I also gave him a slightly higher boost than he normally received after this time skip, since he would have been occasionally training with Bulma and their daughter. With this boost, his power level would be around 348. While I haven't been mentioning Bulma's power level in recent parts, at this time, I'd estimate her power level to be around 189. And as for Gohan and Sarai, this is where I struggled more. Normally Gohan had a power level of 1 that went up to 1307 when enraged. I plan to give him a power level of 10 after getting to train with Goku and Chi-Chi in this timeline. Where I struggled was with how strong to make him when enraged. I wasn't going to give him the same multiplier as the original, since that did make his power level over 13,000 at this time, and I don't see that happening. Instead, I just decided to make his enraged power level an even 1500, since it's slightly stronger than he originally was without making him stronger than Raditz. Though a power level of 1500 is close to Raditz's full power. For context, the most recent statement given about Raditz's power level was in an info card about the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, and it said Raditz had a power level of 1600. Anyway, as for Sarai, I figure she'd be roughly equal to Gohan, because she'd have a power level of 10 as well. Now, we can get back to discussing the main story. While all of the heroes are catching up outside Kame House, Raditz soon arrives. When he calls Goku Kakarot and says that he looks like his father, there wouldn't be as much confusion in this timeline, since Goku learned his actual name from Bardock back in the Fortune Teller Baba saga. The main thing causing confusion is that Goku wouldn't know who this is. While he does know that he has a brother, he doesn't have any idea what he looks like, though he'd respond by just saying that he doesn't go by that name, and that he goes by Goku. Regardless, Krillin still tries to approach Raditz and tell him to scram, but he is easily sent flying in the Kame House just by Raditz's tail. He would go on to introduce himself and explain that he is Goku's older brother, and this is where Goku would mention something about Bardock having told him about his older brother. This might cause some confusion for Raditz, but regardless, he'd still explain what the Saiyan race does to planets. Though Goku would partially know that already, since Bardock had told him about Raditz serving some tyrant named Frieza. There also wouldn't be the moment of Raditz getting shocked by Goku's lack of a tail, since he kept it in this timeline. Raditz would still make his offer for Goku to come join him in taking out the planet, but he refuses. When he spots Gohan, he automatically pieces together that this is Goku's kid. He still decides to try and kidnap Gohan, as he then easily knees Goku in the stomach, thus knocking him to the ground. Chi-Chi would try to stand in the way, but she is easily knocked aside, too. Raditz then grabbed Gohan and told him to kill 100 humans by this time tomorrow, or he'll kill Gohan. He then takes off with Gohan, leaving the heroes behind to come up with a plan. Goku and Chi-Chi would try to chase after him right away, but Master Roshi stops them. Goku still comes up with a plan of trying to exploit Raditz's tail as a weakness, but just in case any of them do die in this fight, they'd still task Roshi with reviving them with the Dragon Balls. So, Goku, Chi-Chi, Krillin, and Bulma would get ready to chase after Raditz. While Bulma hasn't been fighting recently, I think she would in this case, so she'd also task Roshi with watching Sarai while they're gone. Bulma then gives Roshi the Dragon Radar, as she then leaves with the others. Meanwhile, with Raditz, he ends up throwing Gohan into his pod as per usual. While the heroes are on their way, his scouter picks up a power level of 815 coming from his pod, but he brushes it off as a malfunction. And when the scouter picked up on the power levels of the heroes coming towards him, he didn't actually believe they were coming to challenge him, so this further cemented the idea of his scouter being broken in his mind. However, when the heroes do arrive, we realize that the scouter might not be broken after all. Now the power level of 815 is high, especially for a child. Before the fight begins, Goku and Chi-Chi start with removing their weighted clothing. In total, the heroes' power levels add up to 1,513, so that's just slightly under Raditz's full power that I mentioned earlier. Would it be more of a struggle for Raditz to fight them off, especially with them attacking all at once? But he would just barely manage to do so. During a brief pause in the fight, Goku and Chi-Chi would realize that Gohan was in the pod, so they'd yell to him to hang on, as they're coming to save him. Even when the fight starts again and Goku eventually manages to grab Raditz's tail, Raditz still likely begs for mercy, with Goku being more responsible in this timeline, and with him in training to be the next Guardian. I don't think he would let Raditz go. After all, Raditz threatened to exterminate all of the inhabitants to sell the planet. While he has Raditz down like this, he would have one of the others use an attack to kill him. In this case, I think it would be Krillin with his Destructo Disc. Before Raditz dies, he still warns the heroes about 2 stronger Saiyans that will arrive on the planet in a year. Raditz being killed slightly earlier like this means that they don't fully find out about the boosted Gohan's power from being angry. Regardless, Master Roshi still arrives at the battlefield shortly afterward, having used a capsule for a plane to get there. They soon leave to go to Kame House to come up with a plan. Meanwhile, out in space and on a distant planet, Vegeta and Nappa likely heard everything through their scouters. While they wouldn't have heard about the Dragon Balls in this timeline, they made the decision to go to Earth out of curiosity to see who was strong enough to defeat Raditz. So, they then get into their pods and make their way toward Earth. As for the heroes, after they reach Kame House, they begin discussing a plan for how they'll handle the other Saiyans. Kame would likely teleport down to where they are, as he had an idea for Goku and Chi-Chi to continue their training. He doesn't explain it to all of the heroes, he just transports the 2 of them to King Yema's check-in palace with him. After Kame asks King Yema if they can travel Snake Way and train with King Kai, he would agree and let them do so. The 2 of them then begin to traverse Snake Way together. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the other heroes would be discussing what to do. Without Piccolo there, no one would end up taking Gohan like he did. Instead, he likely ends up training with the other heroes. When Kame arrives on Earth again, he allows Krillin, Bulma, Sarai, Gohan, Tien, Shatsu, and Yajirobe to train up on the lookout. I only think Bulma would agree to train here since the world is in danger. Back with Goku and Chi-Chi, when they eventually arrive at King Kai's planet, he would still have them make him laugh first. After that, their first lesson is still to catch bubbles, so that they can get used to the gravity of his planet. The major thing to mention is that since they are both stronger than they usually were at this point, they would have traveled Snake way faster and caught bubbles faster than Goku did in our timeline. This means that they get to train with King Kai for longer. Also, since they got to learn the Kai from Kame, this means that they don't have to worry about running Snake Way again. They can just teleport back to the Earth when the Saiyans arrive. Also, something to briefly mention is that since the next World Martial Arts Tournament is happening during this year, Chi-Chi likely uses the Kai to go back to Earth for a day just for it. After all, she was participating in these tournaments to make money to provide for her family and because she enjoys it. So I don't see her skipping one, especially since she is able to teleport there and back. Regardless, once she returns to King Kai's planet, her training under King Kai and alongside Goku resumes for the rest of the time until the Saiyans are set to arrive. A little over a year has now passed since Raditz arrived on Earth, and the 2 Saiyans he said would come have just landed in East City. As usual, Nappa destroys the city, but Vegeta tells him to end his destruction there as to not lower the resale value of the planet. After checking his scouter, Vegeta decides that they should head towards the highest power level on Earth, which in this case would be Krillin. Speaking of power levels, so I can get them out of the way sooner rather than later, I'm going to talk about how strong the heroes have gotten after their training. In the case of Goku and Chi-Chi, since they had more time to train with King Kai, I gave them a slightly higher boost than the one Goku got. So, Goku's power level goes from 524 up to 11,600, and Chi-Chi's goes from 452 up to 10,000. Now, as for the heroes that trained with Kame, I gave them roughly the same boost that they normally receive from training up on the lookout. So, this brings their power levels up to these numbers. Tien's is 2100, Shatsu's is 1100, Krillin's is 3000, Bulma's is 1700, and Yajirobe's is 1000. As for Gohan, I kept the distance and scaling between him and Krillin Krillin the same as it was between him and Piccolo. Since his power level when enraged was 4/5 of Piccolo's, that would make his power level 2400, and when he isn't enraged, his power level would be about 1400. This makes Gohan slightly weaker than he was in the actual story, but to me it makes sense, as he wasn't put under as intensive training as he was under Piccolo. As for Sarai, I didn't see her surpassing her parents yet, so I made her power level go up to 1300. Anyway, back to the story. As Krillin, Bulma, Gohan, and Sarai fly to a wasteland so that none of the Earthlings would get in the crossfire of their fight. Vegeta and Nappa soon arrived not long after they got there. For obvious reasons, they wouldn't be talking to Piccolo like they usually did. They likely taunt the heroes. Without Piccolo being there, they wouldn't take off their scalders, so they had only taken them off from knowing that Namekians could hide their power levels. They didn't know that the Earthlings could do the same thing. Regardless, Vegeta then has Nappa plant a Cybermen, but she only had 6 seeds to plant. Tien and Shotzi are the next ones to arrive, and after they do, Vegeta still proposes the game of them fighting the Cybermen one-on-one. As usual, Tien is the first one to fight one of the Cybermen, and he defeats it. When it gets back up, Vegeta still kills it for it having lost its fight. Before the next hero can step up to fight the Cybermen, they are interrupted by the arrival of Goku and Chi-Chi. As mentioned earlier, since they know the Kai Kai, they didn't have to run back across Snake Way, so they arrived on time to fight the Saiyans. It's hard to tell how Vegeta would react to Goku being there from the start, but I see him and Nappa stepping up to take them on. Since Chi-Chi is close to Goku in strength, they'd likely split up, with Nappa fighting Chi-Chi and Vegeta fighting Goku. This would leave the remaining heroes to take out the Cybermen while this was happening. So, I'm going to talk about each of the fights separately, though they would be happening at the same time. With there being 5 Cybermen left, and with there being 6 other heroes, they would mostly get to fight one-on-one, except for Gohan and Sarai, as I think they would end up fighting one together. I'm not going to go too much into detail about each of their fights against the Cybermen. In my opinion, since none of them are as cocky as Yamcha was, they wouldn't let their guards down around the Cybermen, so none of the heroes are killed in their fights with them, but they do kill the Cybermen instead. The only one that might struggle power-wise is Shotzi, but through the usage of his telekinesis, I think he'd be able to hold down the Cybermen and kill it while it's immobilized. Now, as for Chi-Chi's fight against Nappa, it would be similar to when Goku fought him. The major difference is since this fight is happening at the same time as Goku's fight against Vegeta, he can't have Vegeta read her power level on the scouter. So, there isn't a scene like the It's Over 8,000 scene from the manga. Even when Nappa tries using his full power, he still wouldn't be able to land a hit on her. Also, with her being stronger than what Goku was when he fought Nappa in the manga, he likely doesn't have to use the Kaioken. We'd never get the order about leaving Goku to Vegeta since he wasn't fighting Goku, so he never turns his attention to trying to take out Gohan and Krillin. Without the use of the Kaioken, Nappa isn't crippled right away like he normally was. This causes his fight with her to be longer than what his fight with Goku was, but it would eventually end with her using her Maiden's Blast to vaporize him. I only see her killing him like this since they know the Saiyans are a threat to the planet, and they had previously killed Raditz for the same reason. Now that her fight against Nappa is over, I'm going to talk about Goku's fight against Vegeta. Even with Goku being stronger than usual, he is still weaker than Vegeta, so their fight basically starts the same way it usually did. But since none of the heroes have died yet, Goku doesn't have them change location, as there isn't to worry about damaging anyone's body in the fight. Regardless, after their fight begins, the first change is when Goku uses the Kaioken against him for the first time. Normally, it took Goku using the Kaioken times 3 to surpass Vegeta in power. This time, however, he would be stronger than Vegeta when using the regular Kaioken, as it would bring his power level up to 23,200. Of course, this would force Vegeta to use his full power right after Goku finished his assault. With Goku not having to use the higher levels of Kaioken yet, his body wouldn't receive the amount of damage it usually did from the strain. Vegeta still goes to use the Gallic Gun, which this might push Goku to have to use the Kaioken times 3. From power scaling I've seen, they've estimated Vegeta's Gallic Gun to be anywhere from 24,000 up to 30,000, which this would be above Goku using the Kaioken, so it did take using the Kaioken times 3 for his Kamehameha to push his Gallic Gun back. As this would raise Goku's power level to 34,800. Around the time of their beam struggles when Chi-Chi's fight with Nappa ended, Since Vegeta still said the part about turning Goku into ashes alongside the planet, she likely jumps into the fight as well. Assuming they both use the Kaioken times 3, this would make their combined power level 64,800. As for the blast Chi-Chi uses, I think she'd also use the Kamehameha. Like how Goku and Gohan's combined Kamehameha was called the father-son Kamehameha, this would probably be called the husband-wife Kamehameha. Regardless, they would easily be able to push the Gallic Gun back. They wouldn't need to risk the Kaioken times 4 like Goku did. So while their bodies are suffering from the strain, they aren't in nearly as bad of shape as Goku was after using the Kaioken times 4. In the manga, it seems like Goku almost managed to defeat Vegeta with his Kamehameha, as even Yajirobe thought he won. The Vegeta did manage to get off with the blast before it could kill him. This time, however, since he was hit by 2 Kamehamehas that, even when separate, were both stronger than Goku's was in the manga, this combined blast disintegrates him. After Yajirobe comes out to celebrate Goku and Chi-Chi's victory, the others join him since Vegeta obviously wouldn't come back this time. They don't celebrate for long as Goku and Chi-Chi would still need time to rest after this fight. Even if their bodies weren't as damaged as Goku's was in the manga, the Kaioken times 3 still took a toll on them. They would likely be taken back to the lookout to recover until they can get the sensor beams from Korin. During this brief time that they're recovering, Bulma and Krillin would watch Gohan for them. Something to briefly mention here is that without Vegeta and Nappa surviving, and without anyone dying on the Earth, there wouldn't be a reason for them to go to Namek. Personally, I don't think Frieza would investigate the deaths of Raditz, Nappa, or Vegeta either. Especially with there having been no mention of the Dragon Balls, there wouldn't be anything that piques his interest enough to go to Earth. Instead, he likely just sees whatever happened to them as a removal of a thorn from his side and leaves it at that. Also, while Goku does know about Frieza because of Bardock, I don't see him seeking him out. With Goku being more responsible in this timeline, he'd likely take King Kai's warning to avoid Frieza at all costs if he ever even had the idea of fighting Frieza. Anyway, back on Earth, after Goku and Chi-Chi recover, a time of peace starts once more. Chi-Chi goes back to building her fame and participating in world martial arts tournaments, while Goku goes on to finishing his training with Kami to become the next Guardian of Earth. Since the Earth is now in a time of peace once more, Goku gets to finish his training for becoming the Guardian of Earth, with him having saved the Earth 3 times now, from King Piccolo and from 2 Saiyan invasions. I think Kami would finally make Goku the official Guardian. We don't exactly know how they transfer the guardianship from one person to another, as we didn't see how they made Dende the next Guardian in the actual timeline. Regardless of how it's done, once it is finished, Goku officially takes up the role of Guardian. This also means that the Dragon Balls are now tied to his life instead of Kami's. Speaking about Kami's life, there's something I briefly want to talk about. Normally, he and Piccolo didn't merge into one until age 767, which is about 5 years from now. However, I have to change when he passes in order for parts of the story I have planned to still work. Mainly, in order for there to be a dark future timeline like there normally is, Kami couldn't be around, since if Goku still does die from the heart virus, Kami would easily be able to come back as the Guardian. That would mean that the Dragon Balls would still be around, so a dark ending like the future wouldn't happen if he was still alive. It's not completely out of the question for him to die earlier than he normally did. Anyway, from dates listed on the wiki, Grand Elder Guru was born around age 261. He eventually died from old age in age 762. The nameless Namekian, who was the son of Katos and the Namekian that split into Kami and King Piccolo, had to have been around at least by age 261, because the death date given for Katos is age 261. We don't know how ages work for characters when splitting into two like the nameless Namekian did, so I'm going to assume that Kami and King Piccolo were both the same age as the nameless Namekian when he split. So, Kami could have been older than Grand Elder Guru, which means it isn't unreasonable for him to die of old age. Once he does pass away, since the Dragon Balls are now connected to Goku's life, they don't disappear. Regardless of wherever Master Roshi hid the rice cooker containing King Piccolo, he dies as well. Anyway, I don't see Goku doing his duties as Guardian much differently than Kami did, at least for right now, since it's a time of peace. About the only major difference I see happening is that Goku would either observe different parts of the world or use the Kai to teleport to them. Not only would he be doing this to do his duties, but also to learn different fighting techniques from around the world. After all, he saw becoming the Guardian as a way to become stronger, so this would have been one of his reasons to do so. Speaking about getting stronger, from what we know about the Guardians of Planets, they have access to God Ki, so Goku would now have access to that. But does that mean he'd be able to tap into things like Super Saiyan God right away? Well, no, I don't think he would be able to do so. I still think he'd have to train in order to get a better handle on God Ki and how to utilize it before he could do that. When he does realize he has a different type of Ki, he likely doesn't know what it is at first, so he might learn what it's called from King Kai. Regardless, when he does find out he has this type of ki, he'd likely start training to learn how to utilize it. Also, even though they aren't going to Namek in this timeline, he'd likely still have the idea to train in higher gravity after going to King Kai's planet. So, like how Vegeta had Bulma build a gravity chamber in Capsule Corporation, I could see Goku asking Bulma to build one within the lookout for him and his family to train in. The next change in the timeline wouldn't be until roughly 2 years after the defeat of the Saiyans, as a mysterious person arrives on the Earth. At this time, all of the heroes just happen to be at Capsule Corporation, just for a celebration, like a birthday party for Sarai, perhaps. When this stranger arrives at Capsule Corporation, no one would know who she is, so they would all be confused. Before they can ask about who she is, she'd ask Goku to talk to him privately. He'd likely agree, and once they're far enough away so that the others can't hear them, she'd likely start with explaining that she's from the future. When she says that her parents are Krillin and Bulma, that isn't a shock to Goku, but she asks him to keep it a secret so that her birth isn't accidentally altered. She'd also introduce herself and say that her name is Shamiz. As a brief side note, like I did with Sarai, I tried to think of a name that could both fit as the undergarments pun of Bulma's family and the chestnut pun of Krillin's family. Shamiz is an undergarment, and even though I spelled her name the exact same as that article of clothing, I also thought it could be a reference to Shea Tai, which is a Vietnamese fruit cocktail that has water chestnuts in it. Anyway, now that I discussed her name, we can get back to the main story. The rest of her conversation with Goku goes generally the same as Trunks' conversation with him went. She warns him about the upcoming androids in 3 years. She mentioned being the only fighter left and how all the heroes died at the hands of the androids, except for Goku, as he died of a heart virus before they attacked. She then gives Goku the medicine for the heart virus as well. During their conversation, if she mentions Gohan, I could see her mentioning something about Gohan having a blonde-haired form. After all, she'd probably remember Gohan mentioning that he's never seen that form before, so she might have thought that it would be worthwhile to mention to Goku. She then leaves, leaving Goku to explain to the others her warning about the androids. They then set off to begin training for the next 3 years. As usual, though, since the next World Martial Arts Tournament is a year from then, Chi-Chi would still take a 1-day break from her training to go participate in it. Even with Chi-Chi being the World Martial Arts Champion, I don't think it's likely that she'd warn the Earthlings about the upcoming android threat, as to not make the general public panic. Something to briefly mention about their training is that since Goku and his family live on the lookout in this timeline, and since Goku is the Guardian, he would know about the hyperbolic time chamber. This means that he might have the idea for the heroes to train in it earlier than usual. Assuming he tells the other heroes about it, I assume they would train in it as well, since they have to go into the time chamber in pairs, and assuming that they all go into it for the maximum limit of 2 days, I could see Goku and Chi-Chi going in together for 1 day. I think for their second days, Goku would go in with Gohan and then Chi-Chi would go in with Gohan, like she did in preparation for the Saiyan invasion. I imagine that Bulma would train as well since the androids will be the greatest threat to the world so far. So as for Krillin, Bulma, and Sarai, I likely see them splitting into groups the same way as Goku's family did. Lastly, Tien and Shotsu would go into the time chamber together as well. After they exit the hyperbolic time chamber, all of the heroes go their separate ways to keep training, as they then continue to train over the next 3 years. Now that 3 years have passed since the heroes received their warnings about the androids, they made their way towards Amenbo Island. Goku and Krillin, alongside their families, arrived to see that Tien was already there. Like in the original, even though Shotsu trained with him, he might leave him behind as he thought he wouldn't be able to keep up in this battle. Something to briefly mention is that since Bulma would have had Shamiz by this time, he likely left her with her parents to watch while she went to help in this fight. Yajirobe wouldn't have to arrive to give them sensu beans, since Goku just got them from Korin after leaving the lookout. So, the androids wouldn't be able to announce their presence by blowing up Yajirobe's plane like they normally did. Instead, the heroes likely realize that they're there when they start attacking civilians, as they'd hear the panic when it starts. As usual, they'd go into the city and split up while looking for the androids. Without Yamcha being there, the first hero they likely run into this time is Tien. Even with training in the hyperbolic time chamber, I think he'd be weaker than the androids. But that's also something to briefly talk about, as the androids might be slightly stronger than what we're used to. Even though we know that Dr. Gero's spy robots continued to collect data from the fights with heroes after the Saiyans, Gero didn't seem to pay attention to the data they collected. In the original story, he didn't know about the Super Saiyan transformation, even though his spy robots collected data on future Trunks' fight against Mecha Frieza, though I think the computer the data went to is only tied to making Cell, not the androids. The reason they are slightly stronger, however, is because the power of the heroes was stronger in the Saiyan saga than they normally were at that time. So, the androids would have likely been made slightly stronger to reflect that. The heroes do have something else working to their advantage that Jiro wouldn't know about. Since they already used the hyperbolic time chamber, they're also stronger than they normally are by this point. However, one major downside for the heroes is that they don't have any access to transformations like the Super Saiyan transformation. So, in their base forms, they're still likely weaker than what would be needed to defeat androids 19 and 20. Anyway, like Android 20 did to Yamcha, he'd stab his arm through Tien's chest after starting to drain his power. The heroes would notice his ki dropping, so they'd all fly towards where they sensed it at. Before they begin to fight the androids, Goku has Krillin take Tien to give him a sensu bean. Regardless, Goku then suggests for them to move to a deserted location, and Android 20 then destroys the town as per usual. Goku attacks 20 out of anger, but then leads him to a deserted area to fight. The androids only allowed this since they were confident that they could beat Goku. By this time, Tien was healed, so he and Krillin fly after the others to warn them about the androids being able to absorb energy. Anyway, by the time the heroes arrive somewhere deserted, Goku was still out of breath when they landed. Android 20 still talks about their history of being part of the Red Ribbon Army, but since Bulma is there and she recognized Jiro in the original timeline, she'd call him out about his identity. When Goku and Android 19 do begin to fight, Goku would obviously be at a disadvantage without having the Super Saiyan form, so he would be getting beaten down at first. Also, when Tien and Krillin arrive, Tien would warn the others that the android can absorb energy through his hands. His only hope to try and win this fight would be by using the Kaioken. In this timeline, he's only used the Kaioken up to a 3x multiplier before, though the highest we've ever seen the Kaioken go, if including non-canon things like the movies, is to 100 times, which was in the Lord Slug movie according to the Weekly Shonen Jump. Though in this timeline, with him having already gone through the hyperbolic time chamber, he likely wouldn't have to try and push it that high. At most, he might have to push it to a 50 times multiplier, which would theoretically be as strong as the Super Saiyan transformation. On the other hand, though, the strain of this high of a Kaioken multiplier on his body would be immense. While he might have the upper hand at first, the Kaioken will only exacerbate the heart virus. So overall, his fight goes basically like it did in the manga, with him eventually falling into his base form as he clutches his chest. Without Vegeta there to save him, the heroes would look on in horror as Android 19 grips his neck and starts to drain his energy. As usual, the other heroes try to intervene, but Android 20 would get in their way. Instead of it being Piccolo stepping up to fight him, it's Chi-Chi instead. She would have to use a high multiplier of the Kaioken as well to be able to take on the android, so she likely pushes it to the Kaioken times 50 as well. Now, briefly off topic, with what limited information Goku had about the Super Saiyan form from Shamiz, they could have tried training Gohan for it when they were in the hyperbolic time chamber. I don't think they would have achieved it while in there, but they probably would have been close to doing so. Instead of them seeing a glimpse of the Super Saiyan 2 form like they did in the actual story, they probably just saw a glimpse of the Super Saiyan form. Though, I have no idea what they would call the form in this timeline, as they never would have heard Vegeta say the term Super Saiyan, but I'm going to keep calling it that for the sake of simplicity. This is also where my comment on my last video comes into play. So I asked people what they would like to see done, though I also asked the people in my Discord server that as well. At the time of writing this script, the majority of people said to try and do a combination of the two ideas, so that's what I'm going to try and do. Anyway, back to the fight with Goku and Android 19. Since Chi-Chi is distracted fighting Android 20, and the others aren't strong enough to defeat Android 19, Goku is at the mercy of him. The others might try to rush in, but Android 19 would use his other hand to blast him away with a barrage of ki blasts. This could also be the catalyst that pushes Gohan over the edge into going Super Saiyan. After all, in the original series, it took Gohan imagining Frieza killing all of his friends and family. He wouldn't have to imagine that here, as his parents and friends could easily die here. When he starts to get angry, he starts to tremble from rage while watching their fights. A crater soon forms at his feet as pointed stones start floating into the air around them. Even lightning starts striking around the battlefield, causing the others to look towards Gohan out of shock and confusion. As his head jerks back, his hair starts flashing between black and a golden yellow. Eventually, a golden shockwave bursts around him, splitting the sky. After it fades, his hair is now a solid golden color and his eyes are teal. No one would know what's happening to him, but before they could react, he flies into Android 19 and punches him off of Goku. Now, since this is a Gohan that already trained in the hyperbolic time chamber, he would far outclass Android 19 in power. After all, Gohan, after leaving the hyperbolic time chamber and when in his Super Saiyan form, was able to fight Perfect Cell. Anyway, after 19 is knocked away, he tosses Goku over to the heroes. Tien is likely the one to take him to the lookout so that he could give him the heart medicine. Before he leaves, they might tell Tien to take some of the medicine as well just in case it's contagious, like how Piccolo told Yamcha to do that in the original series. Gohan's fight with 19 would be a lot different than Vegeta's, since he would be completely outclassing him. He wouldn't even need to let the android grab him like Vegeta did. Instead, he'd likely just be able to do things like rip his hands off and then destroy him with a blast. Before getting into what happens next, I'm going to briefly talk about Chi-Chi's fight against Android 20. As mentioned earlier, assuming she can push the Kaioken to 50 times, she would be dominating this fight at first. Her main issue would be if she could maintain the strain long enough to defeat him, which I think she might be able to, as the main reason Goku's fight with Android 19 ended early was because of the heart virus. Though she would have to act fast enough to destroy Android 20 before the strain of the Kaioken takes its toll. With how strong they are after training in the hyperbolic time chamber, she could be able to do so. I can see her doing to Android 20 what he did to Tien, punching her arm through his chest. When he falls to the ground, she would blast him at a close enough range that he can absorb it, so he is destroyed, too. After their fight is over, she falls out of the Kaioken and collapses to the ground because of the strain. Since their fights were happening around the same time, around the time she collapses, Gohan was turning into a Super Saiyan. After both of their fights are over, Gohan would return to his base form. Chi-Chi would be given a sensu bean so that she can recover from her injuries. Around this time is when future Shamiz would return from the future, and when she senses the power levels of the heroes, she flies off towards them. Of course, when she arrives and sees the bodies of the now defeated androids, she would be confused. She would ask who they fought, and after they mentioned it was the androids, she would say these weren't the androids from the future. Since Bulma is there, she would be able to help fill in some of the blanks as normal. As mentioned earlier, she knew Android 20 was Jiro, and she'd still talk about his lab being in the mountains by North City. They'd all go to look for it together, so they fly off and search for it while following Bulma's directions. As a brief side note, since this was normally around the time Vegeta found out that future Trunks is his son, I think Bulma would be the first one to realize that future Shamiz is her daughter. Anyway, when they do eventually find Jiro's lab, they're still forced to blast their way inside. Before they blow up the lab, since Bulma is there, she'd likely be interested in looking around to see what they could find. They'd find the pods containing the androids, and future Shamiz would recognize them as the androids from her timeline, minus Android 16, of course. Regardless, they'd also find blueprints for the androids and things like the shutdown remote. Since they also have time to explore, they would find the entrance to the sub-lab. They wouldn't know what the thing containing the embryonic cell in it is. After all, they haven't met him yet, but they would likely learn about him from blueprints and through Bulma searching the computer. Once they are done searching Jiro's lab, they then destroy the lab and androids. I debated on having Bulma try to reprogram the androids, but I decided against it. I only decided against it because I think they would be convinced to destroy them by future Shamiz because of what they did in the future. Also, in the actual story, Krillin seemed to be the only one who wanted to spare them because of his interest in 18. Since he is with Bulma in this timeline, he wouldn't have that interest, so there wouldn't be any protests against destroying them. So, the lab and sublab are destroyed, along with the androids and the embryonic cell inside of it. They also would have gathered things to take with them before destroying it, such as the blueprints and the shutdown remote. After that, they all start heading towards the lookout to go fill Tien and Goku in on about what happened with the androids. On the way there, Bulma would still get the call about the strange vehicle with the Capsule Corp logo on it. When she gets the picture faxed to her and shows it to future Shamiz, she would be shocked, since it is the time machine. The groups would split up, future Shamiz, Bulma, Krillin, and Sarai going to check it out, while Chi-Chi and Gohan went back to the lookout to check on Goku. When they arrive at where the time machine is, their investigation goes about the same as it normally did. The only difference is that since they already learned about Cell, they would likely realize that the shell and larva mold they found is from Cell. Speaking about Cell, he would still end up absorbing people at Gingertown, though with the androids already defeated, when he eventually finds that out, he'd likely decide to go around absorbing people to get stronger and to hide his ki like he did in the original. Because of this, no one would find them until about 3 days later when Goku finally recovers. Since he is able to check on the world like Kami was, he would be able to find Cell in that same way. He would also be filled in on who Cell is from what the others found in the lab. I think Goku would step up to take on Cell, since it's his duty to protect the Earth, and Cell has been out killing people. So, he uses the Kai to teleport to where Cell is, as he then calls out the monster. He'd probably come out holding a person, as he then absorbs him in front of Goku. Some might briefly be confused, since he couldn't read Goku's energy, as unbeknownst to him, he has God Ki. However, Cell would still have the advantage in this fight, as Goku in his base form wouldn't be anywhere near Cell in power. He might try using his Kai to teleport around in the fight like he could with the instant transmission, but that would only work about once to catch Cell off guard. I could see him attempting to use Kaioken, maybe up to 50 times like earlier, but the strain of this would catch up to him fast. Eventually when he collapses from the strain, he'd struggle to catch his breath. Cell would approach him, taunting him, but Goku was tuning this out. He was trying to relax and tap into God Ki one more time, out of desperation. Soon, a blue beam of light surrounds him and shoots into the sky, piercing the clouds. A red aura soon surrounds him after the blue beam fades, but even his red aura soon fades. Once it does, it's now revealed that his eyes and hair are both a crimson color. At first, because of the red aura, Cell might confuse this for the Kaioken. While Goku wouldn't know what to call this form, he would say this is something different. Regardless, Cell would lunge at him, but Goku would easily sidestep this. Any hit he uses against Cell would easily damage him and knock him back. This would obviously infuriate the bug monster, and he wouldn't be able to do anything against him. Eventually, he uses the divine Kamehameha and atomizes Cell, killing him. He then lands on the ground, reverting to his base form now that Cell is killed. Eventually, after returning to the lookout, he would inform the other heroes about the defeat of Cell. They also summoned Shenron while there and revive anyone that was killed by the androids in Cell. The next day, they meet up at Castle Corporation and celebrate the defeat of Cell, though they also give future Shamiz the shutdown remote and say their goodbyes to her. While everyone waves goodbye, she gets into her time machine and returns to the future, as she has saved the past. In the future timeline, the story begins with everyone gathered up on the lookout. Inside of the lookout, Goku was lying there, suffering from a heart virus. No matter what any of them tried to do to help him, nothing seemed to work. He soon passed away, which shocked everyone there. With his death, since he was now the guardian of Earth, the Dragon Balls disappeared as well. 6 months later, the androids appear and begin their onslaught on Earth. With Chi-Chi still being a fighter, she is the first one to die at the hands of the androids. Since Bulma also still fights in this timeline when the world is in danger, she likely also joined the heroes, but she would die as well. Yan is the next one to fall at the hands of the androids. They try to kill Yajirobe as well, but unbeknownst to the androids, he does end up surviving because of Korin giving him a senzu bean after they leave. Regardless, they soon kill Krillin as well, as he was one of the only heroes left. They then kill Shotsu as well before going on their way. With all of the heroes dead except for Gohan, Sarai, and Shamiz, and since they are obviously still young at this time, they fall under the care of Bulma's parents. Before skipping ahead in the timeline, something to briefly talk about is the Lookout. We never know what happens to it in the future timeline, but in order to stop Mr. Popo from being able to tell the heroes about Kami's spaceship and Namek, something would have had to happen to it. Though in the actual story, I think it was destroyed as well, since future Yajirobe was down on the Earth instead of up at Korin's tower for some unknown reason. To me, that seemed to imply that his tower, and potentially the Lookout, were destroyed by the androids at some point. In this timeline, it easily could have been the next target of the androids since they would know that's where Goku and his family lived in this timeline. They might have gone there to try and find Gohan, but they wouldn't be able to, though they do destroy the Lookout before they leave, and they also kill Mr. Popo as well. Also, as a side note, since I hadn't talked about Shamiz's personality in this timeline, I figured I'd describe it here. I imagine her being pragmatic, focused, haunted by events I'll mention later, but also driven. She's also a tactical genius, and secretly, she's idealistic despite the state of the world. 13 years then pass, with Gohan, Sarai, and Shamiz having been defending the world from the androids. Gohan and Sarai have also been the ones who trained Shamiz, since she was an infant when the heroes died. Also, something to briefly mention is that Gohan would have been the first Super Saiyan in this timeline as well. I assume he would have unlocked this transformation after the heroes died in the first fight against the androids, especially since his mom died during that fight in this timeline. Like I mentioned in the last part, they wouldn't know what to call this form of his. Regardless, Gohan is also the only Super Saiyan for obvious reasons. Anyway, one day during their training, they are interrupted as the androids begin to attack Superworld. When all three of the heroes fly there, Gohan now has to keep an eye on both Sarai and Shamiz. Not because Sarai can't handle herself, but since she is just a human, she is weak in comparison to the androids, though she still would participate in the fights against the androids. Gohan would soon go into the Super Saiyan form and begin fighting with 17, while 18 watches. Sarai would likely be fighting Android 17 alongside Gohan, while they told Shamiz to stand back and let them handle it. They seem to have the advantage at first, but 18 soon joins in and the androids push the two of them back. Shamiz would then jump in and begin fighting with Android 18, but she is easily defeated. Gohan and Sarai then save her, but after they are forced to hide behind the debris, 17 and 18 decide to blast the park to draw them out. The heroes end up surviving this, but it comes at a huge cost to the heroes. Gohan and Sarai were forced to protect Shamiz, but they got injured from their blasts. As usual, Gohan lost his arm, but as for Sarai, she faced a much worse injury. She received a spinal injury, paralyzing her from the waist down. I'm not too familiar with the series I'm about to reference, so I don't know everything about it, but I somewhat imagined it like what happened to Batgirl in one of the Batman comics. In it, she was paralyzed from the waist down as well and became the Oracle instead. Regardless, after the attack is over, Gohan gives one of the last senzu beans to Shamiz before he passes out. Shamiz takes both of them back to Capsule Corporation to recover. After they do, Gohan would go back to training Shamiz. Sarai, on the other hand, would have been forced to stop fighting because of her injury. She'd likely be upset and bitter about this, but in the state of the world, she wouldn't have time to mope around about it. Instead, I see her taking on the role Bulma normally had in this timeline, especially since she inherited her intelligence. So, when they eventually had the idea to try and build a time machine, there would be Sarai building it. Anyway, one day, Gohan and Shamiz's training is cut short from the androids attacking Pepper Town. Shamiz would want to go help Gohan in the fight, but just like he did to Trunks, he knocks her out and then flies off. At first, Gohan ends up ambushing 17, and holds his own for a while. Once 18 joins in, however, he's quickly killed by their Excel dance technique. When Shamiz eventually wakes up and finds Gohan's body, she would understandably be upset and enraged by this. When she returns to Capsule Corporation, she has to break this sad news to her older sister. Regardless, 3 years soon pass, and Sarai was already working on the time machine by now. Shamiz would also help her out occasionally, since she has also inherited some of their late mother's intelligence. They would hear the radio announcement about the androids attacking Bridgetown, but unlike Trunks, Shamiz wouldn't rush out there to fight them. Even though it would pain them to just sit by and let the androids continue to wreak havoc, they would know that they couldn't try to fight them or they'd die like Gohan did. After all, Gohan had a transformation far stronger than their base forms, and he still lost to the androids. When the time machine is eventually completed about a year later, Shamiz takes it back to the past along with the heart medicine for Goku. After she returns, another year soon passes, as she then went back to the past again to help the heroes with their fight against the androids. When she returns this time, she would fill Sarai in on everything that happened in the past. She would also show her the shutdown remote, which will make it so androids 17 and 18 shut down so that she can kill them. The radio announcement interrupts them talking about the androids attacking Parsley City, so she sees this as her chance. At Parsley City, she wouldn't give them the chance to do anything to her, as she'd use the shutdown remote immediately. They would deactivate immediately and fall to the ground, so she then blasts and destroys the two androids. With them killed, she would set her mind to one more thing, as she still has another task to do, which is to destroy Cell. We don't exactly know when Cell came out of Jiro's lab, but since the Cell we knew went 4 years into the past and had to revert to his larval state, I assume Cell would still be in Jiro's lab around this time. After all, this is 3 years before Trunks normally fought Cell, so he'd likely still be there. I mainly see her going to destroy Cell early instead of waiting like Trunks did, since she would know she wouldn't be strong enough to fight Cell. It wouldn't take her long to find the remains of Jiro's lab, since she was there in the main timeline, though it would likely be covered in debris by now. When she eventually finds it and uncovers the entrance to the sub-lab, she'd destroy the container that has Cell in it. So, with the androids and Cell now destroyed, the future is in a time of peace. It's also in a time of peace earlier than usual, since this was 3 years before Cell was normally killed. With the future now at peace, Shamiz starts rebuilding the future alongside her sister. Though Sarai is more of a coordinator for the rebuilding process, while Shamiz is the one who is out there physically rebuilding and helping execute her older sister's plans. 7 years after Cell was defeated soon passes, though there are some brief things to talk about before getting into the story. Normally, Orange City was renamed after Hercule because of him claiming to have saved the world from Cell. Without anyone publicly making that claim, that never would have happened in this timeline. Speaking about Hercule, he wouldn't have become a world martial arts champion like he normally did. With Chi-Chi participating in these tournaments to provide for her family, eventually she would have gone against him in the tournament. Normally the tournament Hercule fought in was in age 767. Since the tournaments have still been happening every 3 years, the closest tournament would have been in age 768, so he likely ends up losing to Chi-Chi in the final round, so he never rises to any level of fame. Also, with Videl still being in the junior division of the tournament, she still wins it since none of the heroes would have joined it. Without her father becoming famous, she likely isn't allowed to fight crime with the police like she normally did. The last major thing to mention is that even though Goku is now the Guardian, he might take a slight hands-off type of style like Kami did. Not because he doesn't want to fight, but he would still realize that the villains were coming to Earth because of him. Also, since Gohan had a major part in defeating the androids, he would still somewhat have the desire to pass on the role of protecting Earth to him. Since he is the Guardian, though, he obviously can't completely give up on protecting the planet. Instead, he would just step into the fights if it was absolutely necessary, like in a case where the others weren't able to defeat whoever the villain was. Also, with Goku being alive, Gohan would likely learn how to balance his training and studying, since I doubt Goku would have let him slack on training in this timeline. Anyway, after the 7 years pass, Gohan and Sarai are now in high school, and they likely go to the same school. With how close these two have been since childhood, they likely would have gotten closer than just being friends, so they would have started dating. Gohan probably still would have gotten into acting like a superhero, but Sarai would likely join in on it as well. Unlike Gohan, Sarai couldn't go Super Saiyan to help hide her identity. Instead, they would have gotten costumes made by Bulma earlier than usual. One day, when they were on their way to school, they would still come across a robbery that was happening. They'd quickly put on their disguises, as they didn't thwart the robbers. Without Videl helping the police, they obviously wouldn't run into her there. So they'd go on their way to school. Erasa would likely still invite them to sit by her because of her brief interest in Gohan's appearance. Assuming she's still friends with Videl, they'd meet her, too, but the scene of Erasa talking about Videl's dad wouldn't happen. Without Videl fighting crime and running into them more often, she would never learn that they are superheroes. Regardless, as the next World Martial Arts Tournament draws near, the heroes can still decide to participate in it, even without the motivation of it being to see Goku, since he is still alive. They could decide to join it for old times' sake. Oddly enough, even though the tournaments are happening every 3 years in this timeline, one still would have happened in age 774, which is when the Buu Saga took place. Though this tournament would be the 29th World Martial Arts Tournament. Assuming the rules were still changed for the tournament, when they arrive, they have to use the punching machine to qualify for the tournament. Unlike Hercule, Chi-Chi wouldn't show off and use the punching machine since she didn't have to, as she already had a guaranteed spot in the final 16. For the final bracket of this tournament, I have it written as Sarai taking the place of Goku, along with random fighters taking the places of Piccolo, Android 18, and Vegeta. As for the junior division, it goes roughly the same, except with Shamiz taking the place of Trunks. Since Shamiz is just a human, though, they might make a deal that Goten wouldn't go Super Saiyan. Their fight in the finals would mostly go the same as Goten and Trunks' did, but assuming he still slips up and uses Super Saiyan, he would win this time. Before going further, as a brief side note, I just wanted to talk about Shamiz's personality. I imagine her to be inventive, energetic, and playful, competitive but also sweet, emotionally sensitive, and naively brave. Anyway, with Goten having won the junior division, he would get to fight his mother shortly afterwards, which, she would win that fight easily, as even if he did go Super Saiyan, she would be able to overpower him with her Kaioken. Once their fight is over, there was a 30-minute break before the adult division of the tournament. Unlike Trunks, even though Shamiz is playful, she isn't mischievous enough to suggest knocking out Mighty Mask and taking his outfit like Trunks did. Meanwhile, up on the lookout, Goku would have been keeping an eye on the tournament. When he notices two mysterious people there, he might come to the realization that they're gods like how Piccolo realized it in the actual timeline. He'd be confused why they were there, but he would use the Kai Kai to teleport down there and talk to them. His conversation with them would start the same as usual, with the shorter one saying that he has heard about Goku and that he has a good soul. Like Piccolo did, Goku would ask if he is the Grand Kai. He then reveals that he is the Supreme Kai, though he also asks him to keep his identity a secret for now. Anyway, the first match of the tournament goes the same as it usually did, with Krillin easily knocking Pintar out of the ring. Then in the second match, Shin would easily win, since he is going against a random fighter in this timeline. The third match is between Videl and Spopovich, but without Videl having been trained by Gohan, this would be an even tougher fight for her. So, it still ends with her being tossed out of the ring after Yamu stops Spopovich from killing her. The next fight is between Kibito and Gohan, but it goes the same as it usually does. On the sidelines, Shin would tell the others not to intervene as they need to use Gohan for his plan. Eventually, Yamu and Spopovich hop in to drain his power while Shin uses his magic to hold Gohan in place. After they gather the energy they need, they then fly away. Shin then takes off to track them. He has Goku and the others follow him, while Kibito briefly stays behind to heal Gohan. Sarai also stays behind to make sure that he was okay, and after he is healed, they take off as well and fly after the others. Regardless, on the way there, Shin and Kibito explain to them about Babidi and his plan to awaken Buu. Back at the tournament, I think the only one who might stay behind is Chi-Chi, since she would have faith in the others to handle this threat. This also allows her to continue to participate in the rest of the tournament, which, assuming the remainder of the tournament is changed into the same Battle Royale format, the only fighters in it would be Chi-Chi, Killa, Mighty Mask, Jewel, and the random fighters that took 18th place and Vegeta's place. She is easily the strongest of them, so it wouldn't take her long to defeat them and win the tournament once again. With the tournament ending this early, she'd take off to join up with the others. others. Back with the heroes, Gohan, Sarai, and Kibito end up catching up with the others, but they then hide behind a nearby hill and suppress their ki. Around this time is when Chi-Chi would arrive, so she hides with the others. Soon Babidi and Dabura exit their ship, so Shin then explains to them who Dabura is. After Spopovich and Yamu give Babidi the energy they collected, Babidi still kills Spopovich and has Pui kill Yamu. Babidi and Dabura then notice the others, though after Babidi orders Dabura to go after them, he returns to the ship. Dabura then charges at them, immediately killing Kibito with a blast. Then with his spit, he turns Krillin and Sarai into stone before flying towards Babidi's ship. Shin still warns them not to mess with the statues, but since Gohan was angered by Dabura turning Sarai into one, he flew after him instead of listening to Shin telling them to wait. So, Goku, Chi-Chi, and Shin followed him to their ship, entering it behind them. As usual, the three heroes play rock, paper, scissors to see who gets to fight first, and Chi-Chi ends up winning. When her fight with Pui begins, even without using the Kaioken, she would be beating him easily. So, Babidi transports them to his home planet, and this made him cocky that she wouldn't be able to withstand the gravity of this planet. But she is trained in gravity far higher than it, so she'd still easily defeat Pui by killing him with a blast. After descending to the next level of Babidi's ship, he sends out Yakon for Goku to fight. Just like in the last fight, they are sent to Yakon's home planet, but Goku would still be able to defeat him. Normally, he used the Super Saiyan 2 form to defeat him, but he might do something else here. He'd still start off with showing the Super Saiyan form, since he likely learned how to access it over the last 7 years. However, after Yakon absorbs the light and forces him back to his base form, Goku decides to take it a step further. Goku then turns into his Super Saiyan God form, but Yakon still tries to absorb the light from it. Yakon trying to eat the light of a form this strong would cause him to explode even faster than he did from trying to absorb the light of Super Saiyan 2. With him defeated, heroes then go down to the next level, where Dabura steps out to take them on. This would be in Gohan's advantage from the start in this timeline since he never stopped training. Since he has been training over the last 7 years, it's likely that he unlocked the Super Saiyan 2 transformation as well. Without Vegeta being there for Dabura to notice his wicked heart, nothing interrupts their fight. So, their fight likely ends with Gohan eventually blasting and killing Dabura. From the map of Babidi's ship shown in the manga, there was a 4th level of it before they would have reached the level where Babidi was. We don't know who the heroes would have fought there, if anyone, but they would have been easily defeated by them if there was anyone there. Regardless, when they do reach Babidi, he wouldn't be able to stop the heroes from killing him. After all, Piccolo managed to easily slice Babidi in half in the actual timeline, which would have killed him if it wasn't for Boo healing him. It's likely Shin who blasts and kills Babidi since that's what he came to the Earth to do. With Babidi dead and none of his henchmen left, the threat of Boo being revived is already over. The heroes would likely gather the Dragon Balls to wish back the people killed by Babidi's henchmen, which in this case, it was only Kibito. After he is revived, Shin would leave and likely take the sealed ball with him. It's not likely he would tell the heroes what he would plan to do with it, but if I had to guess, he'd probably ask Beerus to destroy it the next time he woke up. Regardless, after they left, the heroes would make their way back to their homes, since the threat to Earth was solved and the World Martial Arts Tournament was already over. Before getting into the main topic of this video, there's something I briefly wanted to discuss. I finally watched Dragon Ball Daima, so I wanted to make a video about it, but 2 things stopped me from doing this. Because of some of its contradictions with the Dragon Ball Super timeline, it likely would have had to be its own one-off video, as my interpretation is that Daima is a different continuity, sort of like how some people interpret GT. Anyway, with some of the changes that would have happened, Daima would have been cut very short, to the point that it wasn't long enough for its own part. Normally, Goma arrived and confronted Dende for the Dragon Balls, but since Goku is the Guardian here, things would go a lot differently. Degasu wouldn't be able to strike down Goku like he did to Dende. Instead, Goku would easily be able to thwart Goma and Degasu by defeating them before they could even summon Shenron. So, they are sent fleeing as they get back into their ship and return to the Demon Realm. As for what happens to them there, it's hard to say, but without the heroes intervening, I could see either Degasu or Dr. Aransu succeeding in overthrowing Goma, though I think Degasu doing this is the more likely option, since Goma didn't seem to suspect his betrayal beforehand. Also, assuming he still had someone get the evil third eye for him, it would theoretically give him the power to defeat Goma and any other challengers. We don't know what his plans were after becoming the Supreme Demon King, so that's as far as I can go with talking about him. Regardless, with Daima ending that early in this scenario, I'm not able to make a separate video about it. As I said earlier, though, I'm considering Daima a separate continuity from the main series, so none of what I just said really matters for the main topic of this part. Now that I've discussed Daima, I'm going to get onto the main topic of this video. After the defeat of Babidi, assuming Shin still visits the Earth at some point, I could see Gohan and Sarai training with him. I think Shin would have offered to train Gohan as a reward for his help in defeating Buu, and it would likely be Gohan's idea to ask if Sarai could come along since they normally train together. Shin would agree, so they would go to the sacred world of the Kai to train, when they don't have school. Of course, I still see them trying to use the Z-Sword during their training and accidentally breaking it, so the old Kai is released. He would unlock their potential, so both Gohan and Sarai get the ultimate form. Other than that, I don't think much will come from their training with Shin, as I don't see them wanting to stay away from Earth long enough to train with him to the same extent that Future Trunks did in the manga. After they return to Earth, 4 years soon pass, and unbeknownst to the heroes, the god of destruction Beerus wakes up. With his attendant Whis in tow, they visit a planet, and Beerus demands for their best food. The food ends up being too greasy for Beerus' liking, but he liked their drink, so he only destroys half of the planet before going on his way. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Goten has the idea to get Sarai a wedding gift, and with the help of Shamiz, they get her water from a hot spring. As for Goku and Chi-Chi, they would remember that it's Bulma's birthday, so they don't go to King Kai's planet. On the sacred world of the Kai, Shin and Old Kai sense that another planet was destroyed by Beerus. Then out on the planet called Majina, a dinosaur attacks several of the inhabitants until their leader arrives and defeats it. Whis then arrives and asks for the dinosaur so that Beerus can eat it, but even after speaking in the chief's language, it still refuses. Beerus soon arrives and the alien chief transforms, attacking him shortly afterwards. All of his attacks are stopped with one finger. Even the fire breath the chief used against Beerus was to no avail. This caused Beerus to decide he no longer wanted the dinosaur meat. Back on the sacred world of the Kai, they were having tea as they noticed planet Majina's destruction, and the old Kai tells the Supreme Kai that this is Beerus' doing. Back with Beerus, he was watching the destruction of the planet, and he remembers his dream about the Super Saiyan God. On their way back home, Beerus continues remembering about his dream. Back on the sacred world of the Kai again, the old Kai explains to Shin the role of Beerus. This time, however, they don't worry about trying to prevent Goku from fighting Beerus. Since he is more responsible and respectful in this timeline, he wouldn't outright challenge Beerus like that even though he still likes to fight. Without Goku being on King Kai's planet, King Kai never has to telepathically contact them to inform them of Goku's location. Then on Beerus' planet, he asks the Oracle Fish about the prophecy she gave him 39 years ago. At first, she can't remember, but after he threatens to reduce her number of daily feedings, she remembers her prophecy about the Super Saiyan God. Because of the name, Beerus assumes that it's some kind of deity, but Beerus also remembers how he ordered Frieza to destroy planet Vegeta. Regardless, he then has Whis catch him up on everything about Frieza and if there were any remaining Saiyans. Without the heroes having fought Frieza in this timeline, the most notable thing Whis can mention that they did is stop the reawakening of Buu. Whis then tells him about there being one Saiyan that lives on Earth, and that he has 2 children as well. Beerus decides to go to Earth, but before doing that, there's something else he wants to take care of first. Since Frieza is still around, and he originally planned to destroy him after waking up, he would go to do that first. So, he and Whis leave his planet to go find Frieza. Obviously, when they find him, he is easily destroyed by Beerus. It's hard to say for sure what he'd do with King Cold, but I can see Beerus destroying him as well, so he likely finds him and destroys him, too. Now that they are destroyed, Beerus and Whis make their way towards Earth. Speaking of Earth, without Goku off training, he would arrive in time to set sail with the others on Bulma's cruise ship. While everyone else is enjoying the party, Goten and Shamiz go to check out the bingo tournament prizes. Shamiz eventually unplugs the security system and shows Goten the grand prize, the Dragon Balls. Meanwhile, on a nearby island, the Pilaf gang was digging for treasure. When Bulma's ship nears the island, they see the Dragon Balls on their radar, so they make their way towards the ship. Their boat sinks on the way there, but Goten and Shamiz rescue them by throwing down a rope ladder. After they get on the ship, the Pilaf gang is treated to a meal by them. Beerus and Whis arrive on Bulma's ship earlier than usual since they didn't have to go to King Kai's planet first. They might briefly partake in the festivities and try the food. Without Buu being there, Beerus finally gets to try pudding. Regardless, Beerus would confront Goku early on, but he would be much more respectful in this timeline when greeting the God of Destruction. With Beerus being a deity, he'd also be able to notice that Goku has God Ki. So, Goku having God Ki would at least be somewhat of a good sign for him. This would be where Whis explains to everyone what God Ki is. Anyway, as usual, Beerus would ask him about the Super Saiyan God. In this timeline, Goku would have no idea what that is, as he has never even heard of the term Super Saiyan, though he could mention that he has access to some transformations if the God of Destruction wanted to see them. Since Beerus has come there for a fight, and there's a chance of one of his forms being a Super Saiyan God, he'd agree to this. He still might make his usual threat about destroying the Earth if he doesn't get a good fight. In order to motivate Goku to try harder, and to not harm any spectators below. They start with flying high above the ship. Since Goku normally likes testing the power of his opponents, he'd probably start out in his base form. He still requests Beerus to not hold back, but when he does try attacking him, he wouldn't be able to land any hits on Beerus. Even when he goes into his Super Saiyan form, Beerus still effortlessly dodges his attacks. It's highly likely Goku would have achieved the Super Saiyan 2 form by now, so he transforms into it next. In this form, he still can't land a hit on Beerus, and even his Kamehameha fails against him. While we did see Vegeta access Super Saiyan 3 in Daima, I don't think Goku would have done so. Instead of continuously focusing on the Super Saiyan form, I think he would have worked on improving the Super Saiyan God form. So, he goes into the Super Saiyan God form next. This might be when Beerus realizes this is the Super Saiyan God he was looking for, as he'd noticed the vast difference between this form and the other forms Goku already shown him. At first, their fight likely goes the same, minus the part about Goku having to get used to the Super Saiyan God form since he already has. But he also might do slightly better than usual due to being stronger than usual, but it isn't enough to matter. So, their fight essentially goes the same as it did in the anime up until they're above the Earth and Goku normally reverted to the Super Saiyan form. Instead of reverting to that form, as he has better control of the God form, he stays in it. However, he decides to take it up a notch to show Beerus something else. While I didn't mention this in the last part, I think he would have found a form beyond Super Saiyan God at the time of the Buu saga. I only didn't have him show it off in that saga since he didn't have a reason to use a form that strong back then. Normally this would be the Super Saiyan Blue form, but it's possible it might be something slightly different here. From what we know about Super Saiyan Blue, it was achieved by a mortal combining the Super Saiyan God form with the Super Saiyan form. In this timeline, though, Goku actually has a position as a deity, since he is the guardian of Earth. So, it's possible that he achieved the Super Saiyan Rosé form instead, since Blue and Rosé are essentially the same transformation, the difference just being if the user is a mortal or deity. They're likely the same, power-wise. After turning into this form, since I now know that his previous form was called Super Saiyan God, he could decide to call this one something simple like Super Saiyan Pink, as I don't see him choosing something pretentious like Super Saiyan Rosé. Regardless, he blitzes forward, briefly knocking Beerus around with a barrage of attacks. When he regains his footing, Beerus starts to lash out with attacks of his own and block or parry Goku's when he can. While we haven't seen Goku do this before, he attempts to use a Keyblade, sort of like Vegeto's instead of being like Goku Black's. He uses it to slice through some of Beerus' Ki blasts, and he even manages to cut Beerus' cheek with it, though he then tries to use his Kamehameha, and it seems to work at first, but Beerus soon bats it aside. Beerus then starts to use more of his strength to counter Goku, as he uses his own barrage of blows to send him flying. Even when Goku tries to retaliate with a kick, Beerus catches him and sends him hurling down towards Earth. Goku manages to steady himself so he doesn't fall back to the planet, and Beerus floats above him, saying that Goku is running out of tricks. He reveals that he has one more up his sleeve to show the God of Destruction. In the actual timeline, it didn't even take Goku a year to learn how to use the Kaioken on top of Super Saiyan Blue. In this timeline, he had 4 years to try and figure out how to do so. He likely noticed Super Saiyan Pink being a common enough form to allow stacking the Kaioken on top of it, though he was also likely inspired by Chi-Chi continuing to use the Kaioken, so that gave him the idea to try it as well. Regardless, after starting to use the Kaioken, he manages to catch Beerus off guard with another barrage of attacks. They soon begin to clash again, sending off even stronger shockwaves than they did earlier. As the fight goes on, Goku begins to realize that even this level of power isn't enough. He decides to crank the Kaioken up as high as he's willing to right now, which is to the Kaioken times 10. He then rushes at Beerus, punching him in the jaw and sending him back. When he tries to retaliate, Goku vanishes above him, sending him flying downwards. Before Beerus can recover, Goku tries using a Kamehameha with all of the energy he can muster. Beerus is forced to block it, but he is also taking delight in having this good of a fight. They soon begin to trade blows, but Goku's Kaioken starts to flicker as the toll is catching up to his body. After his fist collides with Beerus's one last time, the Kaioken fades and his energy plummets. Even his pink form fades, as Goku starts to fall towards the earth. However, with one last yell, he forces a surge of ki through his battered body. He goes into the Super Saiyan form, and Beerus is surprised to see him being this persistent to keep fighting. Regardless, with how depleted Goku's energy is, all of the attacks he tries are easily swatted away or parried by Beerus. Even when he uses the Kamehameha, Beerus uses his Spear of Destruction in return, so Goku has to use the last bits of his energy to overpower it. Goku then falls to his base form, and with a single flick to the head, Beerus sends him plummeting towards the earth. Chi-Chi catches Goku as he falls back down to Bulma's cruise ship. Beerus lands not long after him, and he then says something about keeping his word and destroying the earth. Goku tries to beg him to stop, but when Beerus charges the blast, he fires it and misses. As usual, Beerus fell asleep, but Whis says that he's gone a bit soft due to spending most of his time sleeping. Whis then leaves with Beerus in tow, and after they're far enough away, he asks him how long he is going to pretend to sleep. Back on Bulma's ship, Goku's body is in an even worse state after this fight, since he used the Kaioken. As for the Pilaf gang, they were likely still on the ship, though I still assume they wouldn't get the Dragon Balls. Even though they weren't used, for a gag moment, I'm going to say that they were so distracted by the buffet that they didn't even notice the bingo tournament happening. So, one of the heroes ended up winning the grand prize of the Dragon Balls, and they'd obviously have no chance to take the Dragon Balls from them. They still leave the cruise ship and row off into the sunset, vowing to get the Dragon Balls next time. Before getting into the main topic of this part, I briefly wanted to discuss Dragon Ball Super in general. A lot of Dragon Ball Super is likely to be skipped, as I don't see Goku ever going to train with Beerus and Whis. Since he is the guardian of Earth, he wouldn't choose to leave Earth for that long to train with the deities. Resurrection F is obviously skipped, since Frieza was erased by Beerus. The Tournament of Destroyers is skipped as well, since without Goku training on Beerus' planet, Champa never thinks to look for the Earth in his universe, so they never agree to have a tournament over winning Universe 7's Earth. Then Goku Black is skipped, too, since Zamasu never would have learned about Goku. Even if he did, Goku has a reason to have God Ki in his timeline, so he wouldn't have the same freakout about a mortal having the power of the gods. The Tournament of Power is skipped, as Goku never would have met Zeno to suggest it. Then Broly is likely skipped, too, since Frieza's henchmen wouldn't be out there looking for anyone to rebuild his force, as Frieza was erased and can never come back. I know I normally don't talk about the manga-only sagas, but I will here. Moro might be the only thing that still happens, as he'd likely still break out of the galactic prison. Without Goku having Ultra Instinct, he wouldn't be strong enough to take Moro on. I think this saga would just happen behind the scenes, with Whis informing Beerus about Moro destroying planets recklessly. Beerus will eventually go and erase Moro, so his saga ends early. I know that Beerus normally doesn't intervene, as he only intervened once in the actual series to destroy Zamasu. I'm going to say that since he didn't have to intervene yet in this timeline, he's willing to here, so he does so. As for the Granola Saga, without Frieza being there, this saga can never start since it started with the Heaters using Granola's desire for revenge against Frieza. One last thing I want to talk about is Gohan and Sarai, since they would have had a child around the same time Gohan and Videl normally had Pan. As usual, I flipped the coin to decide the gender, and it ended up with their child being a female. Since their daughter is obviously related to Krillin and Bulma as well, I tried thinking of a name pun that could fit with Krillin's name pun of chestnuts and Bulma's name pun of undergarments. I didn't have to think of a special side to represent Gohan, as his name is related to food, and the chestnut part covers that. I came up with Kari Pan, as it fits with the chestnut pun, since it is based on Kari Mushi Pan, which is a chestnut steamed cake. Then I also was able to tie it into an undergarment name pun, since the pan part could also relate to the undergarment called pannier. Personality-wise, I imagine Kari Pan being quick-witted, inquisitive, empathetic, nurturing, playfully brave, creative, and expressive. Anyway, with all of that covered, I'm going to get onto the main topic of this video. Long after the defeat of the Red Ribbon Army, Commander Red's son, Magenta, made Red Pharmaceuticals as a front company, and his goal was to bring back the Red Ribbon Army. He and his second-in-command, Carmine, soon learned about Dr. Hedo, who is Dr. Jiro's grandson. One day, when Carmine was going to their hideout, he was followed by Hachimaru, which is Dr. Hedo's spy robot. After arriving, Carmine gave Magenta a presentation on Dr. Hedo. Regardless, after he's eventually released from prison, Magenta and Carmine pull up in their car. Magenta invites him to work for them, but Dr. Hedo was reluctant to do so since he already knows that Red Pharmaceuticals is actually the Red Ribbon Army. He is also a fan of superheroes, so he takes issue with their plans for world domination. Carmine tried to threaten him, but he reveals he strengthened himself to the point that bullets don't work on him, so Magenta tries appealing to his heroism instead. Magenta tries telling him that they believe Capsule Corporation is the headquarters for aliens who want to take over the world, and that the androids in Cell were created to stop them. Dr. Hedo agrees to assist them and to allow them access to his research so that they can create the ultimate android superheroes. 6 months then pass, but Kari Pan's upbringing would be different than Pan's. Without Piccolo being around in this timeline, and since Gohan still trains, he and Sarai would have been the ones to train their daughter, though she also would likely train with Goku and Chi-Chi at times. There are also times that she trains with her other grandparents, Krillin and Bulma. Pan normally learned how to fly at the end of this movie, but Pan already knows how to since she was trained by all of them. Regardless, Gohan's house is eventually attacked by Gamma 2, so both Gohan and Sarai set out to take him on. Gohan was able to gain the advantage in the actual movie by just using the ultimate form, so with he and Sarai both having the ultimate form, they would easily be able to defeat him. Though they would also recognize the Red Ribbon Army logo on his outfit, so they don't kill him right away. Instead, after defeating him, they would likely force Gamma 2 into answering their questions. However, I could also see them trying to convince him that they aren't there to destroy the world, but it's hard to say if Gamma 2 would believe it or not. After all, they didn't normally realize it until Carmine tried to attack Pan. Regardless, they force Gamma 2 to take them to their base, and once they are there, they likely knock out Gamma 2. As both Gohan and Sarai are strong enough to take out the Gammas, only one of them might focus on fighting Gamma 1 while the other works on taking out the other members of the Red Ribbon Army. To decide who gets to fight Gamma 1, they briefly play rock, paper, scissors with each other, and Gohan ends up winning. So, while he gets into a fight with Gamma 1, Sarai works on taking out the other soldiers, though I could also see her going after Magenta, Carmine, and Dr. Hedo first, since I think she'd have a plan by going after them first. By the time Gohan's fight with Gamma 1 ends, which wouldn't take long with the use of his ultimate form, Sarai already put her plan into play. She likely would have picked up on the Gammas being manipulated after their earlier interrogation of Gamma 2. So, she basically decided to force Magenta and Carmine to tell the truth, with the threat of killing them if they didn't. Gamma 1 would be reluctant to believe this, but he would come around after Dr. Hedo corroborates their story. As usual, he reveals that he knew he was being used and chose not to care. When Gamma 2 eventually regains consciousness, they'd fill him in as well. Dr. Hedo would resign to be arrested, but Sarai had a different idea for them. So, they briefly split up, with Gohan taking Magenta and Carmine to be arrested. Before Sarai leaves with Dr. Hedo and the Gammas, Dr. Hedo likely goes to stop the production of Cell Max, and also has him destroyed so he can never be finished. Afterwards, instead of having Dr. Hedo and the Gammas arrested, she had a different idea for them. She takes them to Castle Corporation, introducing them to Bulma. As usual, she'd likely hire the Gammas to be bodyguards and Dr. Hedo to do cosmetic research for her. With that thread over with, Gohan and Sarai would both head back to Pan's school to pick her up. After picking her up, they all then fly home together. Normally I would go into the end of Z, but there are two things to briefly talk about. The first thing is that while we haven't seen the saga about Black Frieza yet, that would never happen in this timeline anyway, since Frieza was erased. As for the second thing I want to talk about, is that without Buu having been released, Oob also didn't exist. So, Goku never would have had a desire to go to the World Martial Arts Tournament to meet Oob. This means none of the heroes ever go to the tournament, minus Chi-Chi, of course, which that works out anyway, since with the tournaments happening every 3 years in this timeline, there wouldn't be one in age 784, which is when the end of Z took place. Instead of talking about the end of Z, I'm going to move on to talking about the epilogue of this series. I'm going to go character by character with this epilogue, starting with Master Roshi, since he is the oldest of the heroes that is still alive. While he is immortal in the sense that he can't die of old age, the source varies on what grants him that immortality, though with the world being very peaceful in this timeline, and not needing him to fight since the days of King Piccolo, he might have eventually came to the realization that the world would be just fine without him guiding the future generations. Especially after Krillin ends up opening the new Turtle School, he could rest assured that his teachings would be passed on far after his life ends. So, eventually, he stops taking what allows him to stay immortal, though he still does visit everyone before he passes, such as Grandpa Gohan and the Ox King. He would visit the other heroes as well, but he spent most of his remaining time at Kame House. One day, his body would finally succumb to old age, as he then passed away. The next person I want to talk about is Grandpa Gohan, since he is the oldest living member of Goku's family. Even in his advanced age, he still trained, but he would also visit his family pretty often. He even managed to make trips to visit Master Roshi every now and again before he passed away, though just like his old master, he spent the rest of his days at his home until he passed away as well. After he passed away, he was buried at Mount Paozu beneath a tree outside of his old house. Before moving on to the next generation, I want to talk about the Ox King as well. He'd have visited Master Roshi and Grandpa Gohan many times as well before they passed away, though he would also go and visit his family a lot too, and likely spoil his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. As for Pleasant Mountain, he'd have continued to help rebuild and maintain his kingdom there until the end of his days. He wanted to make sure it could be seen as a home for future generations far after he's gone. He might even invite his family over there pretty often for large celebrations. Regardless, he would eventually succumb to old age as well, and likely be buried on the lands of his kingdom. Now for the next generation, starting with Goku. He would remain the Guardian, of course, continuing to watch over the Earth for his entire life. If it ever required him to, he would fight to protect the Earth. Mainly, though, he would leave fighting to his sons, especially Gohan, since he has kept training. When he eventually gets older, he would start training someone to become the Guardian after he passes away. It could be a random Earthling he starts training, but I think he'd start training one of his family members. In the end, I think he'd train his granddaughter Kuripan to do so, as I don't think that Gohan or Goten would be too interested in it. Obviously, she wouldn't become the Guardian until she was old enough to do so and until after Goku passed away. He likely wouldn't pass away until after she was old enough to take over as the Guardian. Anyway, after he does eventually pass away, his legacy and training of a successor would have assured that the planet will be safe for after his death. Then as for Chi-Chi, she would have continued competing in tournaments for many years. Her popularity would only continue to grow because of this, especially with the help of Bulma being her manager. Though as she gets older, she would eventually retire from participating in these tournaments. However, she would also start her own martial arts school, so that she could somewhat stay involved in martial arts up until her death. As an homage to her father, she decides to call her school the Ox School. Since I briefly mentioned Bulma when talking about Chi-Chi, I'm going to talk about her next. She would remain the head of Capsule Corporation and continue to expand the company. After all, she would always be searching for ways to expand her business, like she did with introducing cosmetics by hiring Dr. Hedo. But since she also trained in this timeline, and since she was Chi-Chi's manager, part of the business is likely related to martial arts gear. Eventually, she would step down from leading Capsule Corporation, selecting both of her daughters to co-lead the company. As for Krillin, he would have continued training as well, as he would have trained their children alongside Bulma as they grew up. Eventually, he might even start a new school of his own and call it the New Turtle School. As he gets older, he might become a bit like Master Roshi, though I don't see him becoming a hermit like he was. The next major heroes I'd like to discuss are Tien and Shatsu, as they likely would have started their own martial arts school, too. They end up calling theirs the New Crane School, and a bit of a rivalry might form between their school, the New Turtle School, and the Ox School. Now I'm going to talk about the next generation, starting with Gohan. He would continue to balance his scholarly side with taking care of his family and training. Speaking of his family, it's possible that he and Sarai would have more children eventually. Anyway, I think he'd become a professor, teaching something like history, perhaps. Though I could also see him continuing to study Ki in his own time and teach people about it as well. Since he is the major defender of Earth, though, he would step in when he needs to. Through his continued training, it's likely he unlocked the beast form at some point as well. Then as for Goten, he would still be involved in martial arts as well, since both of his parents would have trained him in this timeline. Though he also grew up in a world where it was essentially peaceful most of the time, so he might be more relaxed when it comes to martial arts. So I don't see him chasing power obsessively, but becoming more of an adventurer to travel the world. He might enter tournaments for fun, but I don't think that would be his main focus. Also, without Trunks being there in this timeline, it might have been Goten who grew an interest in Mai. So, when he's older, it'd end up being her that he marries and settles down with. Eventually, he'd even have a family of his own with her. Next is Sarai, and before Bulma stepped down, she would have balanced her life between training, being with her family, and working closely with both her mother and sister at Capsule Corporation. She becomes well known in scientific circles for her designs, especially ones for safer and more energy-efficient technology. While she does help train her children, she'd mostly become a mentor figure in terms of inventing, so she'd pass her knowledge on to others. After Bulma does eventually step down, she leads Capsule Corporation alongside her sister, guiding it towards innovation and sustainability. She, too, retires eventually after she grows older, with Capsule Corporation being passed to her children. For Shamiz, she would become the chief of field development for Capsule Corporation, so she's constantly testing new tech to develop advancements or new products for them to sell. She isn't in the public eye as much as her sister or what her mother was, but she does grow to be well respected as an engineer. It's likely that she travels the world, and potentially even outer space, to find and develop new technologies. When she gets older and eventually tires of going on adventures herself, she returns home and becomes the head of Capsule Corp's Exploration Division. She'd begin to mentor young inventors and explorers, as I don't see her having children of her own. I think she'd become more like a cool aunt to Sarai's children. Lastly, for the next generation, Kuripan would have been training with her parents and grandparents from a young age. though she also would have inherited a love for building and problem solving from her mother, aunt, and grandmother. She'd tinker in the workshops and help Castle Corp develop tools to improve the lives of ordinary people. Even when she was young, she felt a deep responsibility to protect others. Eventually, she becomes a talented inventor and a calm, capable fighter. In her early adulthood, I could see her starting out as a hero, with her being this generation's version of the Great Saiyaman. She would have started to help solve crises and mediate conflicts across the Earth. These qualities would have been inspired by being partially trained by her grandfather Goku when she was a child. When Goku eventually noticed this, and as he was getting older, he began to prepare her to become the next Guardian. After he steps down, she'd take the role of Guardian, but she might be more hands-on than Goku was. I could see her coming down to the Earth more often to help directly, but also to visit her family. Under her guardianship of the Earth, she ushers in a long period of both progress and peace, continuing her grandfather's legacy for years to come.